Imagine this. You are the strongest swordsman in the unorthodox Murim, when suddenly bastards calling themselves the Black Knight Palace emerge and wipe out dozens of smaller sects and clans. To stop them, you and your closest friend from the orthodox faction are forced to unite the various clans into an alliance. Just when you think the nightmare is finally over, a mysterious warrior appears out of nowhere and kills your best friend. With his final breath, your friend entrusts you with a sacred relic and begs you to protect the Mount Hua Sect. Realizing you are completely outmatched, you attempt to escape, but the enemy quickly cuts you down. As life fades from your body, you apologize to your fallen friend, knowing you will be unable to fulfill your dying promise. Suddenly, the sacred relic begins to glow, reawakening your soul inside the body of your friend's young disciple, armed with all the master swordsmanship of your past life. Now you will restore the Mount Hua Sect to its former glory and exact bloody vengeance on that mysterious killer. The assassin looks down at our protagonist in disbelief, amazed that he can still stand despite such a fatal wound. He admits that Dogoeon truly deserves his title as the Ghost Swordsman, praising the sheer brilliance of his self-created sword style. However, he notes that using internal energy in such a shattered state is impossible, calling it a miracle Dogoeon can even draw breath. He tells Dogoeon there is no need to keep fighting and offers to grant him a swift death. The assassin then asks if the Ghost Swordsman managed to kill the old demon lord. Dogoeon confirms it, stating that with the monster dead, this brutal conflict will finally end. Cursing the Black Knight Palace, he recalls how those monsters appeared out of nowhere to ignite the bloodbath of Shanxi. Within just 3 days, they slaughtered over a dozen clans and sects without mercy. Their ruthless rampage forced the orthodox and unorthodox factions into an unprecedented alliance. Dogoeon thinks back to the pact he made with his friend Yunho to duel once both had perfected their personal sword styles. Recalling Yunho's dying words apologizing for breaking their vow, Dogoeon grimly smiles at the memory. Yunho had laughed weakly, pointing out that both of them had devoted their entire lives solely to mastering the blade. Having fought countless warriors across the Murim, Yunho had seen endless styles. Yet he admitted he had never seen a technique as sharp and unyielding as Dogoeon's ghost sword. Trusting Dogoeon's unmatched devotion, Yunho begged his friend to protect his disciple Mugwi and safeguard the Mount Hua Sect. At the time, Dogoeon asked if he was crazy, reminding him of who he was talking to. He questioned why the leader of Mount Hua would entrust his legacy to the top swordsman of the unorthodox faction. Handing over a sacred beaded bracelet, Yunho revealed it to be the Plum Blossom Spirit Beads, the supreme treasure of Mount Hua. He pleaded with Dogoeon to deliver the artifact safely to the sect leader. Dogoeon felt annoyed, yet looking at his friend's dying breath, his heart softened. He grumbled that he was fatally wounded himself, accusing Yunho of placing a massive burden on him. Yunho confessed that Dogoeon was his only true companion of the blade and expressed his eternal gratitude. Dogoeon snorted, replying that he better be grateful, since he was now bound to spend his remaining days caring for Mount Hua. The wounded Dogoeon reels from the assassin's overwhelming power. He wonders if this man is the true master of the Black Knight Palace, having personally slain the former leader. The corpse of the old demon was left behind, leaving Dogoeon to ponder if this killer is a hidden disciple or the secret puppet master. One thing is undeniable, this warrior's prowess completely eclipses the previous palace master. Even taking Dogoeon's exhaustion into account, the enemy severed his arm using raw demonic energy alone. Looking back toward the battlefield, Dogoeon mentally apologizes to Yunho for failing to recover his body. Yet he vows to fulfill the final promise no matter the cost. Sprinting toward the edge, Dogoeon leaps off the cliff, unsure if his broken body will survive the plummet. He clings to a slim hope, promising that while he flees today, he will never forget this humiliation. The next time their paths cross, only one of them will walk away alive. The masked killer smirks from the cliff edge, prompting Dogoeon to curse him furiously as he plummets. As darkness takes over, Dogoeon whispers a final apology to Yunho for failing his mission. Faint voices echo in his head, urging him to wake up as he wonders if he somehow survived. A voice shouts to Elder Bakjin that senior brother has finally opened his eyes. Bakjin cradles him gently, calling him Mugwi and admitting he feared acupuncture wouldn't save him. Opening his eyes, Dogoeon recognizes the speaker as Bakjin, the medical elder of the Mount Hua Sect. Confused, he wonders why Bakjin addresses him as Mugwi, the senior second-generation disciple. Mugwi was Yunho's top disciple, leading Dogoeon to question if the medical elder has lost his mind. Realization strikes as he remembers the mysterious glow of the relic before cursing under his breath. When Bakjin asks if he plans to walk outside, Dogoeon catches himself before uttering an blunt response. Bakjin approves of light movement, warning him that his body remains severely malnourished after a week in bed. He cautions the young man not to overexert himself. Washing his face, Dogoeon reflects on how 7 days felt like a century, absorbing 2 decades of Mugwi's memories while unconscious. He considers the original Mugwi a fool, someone who pushed his weak body past its limits until his wounds killed him. He realizes the plum blossom spirit beads bound his soul to Yunho's disciple upon death. Sighing at this strange twist of fate, he accepts his second chance at life and vows not to waste it. Rage burns within him as he vows to track down the masked killer and tear him to pieces. He knows that assassins superior to the palace master could have killed him even at peak health. To stand any chance of victory, he must grow vastly stronger than he ever was as the Ghost Swordsman. Recalling Yunho's final request to guide Mount Hua, he silently assures his late friend not to worry. He will fulfill his oath and avenge Yunho, regardless of the cost. Inside the main hall, Senior Martial Elder Bakjin asks if 8 pavilions must be completely rebuilt. Bakjin confirms the destruction, explaining that fires from the recent raid spread before they could contain them. Sect leader Bakyo sighs heavily, noting that past losses have left their treasury dry. Bakjin warns him that visitor donations and commercial revenues will plummet in the coming months. Bakyo decides to conserve funds, ordering repairs to prioritize only essential structures. Turning to Bakjin, Bakyo inquires about the wounded disciples, and the doctor assures him they are mending well. Bakjin adds that even the critically injured have stabilized, bringing relief to the sect leader. Bakyo then asks about Mugwi, knowing the loss of his master Yunho must have shattered the young man. Bakjin replies that Mugwi handled the grief surprisingly well and was already walking around yesterday. Bakyo chuckles with relief, instructing Bakjin to monitor Mugwi closely to ensure it is not a facade. Knowing Mugwi's gentle nature, Bakyo worries he is bottling up his pain and hopes he overcomes the trauma. Meanwhile, Dogoeon recalls a past conversation where Yunho asked his opinion on Mount Hua's disciples. Dogoeon had bluntly called them useless, and Yunho sadly agreed, admitting Mount Hua was in decline. Yunho explained that disciples blindly praised the plum blossom sword technique as the peak of illusion and variance. They deluded themselves into believing their inherited martial art was flawless. Yunho knew a sect that stopped innovating and reflecting was doomed to ruin. He acknowledged that forcing change onto stubborn elders would yield no results. Dogoeon had advised him to force reforms anyway if no other path existed. He asked if Yunho possessed a better alternative. Yunho revealed his plan, to prove that the standard plum blossom sword technique was not the absolute ceiling. He wanted to guide them toward a far higher realm of mastery. Dogoeon realized that was why Yunho proposed creating their own original techniques for a future showdown. Yunho believed Dogoeon could help shatter Mount Hua's stagnation by showcasing martial arts forged through real battle. After all, Dogoeon was the Ghost Swordsman, the absolute apex of the unorthodox path. Reflecting on this, Dogoeon recalls initially believing Mount Hua's core doctrine was flawed. They were revered as a great sect across the realm. Yet they failed to produce a single genius besides Yunho in an entire century. Dogoeon admits he was wrong. He had judged them solely by entry-level techniques like the 6-movement circulation and 6-movement sword. Upon closer inspection, those fundamental forms were completely refined and flawless, perfected over centuries. That was the true strength of an ancient sect. Mount Hua hit a wall precisely because its foundation was too perfect. Yunho aimed to break through that barrier by demonstrating a whole new horizon to his junior disciples. Now Dogoeon decides to complete the unfinished sword style Yunho left behind, fulfilling their eternal pact. He understands this new art must originate strictly from Mount Hua, incorporating far more than superficial stances. Its essence must embody Mount Hua's core spirit, requiring him to rebuild his understanding from the ground up. Meditating deeply, he resolves to strip away all sloppy habits and relearn Mount Hua's fundamentals from scratch. He knows 2 warriors learning the exact same form can arrive at vastly different realizations. He cannot simply rely on his old unorthodox instincts if he wishes to master Mount Hua's way. Underestimating basic drills would be a fatal error. He notes that the autumn flower circulation technique rivals ghost arts in speed while remaining exceptionally stable, unlike his past unorthodox skills. Mount Hua's swordsmanship operates on a fundamentally different, purer principle. In his past life, Dogoeon cared only for lethality, but this disciplined path opens entirely new vistas. From this day forward, he will live and fight as Mugwi. A voice calls out from outside his quarters, repeatedly asking if the senior disciple is awake. Opening the door, Mugwi identifies the visitor as Mukiol and asks what brings him by. Mukiol explains he came to check on him, noting it has been 3 days since Mugwi left the medical hall. He mentions that Mugwi has missed every morning training session since. Mugwi pauses in surprise, asking if 3 full days have already slipped by. He realizes his deep meditation swallowed his perception of time completely. It reminds him of being trapped in the inescapable formation of the Bloodstorm sect in his past life. He admits to Mukiol that he lost track of the days. He then instructs Mukiol to lead him directly to the training grounds. Turning around, Mukiol silently notes that something about Mugwi feels fundamentally different. Walking alongside him, Mugwi inwardly wishes he had a strong drink right about now. He sighs, knowing alcohol is forbidden during training. At the training yard, the instructor barks orders at the disciples, telling Murim to raise his arm higher. Watching from the side, Mugwi shakes his head, finding their technique utterly abysmal. Their footwork is completely unstable, shifting at the wrong moments and ruining their center of gravity. Without proper stance, their strikes lack all power and precision, revealing a total absence of fundamentals. It is a complete mess, though Mugwi notes the lead disciple Mujin at least possesses decent form. Mujin corrects the others well and acts far more like a senior disciple than the original Mugwi ever did. Mugwi wonders why Mujin was forced to handle duties that belonged strictly to the head disciple. Recalling Mugwi's memories, he sees the original youth was timid, lacking both skill and leadership. Mujin, in contrast, is calm, charismatic, and has shown exceptional talent from an early age. It made perfect sense that the disciples gravitated toward Mujin, as martial sects naturally respect strength. Mugwi has no personal grudge against Mujin taking charge based on merit. However, that dynamic ends today. Mujin wraps up the session, dismissing the disciples. A tired disciple collapses, complaining about the sheer exhaustion. Another mentions how much stricter Mujin has become in recent weeks. Noticing Mugwi approaching, they politely ask how he is recovering, and Mugwi nods calmly. The female disciple Manhwa glances at Mugwi, sensing a subtle shift in his aura. Mujin greets Mugwi, apologizing for not welcoming him earlier due to leading the drill. Mugwi replies smoothly, thanking Mujin for carrying duties that should have been his own. Internally, Mugwi finds it disrespectful that Mujin remains standing atop the pavilion stairs looking down on him. Mujin smiles politely, saying he was happy to step up for the sake of the sect. Mugwi responds firmly, declaring that he will lead all training sessions from now on. The surrounding disciples gasp, wondering if they heard correctly. Mukiol watches in shock, realizing his intuition about Mugwi changing was spot on. Mujin frowns, reminding Mugwi that he previously handed over leadership willingly. Mugwi asks what could possibly be wrong with a senior disciple reclaiming his rightful duties. Mujin retorts that Mugwi gave up control back then simply because he lacked the confidence to lead. Mugwi smirks internally, seeing right through Mujin's hidden ambition. He realizes Mujin desperately desires to secure the position of chief disciple. The chief disciple is the sole recognized successor to the sect leader. With the first generation ranks decimated by the Shanxi massacre, the second generation holds Mount Hua's future. The surviving senior disciples and elders are entirely consumed with rebuilding the physical sect. To truly reform Mount Hua, Mugwi must shape the second generation disciples from the ground up. Reforming Seden Thirway's elders is useless. Moreover, he needs access to the purple aura circulation technique. That supreme art is strictly reserved for the sect leader and the chief disciple. It ranks among the top 10 cultivation methods in the world, essential for Mugwi to surpass his past strength. Therefore, claiming the title of chief disciple is mandatory. However, hearing Mugwi's sudden assertion irritates Mujin deeply. Mujin asks directly if Mugwi truly believes he has earned the right to lead. He challenges him, asking what Mugwi actually accomplished when the Black Knight Palace attacked. He reminds him that Mugwi ignored explicit orders from the elders to remain hidden. Mujin presses on, asking if Mugwi saved anyone or slew a single enemy during the chaos. Instead, his reckless actions forced elders into danger, inspiring other inexperienced disciples to rush into battle. If first-generation disciples hadn't shielded them with their lives, many present would be dead. Mujin insists that due to those past failures, he remains the only one qualified to lead. He asks how the disciples could ever trust Mugwi again. Mugwi steps closer, telling Mujin he has misunderstood the situation. He asks Mujin why he thinks he needs anyone's admiration or approval. He makes it clear he is not asking for permission, but simply issuing an order as senior disciple. Shocked by the imposing aura, Mujin wonders if this is truly the weak Mugwi he once knew. Mugwi commands that morning drills resume under his control tomorrow, inviting anyone with complaints to challenge him afterward. As Mugwi walks away, Mujin stares in disbelief at his completely transformed presence. Mugwi simply replies over his shoulder that surviving brush with death changes a man. The watching disciples mutter in confusion over the tense confrontation. They cannot process Mugwi's sudden display of dominance. One notes Mujin's visible anger, questioning if Mugwi will truly take over training. Another confirms it certainly looked that way. Murim speculates that Mujin chose to step down gracefully out of respect. A companion agrees, noting Mujin contained his anger before yielding. Murim assumes Mujin yielded solely to spare Mugwi's feelings. Knowing Mugwi's weak track record, Murim worries training quality will collapse and suggests confronting him. His friend agrees they must demand Mugwi relinquish command. Hours later, Musan and Mujo approach Mugwi in private to air their grievances. Mugwi asks with mild amusement why they insisted on meeting away from the crowd. Noticing Mugwi carrying a wooden sword, Musan gets straight to the point. He demands Mugwi retract his announcement, claiming Mujin backed down only out of pity. Mugwi finds it funny, asking if Mujin sent them, but Musan insists they came on their own. Mugwi dismisses their demands, stating junior disciples have no right to question senior leadership. He tells them to leave before he loses patience, but Musan grows confrontational. Musan claims they do not hate him, but simply want instruction from a capable warrior. He accuses Mugwi of being greedy for power despite possessing inferior skill. Musan flatly refuses to take orders from someone weaker than himself. Mugwi sighs, lamenting how low discipline in Mount Hua has fallen. Since they harp on martial ability, Mugwi offers to let them test his skills firsthand. He commands them to draw their wooden swords, confirming he is completely serious. Drawing his weapon, Musan warns Mugwi that he brought this thrashing upon himself. Moments later, a battered Musan trembles on the ground, acknowledging their total defeat. Standing over them, Mugwi declares it is time to beat away their disrespectful habits. After a thorough beating, Mugwi asks if their attitude has been adjusted, and they hastily agree. He asks what they will do if another disciple attempts to challenge his authority. They yell in unison that they will beat the challenger alongside him. Mugwi then asks if they still think he is weaker than Mujin. They vigorously shake their heads, swearing Mugwi is infinitely superior. He presses further, asking if they still view his martial arts as inferior. Satisfied with their terrified denial, Mugwi forgives their insolence and agrees to forget the incident. He dismisses them to rest, and they bow repeatedly in gratitude for his mercy. As they flee, Mugwi calls out to the nearby bushes, asking Mukiel how long he intends to hide. Mugwi chuckles, pointing out that Mukiel's massive frame makes stealth impossible. Mukiel steps out, confessing he followed Musan and Mujo expecting trouble, never imagining Mugwi would overpower them so effortlessly. He asks in shock if Mugwi had been hiding his true power all along. Looking at Mukiel, Mugwi notes that Mount Hua disciples fell into two categories, those who kept a respectful distance and those who secretly looked down on him. Mukiel fit neither group, always remaining near Mugwi to offer quiet assistance. Despite his blunt nature, Mukiel constantly watched out for the weak senior disciple. The old Mugwi was too dense to realize Mukiel was protecting him. Dogoeon understands immediately. Mukiel helped simply because Mugwi was frail. He had trailed them today, worried Mugwi would get beaten by Musan and Mujo. Appreciating Mukiel's loyal heart, Mugwi decides to give him a plausible explanation. He explains he wasn't hiding power, but experienced a martial epiphany during his coma. Mukiel marvels at this, and Mugwi promises to share his insights during morning practice. He advises Mukiel to get some sleep for the next day. As Mugwi leaves, Mukiel recalls the duel, realizing Mugwi executed basic entry-level strikes. It was nothing more than the basic combo sword technique. Yet in Mugwi's hands, that elementary stance appeared utterly breathtaking. Mukiel walks away filled with awe, amazed by how drastically the fragile senior disciple has transformed. For the first time in his life, he genuinely looks forward to morning training. Alone in his room, Mugwi curses quietly, knowing his epiphany excuse was paper-thin. He wonders how he will explain his terrifying prowess to the rest of the sect. The next morning, Murim stares in disbelief at Musan and Mujo's bruised faces. They warn him that Mugwi is no longer the weakling they used to pick on. They urge everyone not to provoke him, testifying how close they came to severe injury. Murim stands up angrily, telling them to stop spout nonsense. He tells them to get ready for drills while ignoring their fearful warnings. Murim refuses to believe Mugwi possessed hidden high-level strength. Mujo mutters quietly that he secretly hopes Murim gets pummeled too. Mujin notices the bruised duo and asks what happened to them. Murim dismisses Mujin's concern, claiming it was just minor sparring. He adds that the duo was upset over Mugwi reclaiming leadership of morning drills. Murim fills Mujin in on the details of the previous evening's conflict. Mujin frowns, intending to discipline Musan and Mujo for acting recklessly. Murim insists Mugwi lacks skill to lead, accusing him of acting selfishly behind Mujin's back. Murim voices fear that Mugwi will ruin the entire group's progress. Mujin cuts him off, assuring Murim that he will handle the senior disciple personally. Mugwi steps before the gathered disciples, commending their complete attendance before starting. Mujin observes Mugwi's confident posture, baffled by his overnight transformation. He wonders if Mugwi truly hid his skill or if Mushiel aided in beating Musan and Mujo. Either way, Mujin knows the truth of Mugwi's ability will be revealed shortly. He believes watching Mugwi direct the drills will expose any bluff. Mugwi addresses the crowd, asserting that while strength has many paths, weakness stems from one flaw. That flaw is neglect of fundamentals. Thus, today's practice will focus exclusively on the basic combo sword technique. He acknowledges their desire to rush ahead toward flashy moves like the Plum Blossom sword technique. Murim interrupts loudly, demanding why basic drills take priority over advanced sword forms. He challenges Mugwi's authority, questioning his ability to teach advanced techniques. Mugwi glances down at him coolly, inviting anyone with objections onto the platform. Mujin watches closely, wondering what Mugwi is plotting. Murim steps up, asserting that disciples cannot trust leadership from someone with terrible skills. He mockingly questions if mastering basic combos is as revolutionary as Mugwi claims. Murim hesitates, but Mugwi finishes his sentence, plainly admitting his past skills were terrible. He acknowledges everyone in the sect held the same low opinion of him. Yet, since no one else understands true fundamentals, he will personally prove their worth. He asks Murim if he is willing to test that claim. Mugwi offers a handicap, knowing skepticism was inevitable. He promises he will not shift his feet a single inch during their duel. Using strictly the basic combo sword technique, he will block all of Murim's attacks. If Murim's blade touches him or forces him to step back, Murim wins. Should Murim win, Mugwi will immediately resign from leading the training drills. He will also surrender all authority over morning practices. Murim smirks, warning Mugwi not to get arrogant over defeating Musan. Mugwi feigns ignorance about Musan's injuries, urging Murim to strike. Murim draws his sword, telling Mugwi not to resent him when he loses publicly. Mugwi draws a line in the dirt, telling Murim to begin. Manhwa recognizes Murim's opening move as the concentrated wind sword, famous for rapid strikes. Murim is the undisputed master of this swift style among all second-generation peers. Yet Mugwi deflects every flurry effortlessly without moving his feet. Mugwi critique his form mid-fight, telling Murim his shoulder tension ruins his speed. He dryly adds that Murim is merely slightly less terrible than his peers. Enraged by the taunt, Murim pushes his speed to the absolute limit. Yet he cannot break past Mugwi's impenetrable wooden blade. Watching disciples whisper in shock, admitting Murim's attacks are brilliant. Yet Mugwi's defense remains entirely flawless. They marvel that Mugwi's feet have not shifted a single millimeter despite the assault. Mujin stares in absolute astonishment, wondering how such mastery is possible. Exhausted and gasping for air, Murim lowers his sword, admitting defeat. He acknowledges Mugwi's superior technique, deeply humbled by the skill gap. Mugwi explains that a sword is not swung with arms alone, but driven by the entire body. Footwork anchors every thrust. Fixating solely on swinging makes strikes light and useless. Mugwi points out his own body remains unhealed, yet proper principles neutralize Murim easily. He tells Murim this flaw plagues every disciple present, not just him. Raising his wooden sword slowly, Mugwi decides to demonstrate true full-body execution. With a sudden shift in weight, Mugwi delivers a basic strike that radiates overwhelming pressure. Murim freezes in terror, unable to utter a single word. Mugwi orders Musan and Mujo to carry the collapsed Murim to the medical hall. Turning to the remaining disciples, he orders them to raise their wooden swords and begin basic drills immediately. Seeing no further objections, Mugwi officially initiates morning training. Dogoeon recalls past memories of Yunho talking about Mugwi's stubbornness. Dogoeon had once asked Yunho why he took in a boy with so little natural martial talent. Yunho had smiled, agreeing Mugwi was average but noting the boy never gave up. Dogoeon questioned if sheer determination was enough to make a master. Yunho explained that prodigies find enlightenment on their own. Forging an ordinary youth into a grandmaster was the true duty of a mentor and the spirit of martial arts. Mugwi reflects that while he preferred training prodigies in his past life, he must now raise all of Mount Hua's disciples together. Leaving no one behind embodies the true ethos of Mount Hua. Guiding a crowd of beginners from scratch proves far more troublesome than he anticipated. He vows to demand a fine bottle of liquor from Yunho in the afterlife for this trouble. Yet as he watches them practice, the former solo master finds a strange satisfaction in teaching. He wonders if the man is even eating, but at least he knows he will not lose any fights. He feels certain that he is doing fine, and it would be great to meet him again someday. Mugwi mentions that the proper training for the second-generation disciples has finally begun. Though it will be a brutal road starting from scratch, he is convinced that the plum blossoms blooming through these trials will carry a fragrance so deep and powerful that no one can ever imitate it. He also has a long way to go, knowing his first steps toward changing the Mount Hua Sect involve elevating his own martial realm. One of the most crucial factors in raising one realm is sensory awareness, as sharper senses make it Much easier to spot subtle shifts, naturally accelerating one martial training. Even though he felt nothing when he first woke up in this body, he can now sense that someone is watching him. It carries no malice, feeling more like a curious observer keeping tabs on him. His senses are not yet sharp enough to pinpoint the observer identity, but that is only temporary. Soon enough, he will discern who it is and where they are hiding. Greeting the elder, Mugwi mentions that he intends to study the secret techniques. Youngak wonders why Mugwi wants to review the secret manuals, but tells him it is fine. He reminds Mugwi that his injuries are not fully healed, so he must take care not to overexert himself. Youngak adds that he heard his own disciple was quite rude to him. Mugwi wonders which one he means, since he beat up 3 different disciples. Either way, Youngak must be furious that his disciple came back battered black and blue. Unexpectedly, Youngak apologizes, stating that Musan must have deserved the beating. In his own youth, Musan would have faced far worse consequences, so Youngak regrets failing to discipline him properly. Mugwi realizes the disciple in question was indeed Musan. Mugwi expected trouble, but seeing Youngak's reasonable response, he states that he only fulfilled his duty as a senior disciple. He assures the elder there is no need to dwell on it. Youngak pauses, wondering if he heard correctly. Mugwi just spoke with the calm authority of a true senior disciple, catching Youngak off guard. Youngak wonders if Mugwi's eyes were always this sharp, while Mugwi internally questions why the elder is staring at him so intensely. Mugwi wonders if the elder is getting angry over his disciple beating, but Youngak sees only fierce determination in Mugwi's gaze. Youngak smiles and tells him it is admirable to discipline his martial brothers for their own good, assuring Mugwi he will not hold him up. He tells Mugwi to proceed with his studies, thinking about how the young man lost his master and was left entirely alone. Seeing Mugwi stand tall with such renewed purpose makes Youngak feel deeply proud of his recovery. Mugwi reiterates that changing the Mount Hua Sect begins with raising his own martial realm. He asks himself what steps are required to achieve that, stepping back to define what a martial realm truly is. Some might define it purely as the raw power of one techniques, but that is a foolish misconception. Life and death in the Jianghu are never decided by technique alone. No survivor in the Jianghu relies solely on textbook martial arts when fighting for their life. Survival in the Jianghu depends on how effectively one applies their martial arts under extreme pressure. It requires split-second tactical judgment, sharp instincts, and the physical conditioning to execute them. Thus, a martial realm encompasses mastery, experience, and combat wisdom rather than just raw moves. True enlightenment comes only through relentless contemplation and battlefield reflection. That is the absolute definition of a martial realm, one forged by Dogoeon, the Ghost Swordsman, and supreme blade of the unorthodox faction. This was the ultimate truth Dogoeon reached after surviving countless deadly battles and mastering secret arts across the land. Therefore, the first step to elevating one martial realm is developing a profound understanding of fundamental martial arts. So what exactly defines the martial arts of the Mount Hua Sect? Mugwi admits to himself that he does not fully know yet. As a second-generation disciple, there are higher-level manuals he is not yet permitted to read. Sects enforce this rule to prevent overly ambitious disciples from rushing into advanced arts and ruining their energy pathways. Every major sect restricts access to its high-tier manuals, and the Mount Hua Sect is no different. Yunho once mentioned that Mount Hua access policies were somewhat lenient, but a prestigious sect remains a prestigious sect. Their martial foundation is systematically structured, making it easy to analyze. Mugwi reviews what he has studied so far. At the base lies the six-fold combo sword technique. Above that are 3 core disciplines: the concentrated wind sword, the fallen plum blossom sword, and the thousand essences sword. Once a disciple masters the principles behind these 3, they gain access to the true secrets of the plum blossom sword technique. Mastering those secrets is necessary to unlock the absolute apex arts of the Mount Hua Sect. These supreme ultimate arts include the 7 deadly swords of the plum blossom, the 3-edged sword of the plum blossom, and the ludic sword of the plum blossom. These supreme techniques were the driving force that made Mount Hua one of the 3 grandest sword sects in the Murim. The greatest swordsmen in Mount Hua history had all mastered at least one of these 3 legendary plum blossom styles. The 6-fold combo sword technique serves as the roots, while the fallen plum blossom, concentrated wind, and thousand essences swords act as the trunk. The secrets of the plum blossom sword are the branches, and the 3 ultimate plum blossom arts are the fully bloomed flowers. A martial artist who fully immerses himself in Mount Hua sword style becomes part of this living plum blossom tree. That is how Mugwi understands the sect martial hierarchy so far. He is currently examined up to the trunk. He wants to study the branches, the secrets of the plum blossom sword, but he needs official authorization to access that manual. That sword manual is granted only to those who have proven exceptional martial mastery, standing as the symbol of Mount Hua. Mugwi resolves to secure that technique as soon as possible. Suddenly, a voice behind him asks if he is seeking the secrets of the plum blossom sword technique. Bakyo steps forward, explaining he came to check who was inside since it had been a long time since anyone stayed in the library so late. When Bakyo asks if he may sit down, Mugwi politely agrees. Mugwi realizes he lost track of time, assuming Youngak must have lit the candles earlier. Bakyo asks if he has read through all these manuals, and Mugwi confirms he has. Bakyo notes that he heard Mugwi started drilling the second-generation disciples in the six-fold combo sword technique again. Since Mugwi is not official training instructor, Bakyo asks why he chose to focus on the basics. Mugwi reflects on how the original Mugwi used to stutter and hesitate before Bakyo. Now that Mugwi is taking bold actions, the sect leader is trying to gauge his mental state. Bakyo wants to see if Mugwi is truly overcoming his master death or merely hiding his grief behind extreme overexertion. Understanding Bakyo's concern, Mugwi decides to give him a clear, reassuring answer. Mugwi explains that the six-fold combo sword technique is the foundational core of the Mount Hua Sect. He points out that the second-generation disciples got off on the wrong foot, or rather that phrasing is too polite. It is as if they never built a proper foundation at all. Mugwi knows Bakyo is well aware of their shortcomings, so speaking candidly will put the sect leader mind at ease. Aligning his perspective with Bakyo's own thoughts will reassure the elder of his stability. Bakyo is internally stunned, realizing Mugwi's state of mind is vastly different from what he feared. Bakyo wonders if this is truly the same timid Mugwi he knew, a gentle boy who could never speak harshly to anyone. He wonders if the traumatic attack on the sect left Mugwi burdened with survivor guilt. He worries Mugwi might be punishing himself to compensate for the deaths of his master, the elders, and the senior disciples. Bakyo feels compelled to remind him that none of those deaths were his fault. Mugwi continues, noting that while the disciples know the forms of the six-fold combo sword technique on paper, since it is the very first skill taught upon entering Mount Hua, their execution has degraded. Comparing their current forms to when they first learned it, their execution of the six-fold combo sword technique has actually gotten worse. Bakyo counters that they have been practicing it for years. He asks Mugwi why he thinks their mastery has regressed despite all that time. Mugwi explains that every sect and clan in the Jianghu holds distinct philosophies and worldviews. Naturally, those core beliefs are woven directly into their martial arts. A sect martial style is the physical expression of its underlying ideology. Examples include the Tai Chi Fist and Illuminated Sword of Wudong, or the Sun-Destroying Sword and Silver Moon Lightning Sword of Dayankan. The Crimson Dawn Cut and Four Sky Lightning Sword of Qinchen also embody this truth. All these techniques express the spirit of their respective sects. Therefore, training in a martial art is not merely physical exercise. It is an exploration and absorption of the sect core philosophy. Bakyo observes Mugwi in silence, impressed by his calm, precise explanation. For a moment, Mugwi reminds him of Yunho. Mugwi points out that the second-generation disciples only obsess over making plum blossoms bloom in visual displays. While that desire is not inherently wrong, focusing purely on the visual effect is foolish. He wants them to realize that merely copying a technique is not the true goal of martial arts. True mastery comes from understanding the underlying philosophy through constant discipline and applying it to daily life. That reflective process is the true essence of a martial discipline. Creating a flashy plum blossom image is not the end goal. Bakyo is deeply moved. Though Mugwi looks nothing like Yunho, the reason he senses Yunho's presence in Mugwi is because Mugwi now shines with the same brilliant resolve Yunho once had. Bakyo wonders if he is the only one who has realized the immense depth of Mugwi talent. Mugwi reiterates that one should never train solely to force a plum blossom to bloom. Instead, the blossom should open naturally as a byproduct of genuine comprehension. Bakyo marvels at such profound wisdom coming from a young disciple. He praises Mugwi for his sharp insight. He then asks Mugwi what he plans to do next. Mugwi states that he intends to keep guiding his peers through fundamental sword drills. Bakyo smiles and clarifies his question. He trusts Mugwi's ability to train the disciples, but he wants to know about Mugwi's personal path. He asks what direction Mugwi intends to take for his own growth. Mugwi reflects that while Mount Hua arts are magnificent, his pragmatic survival instinct left him dissatisfied with certain aspects. As someone who prioritized practical efficiency above all else, he spotted glaring inefficiencies. He wonders why no one thought to adapt these techniques for a heavier blade, or why they never practiced these sword principles empty-handed. These realizations sparked numerous ideas for martial innovation. He pondered whether modifying these forms broke sect traditions, and why Mount Hua lacked brutal direct combat tactics. He considered wielding a heavier weapon, perhaps even a greatsword. He wrestled with whether pursuing this pragmatic path would deviate from traditional Mount Hua teachings. He questioned if modifying the style was truly right. It was no small dilemma, and after thinking it over repeatedly, he chose his direction. He inwardly asks Yunho not to be angry if his new path strays from tradition, hoping his late friend will understand. Addressing Bakyo, Mugwi downplays his ambition modestly. Inwardly, he knows there is no other choice. He is living as Mugwi now, after all. He tells Bakyo that he intends to fulfill his late master's unfulfilled ambitions and fill the void left behind. He will carry on his master legacy and eventually surpass it. That is the solemn duty of a disciple. In truth, Mugwi has decided he will innovate and execute his own ideas freely within Mount Hua. Bakyo nods warmly, finally understanding why he keeps seeing Yunho's shadow in Mugwi. It is not just natural talent, but Mugwi's determination to carry forward Yunho's will, even though creating a new martial path is exceedingly difficult. Developing new martial techniques requires monumental effort. Chuckling softly, Bakyo tells Mugwi how proud he is of him, expressing certainty that Yunho would be overjoyed to hear his words. Bakyo feels a profound relief seeing the disciple he worried about most show such dependable maturity. His overwhelming anxiety for Mugwi transforms into genuine hope. He sees an unshakable resolve in the young man's eyes, reminiscent of plum blossoms piercing through the winter snow. Winter snow is bitter and harsh, but the fragrance of plum blossoms enduring that freezing cold is all the sweeter and more powerful. Bakyo laments that he failed to protect the senior disciples who fell during the tragedy. He feels he should have been the one to fall instead. Yet among those fallen blossoms, a promising young bud survived. His duty as sect leader is to nurture that bud into full bloom. He tells Mugwi that many flowers exist on Mount Hua besides the plum blossom, asking if he knows why the sect chose the plum blossom specifically. When Mugwi shakes his head, Bakyo encourages him to contemplate it deeply. Bakyo remarks that he would love to talk longer, but realizes he has taken up too much of Mugwi time. As Bakyo turns to leave, he mentions one last thought, acknowledging that Mugwi lost his master. He admits he cannot fully claim to fathom Mugwi grief, as everyone carries sorrow differently. Life and death are interconnected, making every end a new beginning. He urges Mugwi not to view Yunho's death as a total end, but as a fresh start, honoring his master memory through his growth. Finding peace in that mindset will aid his grieving process, something Yunho surely would have wanted. Mugwi finds wisdom in those words and sincerely thanks the sect leader. Flashback to Dogoeon's past life. Someone mocks him, noting that despite his reputation with a blade, he looks surprisingly frail. The Ghost Swordsman threatens the critic, who laughs off the threat. The critic notes that reckless arrogance is the ideal mindset for building physical strength. The man offers to share a brutal physical training method he recently invented. Dogoeon recalls that the unconditioned body gains maximum benefit from this conditioning method. He never expected his past acquaintance with Myono, the king of the Iron Mountain Fist, to prove so useful in his new life. It is a crude, brutal training regimen, but its physical results are undeniable if maintained consistently. Suddenly, someone interrupts Mugwi's thoughts, shouting that it is time to depart down the mountain as ordered by the sect leader. Earlier in the Elders' Council, an elder raises the matter of recruiting third-generation disciples, urging immediate action. Bakyo notes that recruitment was delayed due to the recent Shaanxi crisis. An elder suggests selecting promising prospects from their subsects to show that Mount Hua remains strong. Bakyo agrees, and the elder recommends dispatching disciples to inspect their subsects in Shaanxi. They fear the unorthodox alliance or rival factions might seize the power vacuum left in Shaanxi. They emphasize the need to protect their territory. Subsects are martial halls established outside Mount Hua to teach fundamental sect arts, relying directly on the main sect prestige and protection for their authority. Since Mount Hua core forces were weakened in the Shaanxi massacre, the subsects are growing anxious. The Shaanxi subsect took a massive blow, so sending disciples to inspect and support them will restore their confidence. An elder asks who should be sent. Bakyo acknowledges the elders are too busy with internal recovery, but this matter cannot be ignored. He proposes sending second-generation disciples, stating it is time they gained real-world experience in the Jianghu. An elder agrees it is time, but worries about the dangerous chaos outside. Bakyo suggests picking their most capable disciples for the task. The elder asks if he means the standout disciples, and Bakyo instructs them to send Mugwi along, confident in Mugwi's capability. An elder expresses slight hesitation about sending Mugwi into danger. Bakyo reassures him, noting how much Mugwi has matured over the past month. The scene shifts to Pochun Town. Mugwi notes that while it is an ordinary town, at least they can buy refreshments. Muhua excitedly points out roasted chicken, amazed by how appetizing it looks compared to mountain rations, while catching the scent of more food nearby. Mujin reminds her to act with dignity while wearing the Mount Hua uniform, but Mua defends her excitement over the delicious street food. Mujin bumps into a passerby and demands an apology, but Mugwi interrupts. Local thugs mock them upon recognizing their Mount Hua uniforms. Realizing it is their first Jianghu trip, the thug aggressively claims Muhua bumped into him and demands she apologize instead. The thug rudely refuses to apologize. Muhua firmly retorts that he was the one who walked into her. Mugwi observes their attire, recognizing them as low-level criminals who seized control after Mount Hua subsect collapsed. He wonders where they get the nerve to provoke Mount Hua disciples. Even though Mount Hua suffered losses in the massacre, simple street thugs would not dare act this bold unless backed by a powerful organization. Mugwi does not know who is backing them, nor does he particularly care. He figures dealing with scum like this will serve as good practice for his younger martial brothers. Mugwi steps in, asking the thug where he is looking. He explains he watched quietly to see how arrogant the thug would act toward green disciples, but the man crossed the line. Mugwi asks if the thug realizes he just picked a fight with Mount Hua, noting how low the criminal underworld ranks Mount Hua reputation. Shocked that Mugwi identified his criminal background, the thug curses. Realizing the disciple saw right through him, the thug tries to backtrack, offering a half-hearted apology. Mugwi cuts him off, stating he does not accept apologies from trash. He warns the thug to leave immediately before he loses an eye. Terrified by Mugwi's murderous glare, the thugs scatter and flee. Muhua apologizes to Mugwi, but Mugwi tells her she did nothing wrong and owes no apology. Mukyil remarks that underworld thugs are worse than expected. Mugwi suggests finding an inn to rest and eat. Meanwhile, Mujin reflects on his own reaction. Mujin realizes he rushed to apologize out of fear of damaging the sect reputation, failing to stand up against thugs who disrespected Mount Hua. He admires how Mugwi handled the situation with total environmental awareness and calm authority. Mujin assumes Mugwi is acting like a seasoned veteran purely to project confidence so his juniors feel safe relying on him. In reality, Mugwi is inwardly regretting that he did not just stab the thug on the spot. Mujin resolves to push himself harder so no scum can ever look down on Mount Hua again. Mugwi eyes the innkeeper suspiciously as they settle in. Later at the table, Mugwi asks his companions if they have grown lazy with their training. Muhua denies it, while Mukyil insists he just ate a heavy meal. Muhua asks what their plan is, complaining that the sect leader gave them vague instructions without a specific target. Mugwi asks if they noticed anything notable today. Muhua recounts their confrontation with the thugs, realizing the underworld has taken over. Mugwi notes that the sect leader trusted them to exercise independent judgment. Mugwi casually hints at wiping out the criminals, rephrasing it as teaching the local scum a harsh lesson. He asks the group for their thoughts, and Mujin agrees that investigating the thugs is a reasonable first step. Mujin suggests gathering intelligence before launching an attack. Mugwi commands them to collect all available information on the local criminal syndicate by tomorrow night. Underworld syndicates consist of criminals engaging in dishonorable acts for profit. While distinct from major evil factions like the Black Knight Palace, there is a clear line between petty criminals and true unorthodox martial sects. Elsewhere, a bald gang leader extorts a local civilian, claiming interest rates rose suddenly and demanding immediate payment. He offers to accept alternative payment since the victim lacks cash. Unlike martial sects, underworld syndicates operate purely for greed, lust, or the sadistic pleasure of tormenting the weak. Assassin guilds also fall into this category, taking lives strictly for coin. To common folk, underworld criminals are low-life thugs who live dirty lives and never amount to anything greater. Mugwi finds it absurd that such street thugs dared to provoke Mount Hua disciples. He confronts a group of criminals, questioning their foolishness. The gang leader angrily asks who Mugwi is, demanding to know where his guard went. Mugwi asks the thugs who is backing their takeover. The thugs curse at him, telling him to mind his business and scram before they beat him up. Mugwi calmly states he will find out himself. Calling the fat leader a pig, Mugwi notices the man has basic martial arts training. He dares the leader to attack with lethal intent, promising to spare his life only if he hands over his purse. Elsewhere, a beggar complains to his companion about taking too long. The companion replies that he saw something hilarious. Someone ordered a massive feast consisting of 3 full sacks of takeout food. A cloaked man had bought out the restaurant inventory. Beggars nearby smell pork belly and spring rolls, laughing at the cloaked man for carrying so much food openly. Several hungry beggars try to grab the food sacks. Mugwi warns them that if anyone touches his food, he will sever their head. An older beggar approaches, introducing himself as Hinge of the Beggar Sect. He apologizes for his subordinate's behavior. Sheathing his blade, Mugwi introduces himself as Mugwi of Mount Hua. Hinge expresses deep respect, stating the Beggar Sect mourned the death of Mount Hua Sword Saint and regretted being unable to assist more during the Shaanxi massacre. Mugwi accepts the sentiment, acknowledging that the Beggar Sect was pinned down by the extreme Heavenly Sect at the time. Impressed by Mugwi knowledge, Hinge asks what brings him to their contact point. Mugwi states he wants intelligence on the criminal syndicate currently occupying Pochun. He invites Hingai to share the takeout meal while they talk. Mugwi asks if the local thugs belong to the brutal Blood faction, who filled the void after the annihilation of Mount Hua subsect in Shaanxi. He notes these thugs are surprisingly well trained for common criminals. Hinge confirms this, noting that every member of the brutal Blood faction possesses martial arts training. Mugwi agrees, having fought a few himself. Although their techniques are third-rate, Mugwi points out that Hinge has not mentioned the true mastermind behind the group. Hinge asks why Mugwi suspects a hire is involved. Mugwi explains that Pochun is a strategic hub, and Mount Hua former subsect was substantial. A location of this size cannot be monopolized easily by a low-level gang. If it were just petty criminals, dozens of small gangs would be fighting over territory rather than submitting to one syndicate. Hingai praises Mugwi's sharp strategic insight, astonished that a young disciple possesses the political awareness of a Jianghu veteran. Hingai clarifies he was not withholding information intentionally but lacks definitive proof. Mugwi encourages him to share whatever he knows. Hingai reveals that a high-level martial artist has been contacting the brutal blood faction, and that man originates from the Nine Hells Sword Sect. Mugwi considers this. The Nine Hells Sword Sect is one of Shaanxi's three major powers, rivaling the top sects in scale. However, the Nine Hells Sword Sect historically maintained an indifferent stance toward Mount Hua and Zhongnan. Given their massive scale, Mugwi finds their secret involvement in a small town suspicious. If a major sect wanted Pochin, they would seize it openly rather than hiding behind street thugs. He wonders if the Nine Hells Sword Sect truly has the leisure to meddle here. Hingai admits he cannot guarantee the sect leadership ordered this, as the Nine Hells Sword Sect usually acts brazenly when expanding. Mugwi asks for the specific identity of the martial artist visiting the gang. Hingai reveals he suspects a figure known as the Red Wolf Sword. Mugwi reacts to the title. Hingai assumes Mugwi has heard of the Red Wolf Sword, warning him to exercise extreme caution if he encounters him. In reality, Mugwi has never heard of the Red Wolf Sword in his life. Realizing he gained little useful combat data on this opponent, Mugwi asks Hingai to share some fine liquor. Mugwi promises to keep drinking, so others assume it is ordinary alcohol, hoping to extract more details about the Red Wolf Sword as they drink. However, Mugwi's plan hits a snag. The liquor tastes exceptionally good. Hingai notes Mugwi seems to enjoy the vintage, and Mugwi admits it has been a long time since he tasted such quality liquor. Hingai remarks that Mugwi acts like a seasoned drinker despite his young appearance. Mugwi gets carried away enjoying the drink, failing to extract any further information before the bottle empties. Still, Mugwi feels confident in his tactical assessments. He returns to the inn, curious to see what information his juniors gathered during their investigation. When Mujin and the others meet Mugwi, they instantly smell the alcohol on him. Muhua accuses him of sitting around drinking while they worked. Mugwi denies it calmly. Mujin reports that the brutal blood faction seized Pochin after Mount Hua subsect fell, terrorizing the local population through extortion, theft, and brutal violence. Mukiel adds that these thugs beat civilians to death without hesitation, and their basic martial training makes them far more dangerous to defenseless villagers. Mugwi praises their quick intelligence gathering, then shares his own findings. He asks them to consider a vital detail. How did illiterate street thugs acquire formal martial arts training? While third-rate manuals are easy to buy, common thugs are far too lazy to study manuals on their own. Thugs would sooner burn a book for warmth than read it. Therefore, someone personally trained them in these combat techniques. Mugwi reveals that someone deliberately armed these thugs with martial arts skills. Mujin urgently asks who is behind it. Mugwi reveals that the backing comes from the Red Wolf Sword of the Nine Hells Sword Sect. Shocked, Mujin realizes they are dealing with a major sect asset rather than mere street thugs. Mugwi proposes ambushing and wiping out the syndicate headquarters, asking for their opinion. Mujin internally panics at the thought of provoking the Nine Hells Sword Sect. Mukiel agrees that attacking a group backed by a major sect is too risky, suggesting they report back to Mount Hua leadership first. Mujin agrees with Mukiel's cautious stance, but Muhua immediately sides with Mugwi, eager to deliver justice. Mujin urges them to consider Mount Hua's fragile state. Mount Hua is still recovering from the Shaanxi massacre, so sparking a war with the Nine Hells Sword Sect could prove catastrophic. Mujin stresses that while destroying local thugs is fine, fighting the Nine Hells Sword Sect is reckless. Mugwi tells Mujin he is overthinking the situation. Mugwi assures him that no full-scale war will break out, explaining that the Nine Hells Sword Sect does not operate through covert street gangs. The Nine Hells Sword Sect is tyrannical and direct. If they wanted to attack Mount Hua territory, they would invade openly rather than hiding behind petty criminals. Furthermore, given Mount Hua's current weakened state, the Nine Hells Sword Sect could march openly if they truly intended to destroy them. The Nine Hells Sword Sect is currently occupied with internal matters and lacks the incentive to fight Mount Hua over a small town. Thus, the Red Wolf Sword is likely acting independently. Even if the gang is loosely connected to him, eliminating them will not trigger a grand sect war. Mugwi orders the group to prepare for the strike. Mujin asks how Mugwi obtained such detailed strategic intel. Mugwi attributes it to the Beggar Sect, leaving Mujin surprised. The Beggar Sect is an orthodox faction comprising beggars across the Murim, possessing an unmatched intelligence network due to their sheer numbers. They trade gathered information for coin and food, maintaining strict codes of ethics. Their intelligence is universally regarded as absolute truth in the Jianghu. Knowing the intel comes from the Beggar Sect, Mujin trusts its accuracy implicitly. Mugwi tells Mujin to stop worrying, promising they will offer a peaceful resolution before taking lives. Mujin settles his nerves, trusting his senior judgment. Mujin decides to remain calm and follow Mugwi's lead. Reaching the syndicate stronghold, Mugwi tells his team to draw their weapons. Mujin wonders what peaceful approach Mugwi planned. Mugwi suddenly kicks the main gates off their hinges, stepping through the dust cloud. He demands that the gang leader and the Red Wolf Sword come out and kneel in apology, promising to spare their lives if they submit peacefully. Recognizing the Mount Hua uniforms, the thugs gather in shock. Mujin whispers that smashing the front gate is hardly peaceful, but Mugwi replies that breaching the front door is standard procedure for a Jianghu raid. A gang officer steps out, demanding to know who caused the commotion. Seeing Mount Hua disciples, the officer initially hesitates, but quickly dismisses them as mere kids. The officer threatens them, warning that an important guest is inside. He orders them to leave before they get killed. Mugwi retorts that the thugs are the ones about to die. Mugwi warns the officer to watch his mouth if he wants to keep his tongue. Enraged, the officer orders his men to attack and teach these green disciples a lethal lesson. The officer commands his men not to kill them immediately, but Muhua spots captive civilians inside and charges forward. Mujin yells at her not to break formation. Muhua shouts back that the hostages are severely injured and need immediate medical care. The thug she beat earlier rallies his men, claiming the Mount Hua disciples are weak and easily overwhelmed by numbers. Mugwi notices his juniors holding back as if in a sparring match. He shouts at Muhua, asking if her sword is just a decoration and commanding her to strike with lethal intent when enemies attack her. The gang officer notices Mugwi standing completely calm while his peers fight. Seeing Mugwi's bored expression, the officer realizes Mugwi is the strongest among them. Deciding not to fight Mugwi head-on, the officer decides to help his men kill the junior disciples first before swarming Mugwi together. Mugwi watches the officer run past him to attack the juniors. He chooses not to intercept immediately, viewing this chaos as a vital rite of passage. This is their first real battle in the Jianghu since joining Mount Hua. They are used to clean sparring, unprepared for enemies who throw dirt, spit, and fight dirty to kill. Unlike the Black Knight Palace crisis, where senior disciples shielded them, no one will protect them today. They must kill or be killed, learning that real combat in the Jianghu is far more brutal than mountain training. Mugwi sees Muchiol adapting quickly, while the gang officer suddenly redirects his charge toward Mugwi, laughing and calling him the easiest target. Before the officer can react, Mugwi decapitates him instantly. As the gang officer falls dead, the remaining thugs panic, shouting that their leader is dead. A commanding voice echoes from the inner manor, telling the thugs that whoever slays the Mount Hua disciples will become the new leader. The thugs cheer as the Red Wolf Sword steps forward. Mugwi remarks that he was wondering when the man would finally show his face. The Red Wolf Sword expresses mild surprise that a young Mount Hua disciple knows his title. Mugwi mockingly replies that he only learned his name yesterday, adding that he has no interest in remembering weaklings. The Red Wolf Sword scoffs at Mugwi's arrogant tone, noting he speaks like a demonic practitioner. Dropping his teacup, the Red Wolf Sword draws his blade and steps forward, telling Mugwi he will have to fight with everything he has. Mugwi asks if he truly thinks he is strong enough to force that. The Red Wolf Sword is stunned by Mugwi's blinding speed, failing to track his footwork. Seeing Mugwi hasn't even drawn his sword, the Red Wolf Sword refuses to believe a brat can surpass him. Inwardly, Mugwi refrains from killing the elder instantly because he wants to test the man's sword style. It has been a month since Mugwi awoke in this body, during which he trained relentlessly. He has been developing a hybrid style fusing his past martial arts with Mount Hua techniques, but lacked suitable opponents to test his progress. His juniors were far too weak, and the elders were too busy. Thus, the Red Wolf Sword serves as a decent testing dummy, even if his skills fall far short of Mugwi's expectations. Leaping back, the Red Wolf Sword realizes Mugwi read his stance completely, parrying his strike effortlessly with minimal movement. Accepting the massive gap in their skill, the Red Wolf Sword apologizes for underestimating Mugwi, admitting he is no ordinary young prospect. He unleashes his full power, but Mugwi casually analyzes the Red Blade Sword style mid-combat, pointing out its flawed forms and noting the man never learned its second half. The Red Wolf Sword is horrified as Mugwi's illusionary sword path bypasses his guard completely. Realizing Mugwi intentionally altered his strike at the last millisecond to spare his life, the Red Wolf Sword grows frantic. He cannot comprehend how a teenager possesses such terrifying mastery, feeling intense resentment toward Mugwi's natural talent. Enraged by the disparity in their talent, the Red Wolf Sword screams in frustration, cursing the unfairness of genius as he lunges desperately. He shouts that he was already training before Mugwi was born, pouring decades of sweat to gain recognition, only for a young genius to destroy his life work in seconds. Mugwi counters seamlessly, delivering a decisive blow. As the Red Wolf Sword collapses bleeding onto the ground, he laments how cruel talent is in the martial world. Lying mortal wounded, the Red Wolf Sword bitterly declares that his decades of effort were reduced to a stepping stone for a young prodigy. He laughs weakly, warning Mugwi that killing a master of the Nine Hells Sword Sect will seal his fate. He warns Mugwi to enjoy his fame while it lasts, because once the Nine Hells Sword Sect confirms his death, squad assassins will hunt him relentlessly. He boasts that no matter how talented Mugwi is, he cannot withstand the full might of the Nine Hells Sword Sect. Mugwi kicks him, telling him he talks too much for a dying man. Mugwi notes the inferior complex in his speech, pointing out the insignias on his chest that identify him as a low-ranking member of the Netherworld unit. The Nine Hells Sword Sect is divided into 3 branches: the Netherworld unit, the Purgatory unit, and the Despair unit. While outsiders view them as equals, Mugwi knows the Netherworld unit is actually an outcast faction stripped of succession rights, while real power lies with the Purgatory and Despair units, currently locked in war with the brutal Dragon faction. Mugwi initially wondered why the Nine Hells Sword Sect would meddle in southern Shaanxi during a major war, but looking at this discarded officer, the truth becomes instantly clear. The Otherworldly unit was assigned to protect headquarters and support from the rear in this war. However, craving merit, they pretended to carry out missions abroad. While they were actually pulling this mess, he asked him how he knew. Mugwi told him he must think the Otherworldly unit would back him up if he died. Unfortunately for him, the Otherworldly unit would do nothing except hide his death at all costs. With a faint smile, Mugwi told him he should be supporting the war effort instead of meddling in this nonsense. He asked if this was not the perfect chance for the Hell unit and Despair unit to eliminate the Otherworldly unit. He added that even if the Otherworldly unit came to Mount Hua seeking revenge, he asked if he really thought Mugwi would fear them. Even the Hell unit and Despair unit combined would not be enough, let alone the Otherworldly unit, since Mugwi was the one who faced the Nine Hells Sword Sect alone. Pressing his head into the dirt, the man repeatedly cried out that he saw nothing. Mugwi pulled him up and asked why he was still lying down, ordering him to clean up this mess immediately. The man bowed and complied. Holding a ledger, Mugwi noted protection taxes, gambling den profits, the names of borrowers, and the amounts taken. He remarked that at least they kept a clear record of the cash flow. Asking if that was everything, the man confirmed it was. Mugwi stated that from now on, all the money extortionately stolen from the people would be returned to its rightful owners. They would tear down the gambling den and settle everything today. When asked if he had any objections, the nervous man stammered that finishing all of this in a single day might be difficult. Mugwi warned him that he was mistaken about something. The reason he did not kill them all was not out of mercy. They were simply trash undeserving of death. If they all died, where would the victims direct their ruined lives? They could not atone through death. Their sins were heavier than death. It was only right that they live out their lives making amends to those they abused. Mugwi ordered the faction leader to stay while telling everyone else to move. They needed to act proactively to finish everything today. He instructed his companions to ensure the money was properly returned and the network dismantled. Manhwa asked what he planned to do, and Mugwi replied that he had separate business to handle. She asked if he was sneaking off to drink like last time. Mugwi asked if he looked like someone who drank at random times. As he walked away, he told them not to worry, assuring them they would be fine. Mugwi thought to himself that Manhwa was sharper than he expected. The man asked Mugwi why he requested him to stay. Mugwi stood up and said there was no need to hide it, as his nose could not be fooled. He demanded to be led directly to the cloudgrass tuber. In his past life, Dogoeon sought rare opportunities to grow stronger because he lacked a supportive sect and could not afford expensive elixirs. Since he had no money, he searched for them himself. But rare treasures were not found easily by searching. One simply stumbled upon them by chance. After 7 years of wandering in search of a miracle, he accidentally discovered a cloudgrass tuber while resting after training. The tuber he acquired in his past life had an unmistakable bitter, earthy scent that he could never forget. The faint aroma of cloudgrass he detected earlier grew steadily stronger as they approached. The man explained that the cloudgrass tuber was 200 years old, acquired by chance and stored ever since. He had forgotten about it amidst the chaos, but he was amazed that Mugwi recognized it by scent alone, calling him truly extraordinary. He mentioned that the Red Wolf sword originally intended to claim it, but it had now found a far more fitting master. Mugwi commended him, telling him to go back upstairs and complete his work while shutting the doors. Mugwi noted that most martial organizations maintain dedicated chambers for energy cultivation, built with thick iron doors and stone walls. This meant he would not be disturbed. In his past life, he consumed a 300-year-old cloudgrass tuber. Though a 200-year-old one might be less potent, it was still immensely valuable. Then he paused in surprise. He wondered why this 200-year tuber was so massive. It dwarfed the 300-year tuber from his past life, indicating it was at least 400 years old. He reflected on how difficult it was to obtain a cloudgrass tuber in his past life, yet here he found an even grander one with ease. As he ingested it, he felt slightly guilty consuming it alone, but promised himself he would share the next valuable resource he found. Stepping outside refreshed, Mugwi was greeted by the former faction member, who reported hearing a loud noise earlier. Mugwi dismissed it as nothing. He asked the man if he had time to wander around instead of meticulously auditing the ledger. The man replied that he was doing so until recently. Mugwi walked away, warning him that he would inspect the ledger later to verify every coin returned. Bowing deeply, the man wished him a safe trip while privately cursing Mugwi for his rude demeanor. Gazing at the cracked building, he muttered that despite calling it nothing, the structure was nearly ruined. But since it was slated for destruction anyway, it did not matter. He wondered what Mugwi did to the herb to cause such force. Mukiel reminded Mugwi that the sun would rise soon, asking if he was sure he had time to rest. Standing up, Mugwi declined. Manhwa urged everyone to finish quickly before dawn. Nearby, a civilian asked if this money was truly being returned to him, and Manhwa confirmed it was their wrongfully extorted property. It was only right to take it back, and she offered her apologies. Watching from afar, Hinge marveled that Mugwi actually took down the Red Wolf sword and dismantled the violent faction. It had only been 2 days since Hinge provided the intelligence on the Red Wolf sword. He knew the young man asking about the Red Wolf sword was no ordinary fighter, but he never expected a hidden dragon residing within Mount Hua. Mugwi approached Hinge, explaining that he came for food because he was hungry, but decided drinking alone was boring. With drinks and snacks prepared, he asked Hinge to join him. Hinge chuckled, asking if he was drinking alcohol at dawn and remarking that the young master certainly knew how to enjoy life. Once seated, Hinge inquired about his true intentions. Mugwi noted that Hinge already saw the Red Wolf sword was dead and the faction dismantled, with stolen funds being returned. However, the remaining low-level members of the faction posed a dilemma. They had turned to the criminal underworld simply because they had no means to survive. If there was a way to rehabilitate them, Mugwi wanted to employ them for the reconstruction of Pochun. He asked Hinge if he knew trustworthy merchants who could take them in. Although they possessed martial arts experience, Mugwi planned to destroy their Dantian energy centers during his 3-day stay. Hinge remarked in surprise that crippling an energy center was no simple feat. He assured Mugwi that he knew reliable merchants. Mugwi would not need to worry about the underworld men, as Hinge would personally monitor them to ensure they learned honest trades without causing trouble. Mugwi expressed his gratitude, but Hinge insisted the civilians were the ones who owed him thanks. Changing the subject, Hinge asked how long Mugwi planned to remain in Pochun. Mugwi replied that he had 2 remaining outer sect divisions to inspect within a strict schedule, allowing him about 3 days. He added that he heard reports of bandit strongholds operating near Pochun. Hinge asked if he intended to clear those out as well. Later, Mugwi poured bamboo leaf liquor for his fellow disciples, offering a toast to celebrate completing their first real combat mission. When they mentioned sects do not drink carelessly, he acknowledged that disciples usually drank only on designated occasions. However, he reminded them that new martial artists suffered the highest mortality rates during their initial real-world assignments. He pointed out that while the underworld fighters had unrefined skills, they fought with clear murderous intent, whereas the disciples hesitated to inflict harm. That was the reality of the martial world. Superior techniques alone did not guarantee survival if one lacked the resolve to strike lethally. Most novices overlooked this harsh truth and met a gruesome end. Since all 3 of them survived unharmed, Mugwi declared their safety a worthy cause for a toast. Mugwi smiled and asked if this was not his own first real mission as well. He congratulated everyone on their safe return. Sampling the liquor, Mugwi noted its fine taste, and Mujin agreed it was smooth. Meanwhile, Mukiel recalled the sword technique Mugwi used against the Red Wolf sword. It did not resemble any standard Mount Hua sword art he knew, leaving him deeply intrigued. Unable to suppress his curiosity, Mukiel voiced his question. He noted that while Mugwi began with Mount Hua swordsmanship, the moment he deflected the Red Wolf sword, his style transformed into something entirely foreign. The strikes were heavy and compact rather than fluid. Mukiel asked to learn the secret behind that technique. Mugwi was secretly surprised. He assumed the disciples were too distracted during the battle to notice his movements. His strike had incorporated the principle of heavy momentum, a core element of the ghost sword style he created in his past life. He had integrated that heavy momentum into the foundational movements of the Mount Hua Sect sequential sword style. He was impressed Mukiel picked up on it. Since Mukiel recognized it was non-standard Mount Hua swordsmanship, Mugwi commended his sharp intuition. He promised to explain it later, stating they had urgent work to address first. He warned them to finish their drinks now, because once they heard his plan, they would not have a moment to rest over the next 3 days. Suddenly, a voice called out from the brush, commanding them to halt. A man stepped out of the bushes, demanding all their valuables on pain of death. Watching the bandit, Manhwa identified him immediately. Mugwi nodded in agreement. He explained that bandits lurk in forests to rob travelers. While similar to the underworld, they are more organized and possess martial training. The thugs in Pochun only knew martial arts because the Red Wolf sword taught them for a specific scheme, making them an anomaly. Standard bandits operate with tighter group structures. Encountering rogue bandits meant a fortress was nearby. Mugwi gathered that roughly 5 bandit strongholds surrounded Pochun, though their exact hidden coordinates remained unknown. He noted these bandits were far more formidable than the thugs under the Red Wolf sword. When asked why he was explaining this, Mugwi revealed that they would eradicate all 5 strongholds within 3 days. Each disciple would take turns clearing a fortress while the others observed. Manhwa gasped, asking if they were being punished for a mistake. Mugwi reminded them that they nearly died against common thugs because they lacked the resolve to inflict lethal harm. This mission was designed to forge that necessary killer instinct. Mukyol agreed, acknowledging they would have perished without Mugwi. Mujin then asked Mugwi how he prepared himself to harm others. Mugwi paused, thinking that while he could not reveal his past life combat experience, the memory of his first kill was unforgettable. He explained that he was driven by fear, the terror that if he did not kill his enemy, he or his companions would die instead. He struck down enemies solely to prevent his worst fears from coming true. He advised them to find their own martial conviction. Turning to Mukyol, he promised to teach him the heavy sword principle depending on how well he handled a fortress. Mugwi declared he would demonstrate the clearing process on the first night. That marked the beginning of their 3-day intense training regime. By day they monitored the Pochun underworld, and by night they raided bandit strongholds. The practical training proved effective. Though the disciples hesitated initially, they quickly shed their doubts. While everyone performed well against the strongholds, Mujin struggled with hesitation. Mugwi noted that Mujin did not lack skill. In fact, his foundational techniques surpassed both Manhwa and Mukyol. However, Mujin's reluctance to strike lethally stemmed from fearing the act of harming others more than dying himself. Mugwi knew Mujin had to overcome this internal hurdle on his own. The disciples reported that all 5 strongholds were cleared in 2 days instead of 3. Mugwi praised their efficiency and instructed them to rest before departing for Banan the next day. Manhwa asked what they would do with their remaining time today. Mugwi reminded Mukyol of his promise to teach him the modified technique. When Manhwa asked if she could learn too, Mugwi agreed, though he secretly intended to push them to exhaustion. He explained that the technique Mukyol observed was actually Mount Hua's 6 sequential sword style, modified to incorporate heavy momentum. Mukyol asked for clarification regarding weight. Mugwi explained that Mount Hua's swordsmanship allows fluid transitions even if a strike's path is parried. This versatility stems from constant variation in form. Furthermore, the 6 sequential sword style blurs the line between offense and defense, allowing it to chain seamlessly into other martial arts. Mugwi demonstrated his personal interpretation, asking them what would happen if illusionary elements were merged into the 6 sequential sword style. Mukyol guessed the implication, and Mugwi confirmed it, citing Yunho, the former sword saint of Mount Hua. Mugwi stated that while Yunho was not the first to attempt such integration, he achieved the absolute pinnacle of the craft due to his profound mastery of martial theory. Yunho realized that whether utilizing flashy variations or plum blossom sword chi, all forms branched from the core 6 sequential sword style. He had quietly developed an entirely new path. One branch focused heavily on weight momentum, which Mugwi was currently refining. However, Mugwi admitted the technique remained incomplete, as Mount Hua historically lacked deep studies on heavy sword weight. Attempting an unfinished style before mastering basics could cause internal conflict. Yunho practiced it in secret precisely because incomplete techniques could trigger martial deviation and chaos. Mugwi asked Mukyol once more if he truly wished to pursue this path. Mukyol enthusiastically requested to be taught, initiating a grueling training session. Exhausted from watching, Manhwa urged Mujin to sneak away. Mugwi called out to Mukyol, correcting his posture. He instructed him to discard traditional illusion principles and focus purely on weight momentum. He told him to compare the sensation of his own strikes against Mugwi's. Taking advantage of the distraction, Manhwa and Mujin slipped away under the guise of inspecting the rehabilitated criminals. In town, a supervisor barked at a former thug to hurry. The worker complained of back and stomach pains from the previous day's manual labor. Observing them, Manhwa noted that order was maintained. Mugwi's prediction proved accurate. Those forced into crime out of desperation would work diligently given a legitimate chance. Even if they worked out of fear of her supervision, their destroyed energy centers prevented them from misusing martial arts. Satisfied, she assumed Mujin was inspecting another sector. Deciding her duties were complete, she resolved to rest after days of relentless effort. Suddenly, a figure approached her from behind. Manhwa instantly drew her sword, demanding the intruder identify themselves. The visitor apologized for startling her, introducing herself as the elder sister of the young girl saved from the violent faction. Sheathing her blade, Manhwa apologized for her jumpiness, explaining she had been working long hours. Tearfully, the little sister thanked Manhwa for saving her family. Manhwa felt moved to tears, realizing this gratitude was the true purpose of chivalric martial artists. The older sister shared that her injuries healed quickly, allowing them to give their father a proper funeral. Manhwa expressed condolences for not arriving sooner. The sister insisted no apology was needed, expressing immense gratitude that her younger sibling was not left orphaned. The little girl declared her dream to become a noble warrior just like Manhwa when she grew up. Flustered and touched, Manhwa encouraged the girl, telling her she would become an even grander hero. Later on the road, an exhausted Manhwa complained to Mugwi about his fast walking pace, warning they would collapse before reaching Banan. Mugwi replied that she was simply slow from slacking off. He suggested inspecting her routine training. Muhua grumbled that he shouldn't have granted a rest day if he intended to march them so relentlessly. Mujin wondered aloud if the Pochin workers were rehabilitating properly, noting their smooth progress. Sensing Mugwi's stern mood, Mujin quickly changed the subject. Muhua assured him the beggar sect would maintain surveillance, adding that Mujin should focus on strengthening his own weak resolve through harder training. Mujin silently regretted bringing up the topic. Muhua mentioned she missed Yunyun, and Mujin asked who that was. Muhua explained Yunyun was the little girl she saved in Pochin. She admitted it was her first time caring so deeply for a child's future. Mugwi cut them off, announcing they had arrived in Banan before sunset. Mujin pointed out that Mount Hua's local outer branch was the Fresh Flower Sect. Muhua eagerly suggested having dinner there. Near the entrance, they spotted a young boy taking a heavy strike from a bully. The struck child recognized the newcomer's uniforms as belonging to the main Mount Hua Sect. Muhua intervened, reprimanding the bully that striking an untrained child with such force could prove fatal. Noticing the bully's arrogant demeanor despite his young age, Muhua blamed poor parenting for corrupting the child. The bully looked shocked as Muhua chastised him. She warned him that arrogant behavior from an orthodox sect member invited severe consequences, asking if his masters taught him such poor manners. Releasing the bully, she ordered him to leave. The rescued boy introduced himself as Sanha of the Fresh Flower Sect and expressed deep gratitude. Mugwi introduced himself as a second-generation disciple of Mount Hua. Muhua asked Sanha if he was hurt, and Mugwi asked who attacked him. Sanha revealed the bully was Gasain, the young leader of the Great Truth Sect, accompanied by other Great Truth disciples. Sanja explained their sects were on poor terms, and upon realizing the Fresh Flower Sect had weakened, the Great Truth Sect began open intimidation. Mugwi asked if Sanha's father, the sect leader, was aware of this. Sana confirmed he was. Previously, Sana fought back and beat them, but the Great Truth Sect manipulated the incident, claiming Sana started the fight. They escalated the matter toward full intersect conflict. Wanting to avoid war, the Fresh Flower Sect leader backed down and endured the insult. Mugwi analyzed that if open war broke out, the Fresh Flower Sect would surely fall. Thus, the leader suffered in silence to prevent an invasion, choosing not to call for help to avoid starting a broader feud. Sana endured the bullying for the same reason. Muhua grew furious that an outer branch of Mount Hua was mistreated this way. Mugwi noted that this systemic vulnerability was precisely why the main sect dispatched them. Upon reaching the branch, local members excitedly gathered, identifying the main sect disciples. Mugwi noticed their uniforms featured white plum blossoms instead of red ones. The leader of the Fresh Flower Sect warmly welcomed them. Mugwi greeted him respectfully as a second-generation disciple. The leader, Muguk, expressed admiration for their reported overnight defeat of the violent faction in Pochin. Mugwi modestly clarified that rumors exaggerated the timeline. Muguk chuckled, stating the key outcome was the faction's destruction. He praised his son, Sanha, for guiding them inside and invited everyone to rest. Inside, Mukyol noted the tea's rich plum blossom fragrance. Muguk humbly insisted it could not match the main sect's tea, which he remembered fondly. Muguk expressed concern overburdening them before they rested. Mugwi reassured him that inspecting and protecting outer branches was their core mission. Mugwi inquired about the current status of the Fresh Flower Sect. Muguk admitted their situation was precarious due to the hostile Great Truth Sect. He explained that while relations were historically tense, major conflicts were avoided because both sects were equal in strength until the Shaanxi massacre crippled their numbers. Capitalizing on their losses, the Great Truth Sect grew aggressive, sabotaging operations, seizing assets, and provoking them continuously. Even their young leader targeted Sanha. Muguk admitted he burned to retaliate with his sword but knew it was a trap. The Great Truth Sect was seeking any pretext for total annexation. Muguk lamented his helplessness as both a father and a leader. Mujin asked why he did not request reinforcement from the main Mount Hua Sect earlier. Muguk explained he knew Mount Hua was also recovering from heavy losses. He planned to wait until Mount Hua stabilized, but felt immense relief seeing their resolute young disciples arrive in person. Muguk noted that their presence alone would deter the Great Truth Sect. However, Mugwi Blunt stated that Muguk did not truly believe 4 young disciples could solve the crisis. Muguk laughed softly, acknowledging Mugwi's sharp observation. He admitted that as a sect leader, he had to be realistic, but offered to host dinner first. Mugwi found the situation frustrating. The outer sect endured hardship expecting help, but when assistance arrived, it was merely 4 young disciples on their first outing. Muguk likely feared that involving young disciples would lead to their injury, exacerbating the conflict. Therefore, Muguk planned to treat them hospitably and send them back safely. Yet, a small part of Muguk hoped these main sect disciples could perform a miracle. Mugwi interrupted his thoughts, declining the dinner invitation. Mugwi stated they would handle their own meals. Muhua found his refusal rude, but Mugwi felt Muguk's underlying dismissal was equally cold. Muguk asked why he rejected their hospitality. Mugwi knew trying to convince him with words alone was pointless. Mugwi stated they could not accept hospitality without earning it through results. Muhua was shocked by Mugwi's unusual adherence to duty, wondering why he was acting so formally. Leading the group outside to a secure distance, Mugwi explained that Muguk lacked confidence in their ability to resolve the threat. Muhua questioned why Muguk claimed their presence alone was sufficient. Mugwi asked her to consider the behavior of Gassine, the Great Truth Sect's successor. Even as a child, a sect's successor's arrogance reflected the sect's true attitude toward Mount Hua. The Great Truth Sect did not fear them at all. If 4 young Mount Hua disciples fought the Great Truth Sect and failed, the Fresh Flower Sect would be annexed immediately, and Mount Hua's prestige would suffer disastrously. To prevent this worst-case scenario, they had to decisively eliminate the threat themselves. Muhua asked how they should proceed. Mugwi assured her he had a plan. Walking into the main district, they observed Great Truth Sect members acting aggressively in local taverns. Despite claiming to be an orthodox sect, their extortion tactics mirrored common thugs. A drunk Great Truth member bumped into a civilian who apologized profusely. The thug demanded raised protection fees while locals watched nervously. Locals whispered in anger about the Great Truth Sect's oppressive extortion. One civilian complained that they paid protection fees to keep non-orthodox factions away, only for the Great Truth Sect to act like tyrants themselves. Overhearing this, the Great Truth member grabbed the civilian. Mugwi instructed his companions to stand by and let events unfold naturally. The Great Truth member drew his blade to strike the unarmed civilian for complaining. Before the blade could fall, Mugwi caught the thug's wrist, neutralizing his movement with chopstick pressure. The thug panicked as he found himself completely paralyzed. Mugwi took the thug's sword and scolded him for wielding a weapon against a defenseless citizen. Mugwi remarked that there was little difference between such orthodox hypocrites and evil factions. Recognizing Mugwi's Mount Hua uniform, the thug grew terrified. Mugwi confiscated his sword, telling him he was unfit to carry it. He informed the thug that the paralysis would wear off later, and if he wanted his sword back, he could retrieve it from the Fresh Flower Sect. The enraged thug asked if Mount Hua was trying to start a war with the Great Truth Sect. Mugwi asked if he was foolish enough to speak for his entire sect, warning him not to take Mount Hua lightly. Mugwi issued a formal ultimatum. The leader of the Great Truth Sect must visit the Fresh Flower Sect at dawn to apologize. If he failed to appear by dawn, the Great Truth Sect would be wiped from existence. The thug scrambled away to report. Mujin expressed concern over Mugwi's bold provocation, but Mugwi remained calm. Meanwhile, Muguk reflected on the 3 heaviest moments of grief in his life. The first was losing comrades during the Palace of the Black Knight battle, the second was his eldest son's death, and the third was seeing Sanha bullied. Now Mugwi's sudden provocation added a 4th overwhelming weight to his heart. At dawn, the Great Truth Sect leader arrived at the Fresh Flower Sect with his martial masters, furious at the insult. He confronted Mugwi, criticizing his lack of manners despite being a Mount Hua disciple. Mugwi countered that the Great Truth Sect's aggressive display resembled a demonic cult rather than an orthodox sect. The leader flared with murderous intent, but Mugwi invited them inside to discuss terms properly to avoid public scandal. The Great Truth leader agreed, believing the young disciples were merely bluffing to buy time. Inside, Muguk was astonished by how Mugwi controlled the room. Mugwi laid out the core issue. He explained that Mount Hua granted them full authority to handle regional conflicts in Pochun, Banan, and Lushan. He revealed that he personally eliminated the Nine Hells Sword Sect operative in Pochun without sustaining injuries, proving he possessed the power to back up his words. Mugwi proposed resolving the entire intersect territorial conflict through an official 3-on-3 duel. Muguk was stunned by the proposal. The Great Truth leader laughed arrogantly, assuming the match would be an easy slaughter. Mugwi used secret voice transmission to ask Muguk if his eldest son died in a previous duel against the Great Truth Sect. Muguk confirmed it through transmission. Mugwi apologized for bringing up past trauma but urged Muguk to trust him. Mugwi structured the duel parameters, 3 rounds featuring the sect leader, vice leader, and top combatant. Mugwi designated himself as the Fresh Flower Sect's top combatant. The Great Truth leader agreed, mockingly promising not to kill them. Mugwi set the match date for 5 days later. In the intervening days, Mugwi subjected Muguk and Sanha to intense training. Muhua watched in horror as Mugwi drove the father and son to complete physical exhaustion. Mugwi drilled them relentlessly on body mechanics, combat composure, and internal energy efficiency. Sanha wept from fatigue, calling Mugwi a true demon, but his martial foundation improved drastically in just 4 days. Mugwi organized intense sparring sessions where Muguk had to defend against all 3 Mount Hua disciples simultaneously. Through relentless real combat simulations, Muguk identified and corrected fatal flaws in his defensive forms. Meanwhile, the Great Truth Sect secretly hired a renowned mercenary known as the Clouded Tiger Blade to represent them in the duel. The mercenary scoffed at Mount Hua's young disciples, confident he would crush them effortless. On the day of the duel, the official referee Yumon Kwon announced the ground rules. The first match between the young successors would use wooden swords, while the remaining 2 matches would use real blades. The first match began between Sanha and Ghasain. Ghasain rushed forward with wide, wild swings. Sanha recalled Mugwi's training. Weak fighters make overly large movements to intimidate opponents. Calmly seeing through Ghasain's telegraphed strike, Sanha parried and struck Ghasain's chest with perfect precision. Sanha knocked Ghasain to the ground, securing a decisive victory for the Fresh Flower Sect in the first round. The Great Truth leader was shocked by Sanha's sudden growth, but remained confident his own martial strength would win the second round. The second match began between Muguk and the Great Truth leader. Muguk focused purely on internal composure, applying Mugwi's lessons. Muguk exploited the Great Truth leader's overextended balance, unleashing a precise counterstrike that shattered his opponent's weapon and stance. Muguk secured victory in the second round, clinching the overall duel for the Fresh Flower Sect. Stunned by their defeat, the Great Truth leader attempted to renege on the territorial agreement. Mugwi stepped forward for the third match against the Clouded Tiger Blade. To force full compliance, Mugwi raised the stakes, demanding 5 orbs of great merit if he won the final match. The Clouded Tiger Blade drew his sword, unleashing rapid, high-level strikes that created flashes of sparks. Recognizing the mercenary from his past life, Dogoeon easily anticipated every movement. Mugwi executed an offensive variation of the Plum Blossom Descendant Return Ring, disarming and defeating the Clouded Tiger Blade instantly. The crowd cheered in amazement as Mugwi claimed the 5 orbs of great merit. Mugwi mocked the disgraced Great Truth leader, who was forced to hand over the treasures and vacate Banan entirely. That night, Mugwi instructed his companions to pack their belongings and depart Banan immediately. He wanted to avoid noisy victory celebrations and avoid drawing unnecessary attention while carrying the orbs of great merit. Mugwi also suspected mysterious figures were backing the Great Truth sect behind the scenes. Meanwhile, in the shadows, an agent from the Dark Flame Pavilion reported the failure to his superior. The commander ordered the disgraced Great Truth leader's son thrown into the Cave of Slaughter as punishment. The commander took note of Mugwi's name, suspecting their young master would take a keen interest in Mount Hua's rising genius. The group traveled onward toward Lushan. Muhua excitedly asked why Lushan was famous, expecting talk of hot springs. However, Mugwi led them straight to a local blacksmith shop first. He presented Mukyil with a custom-made greatsword, heavy and broad, perfectly suited for his heavyweight technique. He also provided refined practice blades for the rest of the group until they earned official Mount Hua Plum Blossom swords. Mukyil happily accepted the greatsword, resolving to prove that heavy sword techniques belonged within Mount Hua's martial tradition. They then proceeded to the Shining Sect, the local Mount Hua outer branch in Lushan. The branch leader Boeum warmly welcomed them, praising their feats in Pochin and Banan. Boeum apologized for not offering a formal two-handed salute, explaining he lost his right arm fighting in the Shaanxi massacre. Mugwi and Mujin expressed deep respect for Boeum's sacrifices during the war. Boeum modestly downplayed his contributions, ushering the young disciples inside for food and rest. Mugwi remained vigilant, knowing their work in Lushan was just beginning. He recalled the 314 times he faced death in his past life, using those hard-earned instincts to stay alert. He knew that relying solely on internal energy sensing without visual observation was a fatal habit in high-level duels. Mastering full sensory perception was mandatory for true survival in the martial world. He resolved to instill these vital combat principles into his companions throughout their journey. Without proper battlefield awareness, even the strongest martial artist could fall to an unexpected strike. For a second-generation Mount Hua disciple, mastering foundational techniques like the nascent Lotus Sword was merely the beginning. Mugwi intended to push their boundaries until they could stand against any enemy in the Jianghu. He knew that crushing an opponent's spirit required complete technical dominance. As long as they upheld the justice of Mount Hua, no corrupt faction could stand in their way. Arrogant enemies who relied on trickery and stolen pills would inevitably break before true martial mastery. With their foundation solidifying, the 4 disciples prepared for their next challenge in Lushan. Watching Mukyil practice with his heavy greatsword, Mugwi smiled, satisfied with their progress. The journey ahead would be long, but Mount Hua's path to restoration was officially underway. Mugwi looked up at the night sky, ready for whatever hidden threats lay waiting. He knew that justice in the Jianghu was forged through strength, precision, and unwavering resolve. The disciples gathered around the table, enjoying a rare moment of peace before their next assignment. Sana looked at his wooden sword with newfound pride, grateful for the training that saved his sect. Ghasain's defeated retreat marked a major turning point for the Fresh Flower Sect's local standing. Yuman Quan recorded the official duel results, cementing Mount Hua's authority in Benin. Mugwi kept a sharp eye on the surrounding shadows, mindful of the dark forces watching from behind the scenes. The rules of the martial world were simple. Power dictates survival, but honor defines greatness. With every victory, Mount Hua's name resounded clearer across the land. The disciples understood that true strength came from discipline, not arrogance. Intimidation tactics would fail against those who trained in real life-and-death combat. The fresh Flower Sect members celebrated their saved branch, cheering for the young heroes. Sana realized how vast the martial world was, inspired to train harder every day. Mugwi reminded him to stay humble, as true martial arts required lifelong dedication. The referee officially concluded the proceedings, declaring total victory for Mount Hua's allies. The defeated Great Truth leader slunk away, his reputation ruined and his ambition shattered. The crowd cheered as the 5 orbs of great merit were delivered to Mugwi. Muguk expressed his eternal gratitude to Mugwi for reclaiming his family's honor. Mugwi simply nodded, accepting the outcome as natural for a disciple of Mount Hua. The group prepared to rest at the Shining Sect, ready to tackle Lushan's troubles next. Mukiol inspected his new greatsword, testing its balance and weight momentum. He thanked Mugwi for giving him a weapon that suited his unique martial style. Internal energy flow was key to driving the heavy blade without fatiguing the arms. Refining internal art cultivation was essential for every high-level technique. True martial progress required harmonizing internal chi with physical form. Mugwi praised their growing understanding, satisfied with their overall development. The Great Truth Sect's fallback plans completely collapsed following their defeat. The territorial rights were officially restored to the Fresh Flower Sect. Sanya promised to protect the branch honorably in his father's footsteps. Mugwi wiped the residual blood off his blade, maintaining a calm expression. Spectators marveled at Mugwi's effortless victory over a seasoned mercenary. The Great Truth leader surrendered all claims, completely outmatched. Mugwi secured full peace for Banan before taking his leave. The terms of the duel were fully honored under the referee's witness. The 5 orbs of great merit provided valuable resources for Mount Hua's revival. The outer branch was secured, proving the main sect's strength once more. Mugwi accepted the orbs with a satisfied grin. The agreement was finalized, driving the hostile faction out of the region. The Great Truth Sect abandoned their outpost, leaving Benin for good. Mugwi recalled fighting the Clouded Tiger Blade in his past life, utilizing that knowledge for an easy victory. His past combat memories provided invaluable strategic foresight in every duel. The match was swift, decisive, and free of unnecessary casualties. The mercenaries' fast sword arts proved useless against Mugwi's refined reaction speed. Sparks flew as the blades collided, leaving the audience breathless. Mugwi suppressed his true power, controlling the pace effortlessly. He countered with precise technique, shattering the enemy's defense. The modified Plum Blossom Ring proved vastly superior in real combat. The judge officially declared Mugwi the victor of the final round. The crowd cheered as the young swordmaster proved Mount Hua's dominance. Mugwi claimed the orbs of great merit, securing a major prize for his sect. Muhua asked why he held back initially, and Mugwi explained he was analyzing enemy forms. Mukiol praised the modified sword forms, eager to practice them further. The group departed quietly under the cover of night to avoid unnecessary commotion. They set out toward Lushan for their final outer sect inspection. Mugwi remained wary of shadowy organizations operating behind regional sects. He knew greater battles lay ahead as Mount Hua expanded its influence. The Dark Flame Pavilion watched from the shadows, plotting their next move. Punishment was dealt to those who failed the secret organization. They withdrew their influence from Benin, choosing to wait for a better opportunity. Mugwi's growing reputation drew the interest of high-level figures across the region. Reaching Lushan, the disciples looked forward to completing their mission. Mugwi led them straight to the blacksmith to equip Mukiol properly. The heavy greatsword was forged to handle high-density internal energy output. Mugwi encouraged Mukiol to master the heavy blade while honoring Mount Hua's spirit. They headed toward the Shining Sect branch to meet leader Boeum. Boeum welcomed them warmly, praising their accomplishments in Pochun and Banan. Mugwi and his companions offered respectful greetings to the senior leader. Boeum explained his war injury, inviting them inside for hospitality. He expressed amazement at 4 young disciples resolving major regional crises. Mujin honored Boeum's wartime sacrifices, showing deep respect for the elder. Boeum laughed modestly, welcoming the young heroes into his sect. The Ghost Swordsman actually saved him. When he lost his arm and was about to be killed, Dogoeon appeared and killed the demonic warrior. He is certain Dogoeon saved many others in the exact same way. Mugwi assumes it was just a coincidence, but the warrior insists otherwise. The Ghost Swordsman seemed to run wild across the battlefield, yet he saw everything clearly, striking only the enemy's weak points to ensure allies were saved. It was no accident that he killed that demonic warrior. Though he does not know him personally, he is convinced Dogoeon did it to keep as many allies alive as possible. He feels too embarrassed for them to thank him when he only survived because of Dogoeon, yet he expresses his gratitude regardless. If the Sword Saint of Mount Hua and the Ghost Swordsman could see them now, he is certain they would be proud and urge them to keep moving forward. Mugwi inwardly finds the exchange embarrassing, while Boeum cuts in to say enough with past stories after Pochun, Banan, and now Lushan. He assumes they came to inspect the outer sects of Mount Hua, apologizing while reassuring them that the Shining Sect has no issues, as he never lets problems fester. Mugwi politely replies that having no trouble is a good thing and there is no need to apologize, prompting Boeum to thank him and urge complete honesty. Boeum admits he would be bored and disappointed traveling all this way only to find no fights, understanding their feelings as a fellow warrior of the Murim. Sipping his tea, Mugwi realizes Boeum is not a sect leader for nothing since he saw right through him, while Manhwa points out that Lushan is famous for hot springs. They can enjoy the springs without unnecessary danger, especially since first-generation disciples of the Zongnan sect are already hunting the assassin. Boeum offers to take them to a grand hot spring if the killer is caught before they leave Lushan, but Mugwi wonders why Boeum acts so nonchalant while a killer remains at large. It seems contradictory for someone who claims not to let problems fester to do absolutely nothing about an active murderer. It feels as though Boeum is trying to stall them, convincing Mugwi that the leader of the Shining Sect is hiding something and needs to be watched closely. Though he does not know the secret yet, Mugwi decides not to rush, knowing Zongnan is already pursuing the killer. The immediate focus shifts back to training the group, with Mugwi resolving to push them relentlessly after neglecting their regimen recently. Mugwi notes that Mukyol strikes with far more weight and power using his greatsword, though the extra force comes at a cost. He warns Mukyol that a faster enemy will exploit his reduced speed, meaning even a single mistake with a heavy blade can prove fatal. Feinting with the sheath before striking at the legs with the actual blade is clever, but obvious tricks will not work against skilled foes. Sparring with Manhwa proves challenging due to her sharp natural senses, though Mugwi notes her innate talent lacks refined training. He advises Manhwa to stay calm instead of chaotic, then turns his attention to Mujin, whose senses are solid despite being less sharp than Manhwa. Mujin stays calm like Mukyol and excels in formal duels, yet he possesses a critical flaw that renders his technical skill useless. During the practice, Mujin hesitates and gets hit, prompting Manhwa to remark on how painful the strike looked. Mugwi pinpoints Mujin's core weakness. He fears harming others more than dying, a fatal flaw when facing a true enemy. If Mujin cannot overcome this hesitation, he will endanger his allies and must be removed from the vanguard in future battles. Ending the session, Mugwi reminds them that active practice is the only true shortcut to overcoming their flaws. Boeum approaches late at night, expressing admiration for Mugwi's dedicated physical training when many martial artists neglect basic strength. Mugwi calls physical conditioning as crucial as swordplay, which reminds Boeum of Mayono, the king of the Iron Mountain Fist. Boeum then asks Mugwi for a strange favor, abruptly asking if Mugwi could kill him right then and there. Mugwi pauses before answering that it would not be difficult, causing Boeum to quickly clarify that he meant a full-intent spar, not actual murder. Impressed by Mugwi's direct response, Boeum requests the intense duel, which Mugwi accepts as a chance to probe Boeum's hidden motives. Boeum insists that both fighters must attack with genuine lethal intent to mimic real combat. After the exchange, Boeum praises Mugwi for exploiting the fact that Boeum is limited to using only his left hand. Mugwi explains that Boeum overcompensated with heavy strikes to cover up his unfamiliarity with left-handed swordplay. Boeum admits he is operating at half capacity while adapting to his offhand, a transition Mugwi acknowledges as exceptionally difficult. Mugwi advises Boeum to focus on precision and thrusts rather than forcing raw power due to impatience. Boeum takes the advice enthusiastically as Mugwi notes that neither of them went all out during their spar. Boeum remarks that Mugwi held back significantly, to which Mugwi admits going further would have caused real injury. Thanking Mugwi for the valuable combat advice, Boeum takes his leave for the night. Mugwi realizes Boeum's real goal was testing whether Mugwi was strong enough to fight alongside him against the assassin. This suggests Boeum knows the enemy is far more dangerous than a routine murderer. Mugwi reflects on the infamous assassin known as Hundred Faces, a master of disguise who caused chaos throughout the Murim. Few ever saw his real face, and his habit of impersonating sect leaders earned him a terrifying reputation. He would murder figures, assume their identities, and manipulate entire factions into blood feuds. He inflicted horrific acts on those close to his targets, operating entirely without a backing organization. In his past life, Dogoeon wounded Hundred Faces after the killer disguised himself as Yunho, but the monster escaped into hiding. The current killings lack the signature scale of Hundred Faces, raising questions about who is truly responsible. Why would Boeum be so deeply alarmed by mere rumors unless he possessed insider knowledge? Reasoning that the original monster would be too old, Mugwi suspects the active killer is actually a disciple of Hundred Faces. To gauge the killer's strength, Mugwi decides to see which Zongnan sect members are assigned to the hunt. It would be ideal if Zongnan handles the threat without requiring his intervention. Elsewhere, Zongnan disciples examine Madip's sword marks in the ground, confirming the killer presence nearby. Observing them from afar, Mugwi recognizes 3 first-generation Zongnan disciples whose combined strength rivals an elder. First-generation disciples represent the backbone of major sects, often producing future leaders. For Mount Hua, that generation included Yunho, the legendary sword saint. The Zongnan sect stands as a premier faction in Shaanxi alongside Mount Hua. Just as Mount Hua had Yunho, Zongnan boasts its own elite senior disciples. Among Zongnan elite stands a warrior celebrated as their greatest disciple. Ilmu introduces herself politely upon meeting the Mount Hua group. Ilsu, another first-generation Zongnan disciple, greets Mugwi with formal respect. Ailan introduces himself next, and Mugwi bows modestly while acknowledging their senior status. Mugwi notes that having Ilmu present alongside Ilsu and Ailan makes this high-level team formidable. Boehm apologizes for keeping the Zongnan presence confidential due to mission secrecy. He invites everyone to sit down and discuss the situation. Ilmu explains they delayed their strategy meeting so Mugwi could be included. Mugwi asks if joining the briefing is appropriate given the secret nature of the operation. Ilmu welcomes his assistance and returns to detailing the target. She reveals there were 5 killers originally. 2 were slain, but 3 fled. The surviving assassins split up, slowing the pursuit significantly. The targets are masters of disguise, making visual identification nearly impossible. However, Zongnan's sect leader crafted a special compound allowing them to track the killers by scent. The medicine tracks the faint lingering smell of blood rather than individual body odor. The main limitation is pinpointing an exact target within a crowded area. Boehm asks for clarification on how this affects their search. Ilmu discloses that at least 1 killer is currently hidden inside the Shining Sect grounds. Boehm promises his full cooperation despite his missing arm. Ilmu notes that alcohol was stolen at every crime scene, revealing a pattern. They deduce the culprit is a boastful individual who loves to drink. Mugwi adds that leaving obvious clues proves the killer is reckless and arrogant. Ilmu confirms that this arrogance is the exact weakness they plan to exploit. They intend to host a banquet stocked with fine alcohol to lure the suspect out. Since a crowded feast favors the killer, Zongnan plans to turn the gathering into a trap. She reveals a sleeping gas capsule designed to knock out the crowd once the killer is identified. By subduing bystanders safely, they can isolate and subdue the target. Boehm agrees to host the gathering immediately to catch the killer off guard. Hours later, Boehm raises his glass to toast the assembly. He toasts the brave disciples of Mount Hua and the righteous warriors of Zongnan. Cheers to their shared health and victory. Mugwi blends into the feast while remaining vigilant not to draw suspicion onto himself. Noticing Mujin nervously touching his nose, Mugwi scolds him silently before Boehm stands up. Boehm excuses himself early for morning training, signaling Zongnan that the operation is underway. Zongnan disciples communicate via voice transmission, realizing the killer either skipped the party or is pretending to sleep. Mugwi overhears the transmission, realizing Zongnan now suspects Boehm himself is the imposter. They remain uncertain whether the real Boehm was replaced entirely. Ilmu stays behind while Ilsu and Ailan track Boehm down. Mugwi requests that Ilmu protect the younger disciples and guests during the ambush. Ilmu agrees and warns Mugwi to remain cautious during the coming clash. Boehm confronts the pursuers, realizing his cover is blown while Mugwi acknowledges the fake close deception. The Zongnan disciples demand the imposter surrender now that his identity is exposed. Mugwi pressures the killer to drop the mask and face them openly. Mugwi scoffs at the idea that simple scent tracking could trap a high-level assassin. If tracking scent was that easy, 100 faces would have been captured decades ago. One disciple checks on his partner, who shakes off a minor blow. Mugwi is relieved the attack was not fatal. He welcomes the opportunity to test his martial arts against a formidable opponent. Boehm points out that while they found suspects, 1 killer remains unaccounted for. Mugwi assures him that warnings have already been sent regarding the missing female assassin. The assassin is stunned that the Mount Hua disciples did not fall unconscious from the gas. Mujin explains that Mugwi warned them in advance to prepare countermeasures. Muhua scorns the killer for relying on sleeping gas like a coward. The assassin watches in disbelief as Mujin blows wet cloth plugs out of his nose. They block their nasal passages with damp rags to filter out the toxin. They feign sleep, luring the assassin directly into their counter-ambush. The female killer asks if the 3 of them truly intend to fight her. She scoffs at Mukiol's heavy strike, claiming none of them can entertain her. She despises weak opponents and boring fights. She tells them not to throw their lives away needlessly. She offers Mukol and Mujin a deal to abandon Muhua and walk away unharmed. She promises to spare their lives if they betray their companion. Mugwi finds the assassin behavior repulsive, observing that she is not masking her true strength. He notes her mastery over facial alteration and bone-shifting arts used for disguises. Such techniques require observing the victim closely to replicate their form. This confirms the killers directly encountered the Zongnan disciples face-to-face. The fact that they mimic Zongnan members so brazenly points toward a larger plot. Mugwi asks if an organization is backing them, causing the killer to laugh at his sharp deduction. She confirms they clashed with Zongnan first-generation disciples directly. Though 2 assassins died, they slaughtered the Zongnan disciples rather than fleeing. Mugwi calls her story an absurd lie based on their actual combat performance. Laughing, the assassin draws a blade and asks how he explains her weapon. Mugwi inspects the blade, recognizing an authentic Zongnan weapon. Few blacksmiths are capable of forging official weapons for a major sect like Zongnan. Forging a convincing replica would take far too much time. The weapon is genuine, proving it was looted from fallen Zongnan warriors. Mugwi wonders how warriors of their mediocre level could defeat elite disciples. The assassin points out that skill varies wildly within any group. She reveals their senior disciple is a monster who surpassed their master at a young age. It was that senior disciple who single-handedly slaughtered the Zongnan elite. Boeum gapes in shock as Mugwi moves at speeds the assassin cannot even perceive. Realizing his disciples are outmatched against the senior killer, Mugwi abandons testing his skills to rush to their side. Manhwa draws her blade, ready to strike first. Mujin panics, warning that attacking is suicide since their combined efforts failed to draw a drop of blood. He begs them to flee, comparing their struggle to ants trying to stop a human step. Drawing their blades against such power will only result in total annihilation. Internal doubt consumes Mujin, telling him his helplessness stems from insufficient training. He tries to convince himself that survival comes first so they can train harder later. He blames his lack of courage on unpreparedness to justify standing idle. Mukiel tells Mujin to escape and report back while he stays behind to buy time. He insists Mujin must survive to carry news back to the Mount Hua main sect. Mujin sees Mukiel's sacrifice as logical confirmation that running away is right. He tries to accept retreat as the only rational choice. Yet he wonders why his companions choose to bleed and fight against impossible odds. He feels ashamed that Mukiel's words gave him relief instead of anger. He questions why he is the only one trembling. Mugwi words echo in his mind, suggesting Mujin is lying to himself out of buried trauma. The past was so terrifying that he buried the memory deep within his subconscious. To move forward, Mujin must remember why he picked up a sword in the first place. Every action has a purpose, and he must discover his own truth. Mujin forces himself to recall the original moment he took up the blade. He remembers the horrific, one-sided slaughter of his family. His family could only cling helplessly to the killer's robes as they were cut down. Their pitiful resistance failed to stop the blades severing limbs and throats. He watched his loved ones die, but terror choked his rage, filling him with self-loathing. He swore to learn martial arts so he would never freeze in fear again. He trained relentlessly with the sword to build strength. Holding a blade became his shield against fear and anxiety. He convinced himself that more training was the answer to everything. He believed he had forged away his cowardice on the training ground. He told himself he had conquered his past weakness. He insisted to himself that he was a changed warrior. He used the excuse of insufficient training to hide his lingering fear. Blaming lack of practice was easier than facing his cowardice. He kept repeating that lie like a mantra. Yet his companions stand firm without hesitation against terrifying monsters. He realizes feeling relief at Mukiel's offer to sacrifice himself proves he hasn't changed. He is still the same helpless child who let fear overpower his rage. Fear chokes his anger even when those he cares about are slaughtered before his eyes. He continues hiding behind excuses about training. He tried to run away without shedding a drop of blood. What exactly has he ever overcome? Did he master the sword only to remain a coward? Anger erupts within him as he rejects running away any longer. His resistance might be pitiful, but he will take a stand. His family fought injustice to the death without backing down. He picked up the sword to be like them, promising never to flee again. The assassin sneers as Mujin steps forward to fight. Mugwi arrives at high speed, apologizing for his late appearance. The killer wonders what became of her allies fighting near Boeum. Mugwi tells his disciples to hold on just a little longer. He promises to finish the fight in an instant. The assassin finds Mugwi's confidence amusing. She mockingly praises his brave front. She enjoys bold opponents and encourages him to entertain her. She hopes he will not disappoint her expectation. Mugwi takes a stance, refusing to underestimate her. He focuses purely on executing a swift, lethal strike. Streamlining his movements, he channels maximum focus into his blade. The assassin is delighted to see genuine sword energy radiating from his weapon. She admits he possesses real skill beyond simple bravery. Boeum watches from afar, realizing why Mugwi rushed off. He sees Mugwi engaging the senior assassin directly. Boeum knows his single-arm state would only hinder Mugwi in high-level battle. He shifts his focus to securing the safety of the young Mount Hua disciples. The assassin is stunned when a shockwave from Mugwi blade shatters her palm technique. Infuriated, she vows to stop playing gentle with him. She mocks him when his internal energy fails to withstand her strike. Their energies clashed, and her overwhelming internal force easily dominated. Expecting him to be paralyzed by internal injury, she moves in for the kill. Instead, she looks down in disbelief at Mugwi blade impaling her chest. She cannot comprehend how she lost when her energy and martial skill were superior. Even as her energy overwhelmed him, Mugwi never panicked for a fraction of a second. He maintained absolute composure, waiting for the precise moment she opened her guard. She admits complete defeat. Mugwi asks if any other disciples of Hundred Faces remain active. She reveals that all disciples of Hundred Faces died in this operation. Mugwi assumes this marks the end of the murders. She laughs, warning him that the death of the disciples will not stop the carnage. He is foolish to think the killings end here. She states that everyone wrongly assumes her master is dead. Mugwi asks if Hundred Faces is still alive. Though he vanished after fleeing years ago, Hundred Faces did not perish. He has been training in seclusion, attaining levels far beyond. Twisting his sword, Mugwi demands the location of Hundred Faces. She laughs as life fades, telling him it matters little. Her master resides in a realm beyond Mugwi reach. Mugwi presses her for clarity, suspecting a ploy to stall for time. With her last breath, she refuses to divulge the secret. Later, Mugwi checks on Mujin, telling him to care for his unhealed wounds. Mujin asks about the outcome of the battle against the assassins. He knows Mugwi took on the deadliest opponent alone. Mugwi confirms all assassins were eliminated and a message was dispatched to Zongnan. Zongnan reinforcement will arrive shortly, while Mukiol and Muhua are already back to light training. He hands Mujin a medicinal plum drink to assist recovery. Mujin apologizes for struggling, expressing relief that he survived with only a single wound. He acknowledges that every disciple chose to fight of their own free will. Mugwi never expected them to blindly throw away their lives on orders. Still, Mujin feels responsible for the danger his companions faced. He announces his intention to step down as leader once they return to Mount Hua. Mukiol told Mugwi that Mujin was the only one who landed a blow on the killer. Mujin is shocked to hear he successfully struck the opponent. Mugwi admits he missed the exact details since he arrived later. Mujin wonders if Mugwi is teasing him instead of offering direct praise. Mugwi explains that the size of the wound matters less than Mujin mental growth. Overcoming martial bottlenecks does not always require grand epiphanies. Often, a subtle change in mindset or a single decisive action breaks the barrier. Landing only a scratch was natural given the assassin's extreme power. Mugwi assures him that next time Mujin will realize he has completely conquered his past. Cutting the speech short, Mugwi urges Mujin to join the others. When Mujin asks if they are heading to practice, Mugwi calls it a special form of training. He ushers Mujin along, noting everyone is waiting for them. Mugwi states that recovery is paramount, making hot springs the best training. Mukiol remarks on how effectively the warm mineral water aids physical healing. Mujin asks incredulously if soaking in a hot bath counts as real training. Mugwi expresses gratitude that Dogoeon provided access to top-tier hot springs. Since Muhua had been begging to visit the hot springs, going earlier was the right move. He is certain Muhua is enjoying her time in the women baths. Mukiol asks how Mugwi slew the senior assassin, to which Mugwi modestly claims luck. Mukiol notes the female assassin's strength seemed even greater than Mugwi's own. Mugwi agrees with Mukiol's assessment. She was indeed powerful enough to slay Zongnan first-generation disciples. In a straightforward duel, winning would have been unlikely, but her technical flaws cost her. Regardless, her raw martial force was immense. In terms of pure physical stats and internal energy, she outclassed him. Her ability to dislocate her own joints mid-strike to counterattack surprised him. She possessed raw combat instincts alongside martial technique. Had she survived, she would have eventually surpassed Hundred Faces in threat level. Mugwi's fatal strike succeeded because her arrogance made her drop her guard after their blades clashed. When Mugwi's arm twisted from the pressure, she mistakenly assumed the duel was over. Mugwi forced his dislocated arm forward to deliver the lethal thrust. Had she fought with absolute lethality, she would have targeted his head immediately. Her arrogance blinded her to the fact that a true warrior fights until death. It seems foolish that such an elite master died due to overconfidence. That arrogance was the sole reason Mugwi survived the encounter. Mujin realizes the extreme sacrifice Mugwi made to secure victory. Mugwi instructs them to reflect deeply on their combat mindset. Raw strength is useless if you end up dead. Never forget that human life is fragile and can end instantly. A warrior must remain forever humble. Mugwi inwardly admits he needed that lesson as well. His current vessel remains far too weak. Fighting without his original sword and relying on unfamiliar techniques limited his power. It was his first true life or death battle in this body. Even considering those factors, his current limits are undeniable. He fell into arrogance himself by trying to test skills against a dangerous killer. He was just as guilty of overconfidence as the assassin. He still has a long path ahead to regain true mastery. Being unable to train while his arm heals frustrates him deeply. Mugwi senses an extraordinary presence approaching the hot springs. An elderly man enters, asking politely if he may share the bath. Mugwi welcomes him while inwardly questioning the old man's identity. The elder correctly identifies them as Mount Hua disciples just by examining their musculature. Mugwi introduces himself as Mugwi, stunned that the stranger read their sect origin at a glance. The old master commends them for maintaining physical strength training, unlike most modern youth. The old man pauses mid-sentence to stare closely at Mugwi. He asks if Mugwi is indeed the disciple of Yunho. He remarks that Mugwi eyes closely resemble those of the Ghost Swordsman. Mugwi wonders who this mysterious elder is to speak so casually of both legends. Mugwi claims he took training advice from the Ghost Swordsman to heart. The old man laughs heartily upon hearing Dogoeon gave training tips. He chuckles at how Dogoeon always feigned indifference while secretly caring for others. He fondly calls the Ghost Swordsman a self-centered softy for offering guidance. Apologizing to them, he mentioned they must have been startled by his sudden outburst. He brushed it off, revealing that he was actually the one who had taught Dogoeon his training regimen. Shocked, they asked if he had truly instructed Dogoeon, the greatest warrior of the unorthodox faction. If he had trained someone that formidable, he had to be a renowned master himself. At that moment, Mugwi stood up, bowed respectfully, and offered a sincere apology for failing to recognize him sooner. He offered a formal greeting to Mayano, the king of the Iron Mountain Fist. Hearing that title, the others gasped. This man possessed the heaviest strike in the martial world and stood as an undisputed master of hand-to-hand combat. While other warriors meditated or honed their blades to attain enlightenment, Mayano devoted his entire life solely to strengthening his physical frame. He asked if they recognized his title, admitting with a chuckle that his name was Mayano, though the martial world knew him as the king of the Iron Mountain Fist. He reassured them that he had no intention of causing discomfort and urged everyone to relax. Introducing the young man beside him as his disciple, Taikong offered a respectful greeting to the group. Mugwi noted internally that he had no idea Mayano took on an apprentice of this caliber. The youth possessed an imposing aura, clearly capable of overpowering most martial artists in battle. Mayano explained they were journeying to build real-world experience, as the boy had spent his entire life isolated in mountain training. Mujin nodded in understanding, and politely inquired how their training journey had progressed so far. Taikong replied directly, stating he had fought 43 opponents and emerged victorious every single time. Mujin chuckled nervously, admitting that such a streak was genuinely impressive. Mugwi thought to himself that such results were expected, given the master who raised him. Taikong confessed that his last duel was razor-thin, admitting he would have lost if his opponent's blade had not shattered. Mugwi countered immediately, stating that a sword is merely an extension of the wielder. A shattered weapon only reflects a failure in skill and maintenance. No true warrior in the martial world wastes sympathy over a broken blade. Mujin agreed, noting that preserving one weapon falls entirely on the fighter. Regardless, securing 43 consecutive victories was a remarkable feat. Curious, Mujin added that any opponent capable of pushing him to the brink must be exceptional. He asked who that adversary was. Taikong mentioned it would be easier to describe the person rather than struggle with the name. He identified him as the personal disciple of Dogoeon. Mayano stroked his chin, trying to recall the boy name, wondering if it was Goyul. His name sounded similar to his master, and Taikang reiterated that he would have lost had that sword stayed intact. Even so, as the young men pointed out, a warrior must safeguard his gear. Since maintaining a weapon is basic discipline, the outcome was entirely legitimate. Mugwi felt a surge of irritation, sensing that Taikong was unsatisfied without a flawless triumph. Driven by interest, Mugwi asked him to detail how the clash actually unfolded. The bout between Goyul, disciple of Dogoeon, and Taikong, apprentice to Mayano, was brief and brutal. It lasted exactly 100 intense exchanges. Goyul blade failed to withstand the sheer impact of Taikong's strike and shattered. That single moment decided the entire match. Mugwi was inwardly furious. He fumed at how his past disciple could break his weapon and lose to Mayano's student. Mugwi vowed that whenever he crossed paths with Goyul again, he would work him to the bone. Mayano recalled telling both grandmasters back then to train disciples and let them test their skills. Dogoeon had boasted that his own disciple would easily crush Mayano apprentice. He wondered what expression Dogoeon would make if he knew the actual result. Mugwi caught the reference to two masters. He realized Mayano was referring to himself as Dogoeon and his old friend Yunho. While Dogoeon's disciple had fallen, the disciple of the Sword Saint stood right here. Mayano sighed, stating it was a tragedy that he could not even tease his old rival now. They should not have perished so early. Shifting the mood, Mayano asked Mugwi for his thoughts. Considering this fateful meeting, he proposed a sparring match against his disciple. Mugwi accepted instantly, telling him to set the time and place. He expressed readiness to cross blades right then and there. Mayano grinned at his confidence and agreed to hold it immediately. He turned to Taikong to check his readiness. Taikong nodded eagerly, stating his body was itching for a real challenge. Mayano declared the matter settled. He apologized for the improvised setting, though the open space served well enough. Mugwi assured him the location was perfectly suitable. Mayano expressed appreciation for his understanding. However, he requested one small favor beforehand. He asked to gauge Mugwi output firsthand out of curiosity. He added that Mugwi was free to decline if it felt intrusive. Mugwi shrugged off the concern, agreeing without hesitation. He simply asked how Mayano intended to measure his strength. Raising his palm, Mayano instructed him to strike it with full force whenever ready. He invited him to strike without holding back. Mujin worried internally, knowing Mugwi's left arm had not fully healed. He wondered why his martial brother was pushing himself to such extremes. Mugwi cared little about Taikong's actual prowess. He simply wanted to wipe the dismissive attitude off Mayano's face. Even with an injured body, he was determined to deliver an undeniable strike. He had more than enough strength left to shatter that smug demeanor. Absorbing the blow, Mayano commended him, stating he truly carried Yunho's legacy. Impressed by the power, he told Mugwi to catch his breath before the duel began. As Mayano told Taikong to prepare, Mugwi stood confused by the old master's lukewarm reaction. He had expected Mayano to be visibly shaken by his strength. Instead, the old master remained entirely composure, which felt unnerving. In reality, Mayano was secretly astonished that Yunho had raised such a monstrous prodigy. He cursed his late friend internally for keeping such a talent hidden. Yet he remained confident that his own apprentice possessed matching caliber. Unsheathing his sword, Mugwi noted the fierce glare in Taikong's eyes. It was the kind of spirit he took immense pleasure in crushing. As Mugwi signaled readiness, Mujin observed his unusual stance with keen interest. Taikong declared the match underway and lunged forward. Mugwi likened the oncoming pressure to a massive boulder crashing down. The weight of the attack proved he was Mayano's true successor. Still, raw momentum alone was far from sufficient. Leaping backward, Mugwi acknowledged the force behind the strike, though it fell short of defeating him. He glanced down at his left hand. He had intended to parry every blow to embarrass Mayano. However, the injury to his left arm was far more severe than anticipated. Taking heavy impacts directly would risk permanent damage. Taikong noticed Mugwi suddenly guarding his left side while dodging. Realizing the opening, Taikong targeted that injured left arm immediately. Mugwi noted how quickly the boy focused on his weakness. Discerning his physical state after only a few exchanges demonstrated impressive combat instincts. He had to acknowledge the young warrior's tactical awareness. Mugwi had originally planned to drag out the match casually. Given his physical condition, prolonged engagement was no longer viable. Instead, he resolved to end the duel with a masterclass technique. Taikong viewed the incoming slash as ordinary at first glance. Yet he suddenly realized there was no trajectory to block or dodge. An oppressive weight descended upon him like an unyielding wall. Overwhelmed by martial intent, Taikong fell to his knees. He openly conceded defeat. Mayano analyzed the exchange, noting Mugwi halted his blade at the final moment. He projected pure killing intent through mere motion alone. That sheer presence completely broke Taikong's fighting spirit. It proved the Mount Hua disciple operated at a level capable of breaking an enemy resolve without striking. Mayano reflected that this loss offered an essential lesson for his apprentice. A warrior must experience defeat to understand true growth. This humbling outcome would fuel Taikong's future development. Mayano silently addressed Yunho, asking if he was watching from above. His successor had achieved a flawless victory. By teaching Taikong the weight of defeat, Mugwi acted like a true senior. Mayano felt obligated to return the favor as a martial elder. Taikong bowed, thanking Mugwi for the valuable match. He acknowledged gaining profound insight from the experience. Mugwi accepted the gesture casually. He expressed hope that Taikong emerged without physical injury. Mayano stepped in, pointing out that Mugwi was the one carrying severe harm. He insisted on examining Mugwi's damaged left arm immediately. Muhua expressed shock that Mugwi engaged in a duel right after leaving the hot springs, before they eventually returned to the Shining Sect. She pointed out that 4 full hours had passed since then. She demanded to know why they had abandoned her for so long. Mukiel sheepishly admitted he simply forgot. Mujin added that the excitement of the duel made them lose track of time. Furious, Muhua scolded them for wandering off without a single word. She vented about how deeply worried she had been. Mukiel apologized sincerely for the oversight. He defended himself by reiterating how captivating the match was. Muhua scoffed, asking how remarkable a simple match could possibly be. Mukiel revealed the opponent was the apprentice of the Iron Mountain Fist. He explained they were traveling together while Mayano treated Mugwi. Examining the arm, Mayano remarked the internal damage was severe. He was astonished Mugwi fought while carrying such a heavy injury. He asked what could have inflicted such deep trauma. The wound clearly caused intense agonizing pain. He instructed Mugwi to endure the upcoming treatment. It was the only way to restore his arm. Had treatment been delayed any longer, the consequences would be dire. His left arm might have been permanently crippled. He noted that feeling pain was a sign the nerves were still salvageable. Mayano shook his head in disbelief. He pressed further on what transpired. Few martial artists possess the skill to inflict such precise damage. Mugwi stated he had encountered a notorious assassin. Mayano asked if he meant 100 Faces himself. Mugwi clarified that he fought the direct disciples of 100 Faces. Mayano expressed surprise, having assumed that monster was long dead. It seemed the assassin had not only evaded his pursuers but also raised pupils. He managed to train them entirely in secret. Mayano asked if those disciples were truly formidable. Mugwi noted they possessed enough skill to slay senior disciples of the Zongnan sect. Mayano paused to absorb the gravity of those words. He realized what Mugwi achievement truly implied. Slaying an opponent capable of killing Zongnan elders required immense strength. Mugwi downplayed the claim immediately. He insisted the outcome was largely due to fortune. He merely seized an opening when the assassin lowered her guard. Mayano countered that exploiting such an opening required high-level mastery. He added that Mugwi was fortunate to escape such a deadly encounter with only one injury. He admired how Mugwi accepted a sparring match despite carrying such pain. Mayano felt a strong desire to offer assistance in return. He asked Mugwi for his thoughts on receiving guidance. He offered to impart a portion of his martial wisdom. In the realm of martial arts, theoretical understanding alone can only carry a warrior so far. Techniques must be carved into muscle memory through relentless practice and real combat. The fastest catalyst for growth lies in surviving life or death battles. Mugwi reflected that his rapid progress stemmed from memories of his past life as Dogoeon. Yet martial mastery was an endless path. He needed to guard against complacency, as he had not yet fully mastered Mount Hua swordsmanship. He did not require new techniques so much as genuine battle experience. Clashing against high-level experts was the optimal method to refine his martial art. Sparring with an established master like Mayano provided an invaluable opportunity. Mayano recalled how Dogoeon had once sought similar harsh training methods in the past. Yet Mugwi had collapsed after a single blow, potentially missing out on deeper instruction. Mugwi assured him that the outcome was perfectly fine. Mayano realized Mugwi favored practical exchange over formal lectures. Respecting his choice, Mayano agreed to limit his output to match Mugwi level during their clash. Surprised during the exchange, Mayano realized Mugwi had successfully altered his fist momentum. Mugwi cursed mentally, recalling how the old master claimed he would hold back yet charged like a raging bull. He had barely survived the overwhelming strike. Waking up later, Mugwi discovered a written note left behind by Mayano expressing sincere apologies. The letter explained that Mayano had not felt such thrill in battle for decades. Consequently, he unintentionally released more internal energy than intended. He asked for forgiveness regarding the overbearing force. Mayano mentioned he had stabilized Mugwi's internal injuries before leaving. Urgent matters forced him to depart to seek new sparring opponents for Taikong. He expressed hope that Mugwi would understand his sudden departure. The letter noted that Mayano reflected on their clash while waiting for him to awaken. He praised the defensive motion Mugwi used to redirect his strike. He described it as a formless flower dispersing incoming attacks like scattered petals. Though unfamiliar with its name, he recognized it as an advanced Mount Hua skill. He asked Mugwi to share the title of that technique during their next encounter. While magnificent, Mayano pointed out that the execution still contained flaws. He detailed his critique of those weaknesses along with potential fixes. He also included a novel training regimen he had recently devised. Mugwi noted that the letter contained 1 page of critiques and 9 pages of intense training routines. He admitted that Mayano's insights into his technique were remarkably sharp. Smiling slightly, Mugwi realized the old master had taken a genuine liking to him. Mayano was never one to withhold knowledge from promising juniors. Yet offering such comprehensive guidance without incentive was rare. He was doing this not merely out of respect for Yunho memory. He recognized Mugwi's innate potential. Finding a wanderer like Mayano was usually impossible. Crossing paths by chance and receiving his guidance felt like a stroke of destiny. As Mugwi considered setting the brutal routine aside, Manhwa slid the door open, noting he was awake. She mentioned she had been planning to wake him shortly regardless. She added that she disliked disturbing his rest unnecessarily. However, representatives from the Zongnan sect had just arrived. Along the trail, Taikong remarked that Mayano seemed unusually quiet since leaving the hot springs. Mayano asked if his distraction was really that obvious. Taikong nodded, confirming his master seemed preoccupied. It was unlike his usual carefree demeanor. Mayano teased that Taikong was the one fixated on Mugwi. Asking if he was brooding over his loss, Taikong asked how he guessed so easily. Mayano chuckled, stating a master could easily read his own disciple heart. He advised him not to dwell excessively on the defeat. Having identified his shortcomings, he simply needed to channel that focus into training. Taikong nodded in agreement. He then asked what was occupying Mayano's thoughts, to which the master dismissed it as nothing. Nothing significant. He admitted he was simply reminiscing about old companions. Taikong expressed genuine surprise that a master devoted solely to martial arts had friends. Mayano feigned offense, asking what that was supposed to mean. Examining the returned garments, the elder identified the embroidered insignia of 3 swords on the collar. He confirmed these belongings belonged to Ilmu, Ilsu, and Eilon. Bowing deeply, he expressed profound remorse for the tragedy caused by their shortcomings. On behalf of his sect leader, Il-ha-yun conveyed deep gratitude to Mount Hua and the Shining Sect. He assured them that the Zongnan sect would never forget this debt of gratitude. Having retrieved the relics of their fallen comrades, the senior Zongnan disciples prepared for departure, with their business fully concluded. The Mount Hua group planned to visit the hot springs one final time before heading home. However, an unexpected statement from the Zongnan elder halted their relaxation plans. Il-ha-yun reminded them that the six-stroke sword tournament was approaching rapidly. He expressed high expectations for the junior disciples to learn from one another during the competition. Muhua noted that with the Zongnan group departed, matters were settled. She urged everyone to head to the hot springs at last. Mugwi instructed them to pack their belongings for immediate departure instead. Muhua asked in surprise why he was rushing. She pointed out that he had agreed to the hot spring visit moments ago. She wondered if his injuries were causing him discomfort. He acknowledged that he had indeed agreed earlier. However, hearing about the upcoming six-stroke sword tournament changed priorities. They needed to return immediately to begin training. The six-stroke sword tournament was a historic tradition. It was designed to foster fellowship between Mount Hua and the Zongnan sect. The event earned its name because both sects shared a foundational sword form. Both practiced their own variations of the six-stroke sword technique. Martial arts represent far more than physical movements. They embody a sect core philosophy, values, and mindset. Hence, foundational techniques encapsulate the true spirit of an order. How these two distinct factions came to share the exact same foundation remained a subject of speculation. Endless debates had taken place over centuries. Some claimed both sects originated from a single ancient school. Others believed two disciples under the same master parted ways to establish separate sects. Historical records were lost, leaving the absolute truth unknown. Yet neither side felt a need to obsess over origin stories. What mattered was the enduring harmony between both factions. Whether forged by harsh external threats or the noble nature of their founders, their bond held strong. Instead of feuding over overlapping martial roots, they chose mutual cooperation. Thus, the six-stroke sword tournament was established, with growth and friendship as its guiding principles. The tradition endured across generations. Through this alliance, both orders expanded their prestige in the martial world. Victory and defeat were secondary to mutual elevation. Muhua asked why Mugwi was so adamant about returning early if winning was unimportant. Mugwi replied bluntly that he simply preferred winning. Muhua fell silent, unable to argue with that logic. A few hours into their journey home, Muhua mentioned hearing chatter among the Shining Sect members. She revealed that their group had been given a joint title. People were calling them the Four Flowers of Mount Hua across the region. She found it exciting to gain fame during their very first expedition. Mugwi advised her not to get carried away. Fame merely meant drawing unnecessary attention from dangerous figures. Scanning their surroundings, Mugwi noticed a narrow trail. Anticipating unwanted scrutiny after recent events, he deliberately selected a secluded route. Yet the path felt suspiciously convenient for far too long. It felt as though they were being covertly funneled despite detecting no hostile presence. There were countless methods to manipulate a target movement. At its core lay the tactic of artificially restricting available choices. When options were removed, travelers naturally walked straight into a trap. He weighed two possibilities in his mind. Either he was being overly paranoid or their tracker was exceptionally sloppy. Given how close they came to disaster with the previous assassin, extra caution was fully warranted. Sensing something amiss, Mugwi ordered the group to turn around immediately. Muhua questioned the sudden backtrack, pointing out his earlier rush to return. She asked if his condition had worsened, but Mugwi dismissed the idea. Mukiel noted that nightfall was approaching quickly. He suggested making camp or picking up the pace before darkness fell. Mugwi pressed them to move faster, leaving no room for hesitation. Suddenly halting, Mugwi commanded everyone to draw weapons, sensing killers lying in ambush. Mugwi noted that assassin methodology followed strict rules. Professional killers never strike without a calculated objective. This was no random encounter along the mountain pass. The threat had been stalking them with lethal intent from the very beginning. Muhua says it is a voice transmission from the senior disciple. He says that a large number of assassins have already surrounded them. It seems another group is lurking nearby as well. There are too many for him to protect while they engage in battle, so he will give them this instruction just once. When fighting an assassin, aim to end them within 3 moves. They carry all sorts of hidden weapons and will not hesitate to drag their enemy to the grave with them. He will go straight after their main squadron. One asks if he just blocked the poison needles by thrusting his sword into the dirt. He notices that someone is missing. He asks where he went. Muhua says she felt something was off about these attackers. She realizes that they are all just kids. Mujin says he knows. However, that does not matter. It makes no difference whether they are young children or their own age. A killer is still a killer, regardless of youth. They would have been killed if they had not struck first. Like it or not, she must understand that carrying a blade means constantly walking the edge of death. Focus on nothing else, as the battle is far from over. An assassin informs the Dark Flame Pavilion Master that fewer than 20 remain. He asks if he should step in. The Master mutters that they are far worse than he anticipated. They may have failed their training halfway through, yet they still received extensive preparation. It matters little if they die here, as they were meant to be disposable guards anyway. Still, it appears they will fail to kill even a single kid from Mount Hua. There is no longer any reason to just watch. He orders his subordinate to execute them all. He fumes, unable to believe he must deploy top-tier assassins just to slaughter a few brats from Mount Hua. He despises admitting it. However, those disciples earned their reputation for a reason. Their skills are formidable. Even so, they ruined his scheme involving the Great Truth Sect, and now vile rumors taint his reputation. That very prowess will drag them into an early grave. He has protected his position for years. He will not lose it today. A single chance remains. He must eliminate them completely to preserve his standing. Wiping out those who interfered with the Great Truth Sect also removes a future threat. Both reasons justify their deaths. In fact, it works out perfectly. Mugwi asks if he enjoys being held like this, calling him a total degenerate. Yet he claims to appreciate degenerates, simply because he loves beating them to a pulp. An assassin asks if he was the only one who heard that voice. His companion denies it. He heard it clearly as well. One notes that the sound came from the Dark Flame Pavilion Master's position. He is certain the Master is fine, but checking would not hurt. He says they will inspect the area before regrouping. The other tells him there is no need to rejoin the main force. They are only hunting down a few pathetic brats. They agree to return shortly afterward. He adds that it should not take them long at all. This involves the art of acupressure points. It is a discipline where specific nodes on the body are struck to induce various effects. The paralysis point, the muting point to strip away speech. Releasing his grip, he spots a token peeking out from the body. The plaque bears the mark of the Overlord's fortress. He remarks that he had wondered what backed the arrogant leader of the Great Truth Sect. Such reckless arrogance. It turns out it was them all along. Now the whole picture becomes crystal clear. The assassins who swarmed over at the noise comprise only a portion. That accounts for roughly half of their total numbers. What a shame. Such numbers are nowhere near enough. They should have brought the Dark Emperor at the very least. He vows to slaughter him right after disposing of his subordinates, so he tells him to sit tight and wait. The immobilized master wonders if this kid is completely insane, demanding to bring forth the Dark Emperor. The Dark Emperor is the sole assassin in the Jianghu operating on the level of Supreme Masters. Bearing such an emperor title requires immense arrogance. He still cannot fathom how his pressure points were struck. Humiliation is only temporary. Losing his pavilion master rank matters little as long as he survives. He plans to retreat to the fortress immediately. Confused, an assassin wonders if he is really fighting a brat. The Mount Hua boy just vanished from sight. He stares as a top-tier assassin is slammed straight through a tree. The air fills with agonized screams. He wonders why only his fellow assassins are screaming. He cannot accept that they are truly being slaughtered by a single youth. Mugwi arrives at the scene. He asks if any of his companions were injured. Manhwa tells him that they are unhurt. They are merely stunned by the identity of their attackers. At first, it was only young novice assassins. Then veteran killers joined the assault. Mugwi dismisses her concerns calmly. He examined the leader token, revealing they belong to the Overlord's fortress. A prestigious sect typically refers to clans holding immense power and influence. They boast deep historical traditions and martial arts mastery. They uphold justice and collective harmony. These are the renowned sects of Sichuan, the Tang clan of Sichuan, the Emi sect, and the Qingcheng sect. They represented that noble standard, at least until the Overlord's fortress rose to power. They refused to align with either the orthodox or unorthodox factions, dreaming instead of conquering and unifying the entire Murim. They eclipsed the prominent Sichuan factions to become the absolute overlord. In response, the traditional sects formed an alliance to suppress them. Thus, the current Sichuan alliance came into existence. Today, the Sichuan alliance and the Overlord's fortress clash in a deadlocked struggle. He previously assumed the Sichuan alliance had effectively contained the fortress. Mugwi clarifies that both sides are merely holding each other at bay. Regardless, a shift in power dynamics seems to have occurred. That shift drove the Overlord's fortress to extend its reach into Shaanxi. Crucially, the Overlord's fortress acts with ruthless precision. He is certain that targeting them was a calculated move. They came thoroughly prepared. Being targeted proves that this confrontation was bound to happen. Discovering this scheme later would have been far more dangerous. It is fortunate that they uncovered it early. Manhwa asks what their next action should be. He tells her they will do nothing directly. Their only course is to report everything to the Mount Hua Sect. This situation exceeds their authority. They must return to Mount Hua without delay. Manhwa points out that darkness still covers the land. He retorts that she can wait for sunrise alone if she prefers. With that, they make a swift return to the Mount Hua Sect. The gatekeepers joyfully announce their return. Mugwi greets them, noting it has been a long time. He addresses them casually as disciples. He states he must meet with the elders immediately. He tells them to gather the others for training. Sect leader Bakyo warmly welcomes them back. He received all dispatch reports alongside messages from the outer branches. He expresses deep pride in their accomplishments. Yet he notes a distinct change in their demeanor. He observes their tattered, battle-worn robes. Gazing at the great sword, he realizes how much hardship they endured. He asks if they are truly uninjured. Mugwi assures him that they are fine. The sect leader asks if their journey was entirely smooth. Mugwi mentions that trouble was minimal, though they ambushed forces from the Overlord's fortress on their return. Bakyo senses the gravity of the matter. He asks him to explain everything from the start. Mugwi nods in agreement. So that is how the events unfolded. Bakyo expresses relief that everyone returned unharmed despite the peril. He promises to handle the situation regarding the Overlord's fortress personally. He tells them not to burden themselves with it. He then remembers a key matter. A formal notice arrived from the blacksmiths. They are ready to forge the plum blossom swords. This signifies that the final blossom ceremony is fast approaching. He assumes they are all familiar with the selection trial. The plum blossom sword is a revered weapon. It is bestowed exclusively upon Mount Hua Swordsman as proof of true mastery. It stands as the ultimate symbol of a Mount Hua warrior. The selection requirement is straightforward. To earn recognition from Mount Hua's finest swordsmen during the ritual, the final blossom ceremony. It is an event where disciples demonstrate their annual progress before the elders. Those who excel earn highest praise. Those who fall short receive stern guidance. Every second-generation disciple dreams of receiving a plum blossom sword during this rite. Even back when he lived as Dogoeon, he was well aware of it. If there is any difference between then and now, it lies in who holds the title of Mount Hua's strongest swordsman. In place of Yunho, Elder Baxian now stands as the benchmark. However, the reason Bakyo addresses this publicly now is likely due to his deep concern for Mukiel. Bakyo states he respects that they have personal reasons for their choices, and he trusts their judgment. Still, that does not stop him from worrying about their future. He admits he might be overstepping, yet he feels compelled to speak. The great sword is completely foreign to Mount Hua's style. Forging an entirely new path is incredibly reckless. It will prove to be more than just difficult. Once he treads too far down that road, turning back will be impossible. He asks if Fukiel was merely being impulsive when choosing it. He asks him if he truly thought it through. Mukiel confirms that he has. Bakyo offers a gentle smile. He notes the complete absence of hesitation in his response. He considers that a good sign. He promises to inform the blacksmiths accordingly, knowing they must be exhausted from traveling. He shares one last piece of news. Stories of the four flowers of Mount Hua are sweeping across Shaanxi. Countless aspiring youths are flocking to Mount Hua hoping to join. Some of them have already encountered the team. Gifts and tributes have been pouring in continuously. Other clans are eager to send their heirs as outer disciples to forge alliances. Their actions sparked this incredible surge in renown. He expresses immense pride in them all. Thanking them, he apologizes for rambling and sends them off to rest. An excited Manhwa urges them to hurry along. She mentions that Yunyun should be waiting over there, referring to the young girl who dreamed of becoming a swordswoman. Mugwi brushes it off, saying he has never met her and prefers to focus on training. Mujin states that he intends to get some rest. Mugwi approves of the idea. They missed their chance to visit the hot springs earlier. He tells him to rest well to make up for it. Watching Mugwi walk off, Mukiel notes that is not the way to the living quarters and wonders where he is headed. An instructor tells the recruits to regulate their breathing and straighten their stance. He highlights Sanha and Yunyun for having flawless posture as examples. He tells the others to observe the difference in form. Mukiel notes that Muzan and other second-generation disciples are overseeing the new recruits. Mugwi remarks on how intensely even young kids are pushing themselves. Yet he sees no second-generation disciples conducting their own training. He can clearly see how lax their training became while his group was risking their lives. He bets these disciples were slacking off completely. They must prepare for both the sword competition and threats from the Overlord's fortress. There is no time to waste. He commands Mukiel to inform the second-generation disciples that morning drills start much earlier tomorrow. Nervously agreeing, Mukiel quietly prays that no one gets severely injured the next day. The disciples bow and pay their respects to the senior disciple. Mugwi notes that it has been a long time since they last gathered. He mentions observing them instruct the third-generation recruits yesterday. Aside from those teaching, none of them were practicing their own skills. The sect leader mentioned plans to send the remaining second-generation disciples into the Jianghu. He stresses that this leaves them with zero time to waste. Mujin reflects in silence, admitting he lied about going to rest. He recalls Mugwi offering to step down as senior disciple to take responsibility for the assassin incident. Hearing that initially sparked his ambition, as he had always wanted the lead position. Yet deep down, he knows only Mugwi is capable of leading them forward. Though he hesitated to step in, he lacked the courage to convince Mugwi directly. So he went straight to the sect leader to resolve the matter. For the future of Mount Hua, Mugwi must remain the senior disciple and guide them. He leads them toward the practice grounds of Mount Hua. Mugwi announces that training will now be conducted using real steel. He warns them to swallow any complaints, as no excuses will be tolerated. Dividing them into 5 squads, he commands everyone to fight with full effort. He will strike with intent to kill, and those who fall behind will forfeit their Jianghu journey. Mujin smiles faintly, guessing Mugwi already discussed this with the sect leader. Even if Mugwi calls his intervention unnecessary, Mujin does not care. The disciples can only truly grow under his lead, so Mujin orders the front row to step forward. As the others clear the area, Musan notices the sudden shift in Mujin. He wonders what Mujin experienced in the Jianghu to smile while wielding live steel. Manhwa observes that Mujin is stepping up without even being asked. Mujin admits to feeling somewhat frustrated regardless. He feels like he forgot something important. Yet the thought escapes his mind completely. Shrugging it off, he decides it must have been trivial. If it were crucial, he would remember, so he focuses entirely on drills. Mugwi instructs that using real blades requires looking beyond basic swordplay. The senior disciple's offhand remains free rather than gripping the hilt. They must remember he strikes with genuine lethal intent. He will spit, kick dirt, or hurl stones to catch them off guard. They cannot afford to be caught unawares when dirty tactics are used. Getting injured during drills benefits no one. Yet the senior disciple will show no mercy regardless of injuries. There is zero room for complaint, no matter how brutal it gets. There is simply no time to feel fear. The moment their guard drops, a cold blade will press against their throat. Rolling on the dirt like a desperate donkey is an old saying in martial culture. It was coined to mock fighters who scramble on the ground, as Murim warriors obsess over dignity. In orthodox sects, martial artists often claim they would rather die than roll in the dirt. That shows how shameful the act is considered. However, that pride is pure foolishness. When facing true death, pride is the very last thing that matters. A warrior must do whatever it takes to survive. Mount Hua shed its autumn robes and wrapped itself in winter white. The induction ceremony for third-generation disciples came to a close. Gazing at the snow-covered peaks, a disciple ponders if he is on the right path. He no longer fears the senior disciple's blade as intensely as before. The grueling training sessions no longer feel utterly unbearable. Of course, that does not mean it has become easy or welcoming. It simply feels manageable compared to where he started. Yet lately, a growing lack of confidence plagues his mind. Months have passed since they began sparring with live steel. Yet he finds himself constantly dodging and running. One quiet terror haunts him above all else: the grim possibility of making no progress despite endless effort. The wall of his own limits. He wonders if he has hit his peak and can go no further, questioning if this meager skill is all he can achieve. He desperately wants to be a proud warrior of Mount Hua. He asks Mugwi directly if he is doing well. Mugwi asks if he remembers their very first live blade spar. Back then, he could barely withstand 5 exchanges. 2 months later, he easily survives 20 exchanges. He even creates openings to counterattack. He used to only flee, unable to see his subtle growth. Yet he has grown unmistakably stronger. Mugwi assures him that he is doing exceptionally well. If this is not true progress, then nothing is. That truth applies not just to him, but to everyone. Relearning martial fundamentals from the ground up. Developing thick calluses on their palms from relentless work. He asks if he thinks those calluses form purely on command. If he practiced diligently, he must never doubt his own effort, even without boasting or trying to prove anything. Time and truth are carved deep into those calluses. The disciple reflects that while the senior disciple's words lacked warmth, they offered deep comfort. They soothed his exhausted, anxious mind. He was right. How could a true man of the sword ever doubt his path before reaching the end? There was no need to worry about it, nor any reason to grow weary. After all, does a blacksmith complain about how much work he has to do? For him, constant training is simply a given. That is how one becomes a true sword of Mount Hua. Once he accepted that, the pain disappeared. It is still difficult at times and doubts still creep in. But now he understands there is no endpoint, only moving forward. This very process is what makes him stronger. That is enough for now. Bakusite, one notes that time flies by. He knows very well how hard everyone has been training. He wants them to show what they have practiced, hoping they will become true swordsmen of Mount Hua. Let the final flower ceremony now begin. One elder remarks that the speech was brief yet impactful. Bakuyo. One replies that it was actually quite simple and boring. He had thought long and hard about what to say. Though it seems none of that preparation mattered in the end. The elder compliments him on a job well done. This final flower ceremony promises to be full of energy. Bakuyo. One agrees. It has been a long time since they had new third-generation disciples. The general atmosphere of the sect had grown somewhat gloomy. The elder says he is looking forward to seeing them. It is refreshing to watch young disciples brimming with vigor. More importantly, however, he wonders who will end up inheriting this sword. Bakuyo. One mentions it must have been a great effort to bring the blade here. He is confident this ceremony will be grand. He agrees and asks if the other elder saw him. The elder replies that he did not. He was worried he might only be a distraction. Watching from a distance is enough for him. Bakuyo. One says he understands the reason even without an explanation. Yet it has been a long time since he last saw his own son, who remains remarkably steadfast. He answers that one cannot wield the plum sword without such resolve. Junyoung instructs them to begin. Mount Hua Sect. One notes that if she is not mistaken, the third-generation disciples will present their 6-move sword technique first. After that, it will be their turn. Mujin Sect. One confirms this is correct, but adds that they will not be performing the 6-move technique. They are skipping straight to the duels. By the way, he asks if she was overseeing the squad that Junyoung is in. She confirms that she is. She smugly believes they are doing so well thanks to her guidance. The next group includes Sana Sect. 1. When asked if the senior disciple will watch, he simply declines. Manhwa Sect. One remarks that Sana Sect 1 is going to be furious. How can anyone be so cold? Cold? Even without being told, Mugwi Sect. One had already been observing him for a while. The boy analyzes the movements of other disciples surprisingly well for his age. He maintains his stance far better than expected for someone so young. At that age, Dogoeon Sect. One was probably eating rats or scavenging through trash. He cannot recall clearly, but he was certainly not practicing formation techniques. Now that he thinks about it, he recognizes some of these battle formations. The 108 Arhats formation of the Shaolin Temple. The 7-star sword formation of the Wudong Sect. The infinite sky sword formation of the Nangong clan. The ultimate grand illusionary formation of the absolute martial sect. There are many others, but in his past life, Dogoeon Sect. One never used a single one since he was always a lone wolf. He never cared for them then, nor does he care much now, but perhaps he should reconsider. A formation technique is one of the most effective ways to handle multiple opponents. It would be useful if Mount Hua possessed an advanced formation technique worth adopting. That concludes the second squad. As the third squad steps up, Mujin Sect 1 asks Mukiol 1 if he took care of a boy from that group. Mukiol Sect 1 confirms it, and Mujin 1 laughs, saying he can tell who the boy is without even asking. A father asks his son if he knows that blacksmiths sometimes call the plum blossom sword by another name, the very blade awarded only to those recognized by the sect. They call it the dead sword. They would never give such a name to a wooden training sword or a common blade. That is because a plum blossom sword is forged exclusively for one person. Forging it requires immense effort, making it as resilient as it is difficult to craft. Yet they call it the dead sword because when the warrior dies, the blade is buried alongside him. That is why it bears that name. Honestly, he does not wish to see his son wield a dead sword. He would prefer his son forge his own path. But if he still insists on wielding it, he will watch him at the final flower ceremony. It will take time to reach that ceremony, so he is confident his son will make up his mind by then. He wonders how many times he has seen the steel he forged, stained with blood and buried in the dirt, like a father watching the rise and fall of a warrior. He never wanted his son trapped in that same circle of violence. What parent would be happy watching their child walk such a perilous path? To wield the plum blossom sword is to invite constant danger. Every time he hears the ring of a blade instead of a blacksmith hammer, his heart sinks, yet he cannot stop him. Looking into his son's eyes, he sees burning passion. How could he stop him? It pains him, but he must swallow his fear. Instead, he prays with all his heart that the blade his son carries will protect him and serve his own true purpose. Manhwa Sect. One says it is his turn now and asks him to say a few words to the disciples. Mugwi. One answers that he really has nothing to say. Mujin Sect. One urges him to say something anyway, so after a brief pause, Mugwi Sect. One simply tells them to do their jobs well. Baxian Sect. One announces that anyone wishing to qualify for the Plum Blossom Sword should step forward. Mukiol Sect. One volunteers to go first. Baxian Sect. One admits he respects Mukiol Sect, one for walking his own path, but notes his martial art does not match the traditional sword of Mount Hua. He explains that Mukiol Sect. One will not receive the Plum Blossom Sword, and Mukiol Sect. One calmly accepts it. Baxian Sect. One observes that the heavier the blade, the longer it takes to set up the next strike. Mukiol Sect. One was fast for a great sword user, but having missed, he remains wide open. He asks him what he plans to do now. Noticing the recovery, Baxian sight. One sees Mukyo sight. One drop his stance and angle the blade inward. Shifting his body rather than swinging the sword was clever, but that trick only works once. In that position, he cannot leverage the strength of a greatsword nor continuously deflect strikes. That is the fundamental limit of a heavy weapon. It is simply too hard to maintain a fluid technique. Mugwi sight. One agrees that it might seem that way, but asks if Baxian sight. One felt any opening when watching him swing the weapon before. Baxian sight. One admits he did not, which is why he is asking. Mugwi sight. One points out that Mukyolite. One no longer swings like an amateur. He had hoped Mukyolite. One would realize his mistake on his own, but given his close encounter with the assassin, Mugwi sight. One decides to explain directly. The issue is simple. There is too much tension in his arms. Relaxing the arms makes strikes far more precise. Tension is only needed when altering direction, generating momentum, or suddenly stopping the blade. Mukyolite. One asks if he should touse tension in bursts, and Mugwiite. One confirms it. Mukyolite. One then wonders if that would cause him to lose balance. Mugwi sight. One corrects him. He said to relax the arms, not the entire body. The core must act as the axis, using full body rotation to swing the sword. Arms are merely meant to hold the weapon, except during shifts in direction, momentum control, or sudden halts. Properly controlling tension allows for fluid follow-up moves. By harnessing full body power alongside the greatsword weight, one achieves maximum speed and crushing power, along with complete adaptability for any technique. Arm strength alone can never match whole body leverage, regardless of the weapon. Asking such a question proves he was relying solely on his arms this entire time. Baxian sight. 1. Startled by the heavy blow, wonders where that sudden surge of power came from, having assumed they were evenly matched. Recalling the lesson, Mukyo sight. 1 apologizes, admitting he fell back on arm strength because of the heavy sword. Mugwi sight. 1 reflects that he was genuinely surprised back then by Mukyo sight. 1 hidden strength. Whether he had grown stronger or had been suppressing it, either way, it made sense why he had struggled so much under the weapon weight. Forcing someone with that much raw power to practice delicate illusionary sword techniques must have been incredibly frustrating. Mujin sight. 1 remarks in disbelief that Elder Baxian sight. 1 was almost forced to his knees. Muhua sight. 1 adds that she has never seen anyone swing a blade with such overwhelming range. Baxian sight. 1 acknowledges that wielding the greatsword with full body leverage grants both speed and immense power. Yet he notes that this alone is not enough to pass the test. He demands to see more, urging Mukyolite. 1 to prove why he chose this unorthodox path. Mugwi sight. 1 notes that Baxian sight. 1 restricted his opponent movement with full bloom plum techniques before releasing falling petals that are nearly impossible to dodge. Testing how Mukyolite. 1 responds. Plum blossoms in full bloom are stunning to behold, yet they bloom only in the harshest winter cold. A plum blossom forged through cold steel carries a fragrance far deeper than any spring flower. The goal is not to produce countless blossoms, but to forge a single blossom that will not wither or break, even as it falls. Baxian sight. 1 watches as Mukyo sight. 1 swings his heavy blade, layered with internal energy, tracing the path of a massive petal. Though the rigid blade itself does not bend, its trajectory shifts fluidly. He successfully harnesses the weight and raw force of the greatsword. It is officially recognized as a true sword technique of Mount Hua. Baxian sight. 1 commends him for an impressive execution despite it being unrefined, and Mukyo sight. 1 bows in gratitude. A young disciple asks Sana sight. 1 if Mount Hua ever possessed a martial art that utilized a greatsword. Sana sight. 1 replies no, guessing it was a legacy left behind by the former sword saint Unisight 1. Hearing that Mukyo sight. 1 is mastering it independently, the boy calls him incredible, and Sanha sight. 1 assures him that he too can become just as great. Given his large build, after several more matches, the highlight duel finally arrives. It is the match everyone has been waiting for all day. The key figure behind the 4 flowers of Mount Hua, and the most formidable martial artist among the 2nd generation. Although the 2nd generation disciples knew Mugwi sight, 1 strength through training, none had ever seen him go all out, nor had Elder Baxian sight. 1. Baxian sight. 1 admits he does not know how much force to hold back, but figures treating him like Mujin sight. 1 should suffice. Mugwi sight. 1 states he plans to demonstrate a new Mount Hua martial art created by his master, the scattered hands of the plum blossom. Baxian sight. 1 expresses surprise that Yunho sight. 1 left behind yet another technique, telling Mugwi sight. 1 that seeing is believing and to attack when ready. Baxian sight. 1 realizes the pressure he feels is not due to raw strength alone, but the sheer sophistication of the scattered hands of the plum blossom. He now grasps the true meaning behind its name. This was never meant to be a mere supporting technique for swordplay. Watching Mugwi sight. 1 execute ambidextrous strikes reveals the extraordinary thought and training behind the style. To be honest, Baxian sight. 1 knew Mugwiite. 1 had passed after the very first exchange. He operates on a completely different level from his peers, yet ending the duel after 1 clash would be premature. Since he has not fully witnessed the technique, he decides to prolong the bout. Manhwa sight. One points out the falling petal motion, while Mujin sight. One notes it is vastly faster than what was used against Mukil sight. 1. Baxian sight. One marvels at the relentless stream of strikes, appearing peaceful yet carrying lethal violence. It resembles petals drifting on a raging river, constantly shifting, making it nearly impossible to block or break. It is fluid yet razor-sharp. Realizing how much internal energy Mugwiite, one poured into this attack Baxian sight, one wonders how he defended so effortlessly, deciding he must stop holding back. Stunned, Baxian sight, one declares that Mugwithite, one is indeed the ultimate sword of Mount Hua, fighting as if he were an entirely different person. Mugwite, one thanks him and asks him to view this merely as natural growth. Baxian sight, one wonders what kind of trials one must endure to turn into such a monster. Bakyo sight, one declares he is immensely proud of this ceremony. The disciples of the Autumn Plum Pavilion clearly take their lessons to heart. Even the second-generation disciples have grown formidable despite receiving less direct supervision. He takes great joy in watching their performance. Regrettably, not every disciple will receive a Plum Blossom sword today. He expresses confidence that the rest will earn theirs during the next ceremony, prompting a unanimous bow. They reflect on Baxian sight, one words affirming that all four stand as true swords of Mount Hua. He acknowledges the remarkable achievements of each disciple. He warns them to grow quickly without stumbling, expressing full faith in their future before commanding them to unsheathe their new weapons. Receiving these blades marks them as official swordsmen of Mount Hua. He looks forward to the day when their plum blossoms bloom across the mountain peaks. The disciples offer congratulations, celebrating that their generation finally boasts recognized plum blossom swordsmen. Some recall Mugwiite, one warning about what would happen to those who failed to qualify. They realize they are in deep trouble. Mugwi sight, one asks if they really failed to secure the Plum Blossom sword, leaving him no alternative. From this moment on, every waking hour not spent eating or sleeping will be dedicated to brutal training. If anyone slacks off, he will personally teach them a lesson. He asks if they have a death wish or expect others to carry their weight. The disciples wonder why he has gone quiet, terrified he might beat them right after the ceremony. One disciple notes that Mugwiite, one is not the forgiving type just because he is in a good mood, praying he simply forgets. Mugwite, one brings up a question, noting that only 4 of them received the Plum Blossom sword. He wonders why Elder Baxian sight, one declared that all of them possess the spirit of Mount Hua Swordsman. Annoyed internally, a disciple wonders how Mugwi sight, one dares break their moment of peace. Mugwiite, one reminds them of what Baxianite, one said out loud to everyone. It sounded as though Baxian sight, one originally intended to bestow blades upon all of them. He questions why they did not all receive one, though he actually knows the real reason. He overheard that the blacksmith had only forged 4 swords in total. The reason only the 4 flowers received blades was not due to skill gaps. It was not because the other second-generation disciples were incompetent. It was simply because the sect did not prepare enough weapons. He acknowledges their anxiety over potential punishment, telling them to relax and enjoy the banquet since they technically passed by his standards. Thoroughly confused, a disciple wonders if this is truly the harsh senior brother they know. The unexpected leniency only makes the others feel even more anxious. Mugwi sight, one decides it is time to overhaul their training routine. He cannot carry the burden alone. Rather than fighting everyone himself, he must focus on reaching the next level, as time is running short. He finds himself particularly troubled by what he overheard from that Shaolin monk. A disciple praises Mugwi sight, one telling him his performance was incredible. Mugwi sight, one asks why he is acting as though they just met. The disciple thinks to himself that flattery is essential to surviving Mugwiite, one wrath. Mugwiite, one tells them to drop the nonsense and rest until tonight banquet, praising their efforts. Noticing a figure in the distance, Mugwi sight, spots a Shaolin monk and wonders why one would visit Mount Hua. Bakyo sight, one welcomes the monk, noting the grueling journey up the mountain and asking the purpose of his visit. Thanking him for the warm welcome, the monk explains he came regarding the Orthodox Way Assembly, a grand gathering held every 5 years by the 10 great sects and 3 great clans. Orthodox factions gather at this event to discuss major affairs within the Zhonghu. Host duties for the assembly rotate among the Orthodox sects. The Mount Hua Sect is scheduled to host the next Orthodox Way Assembly. Bakyo sight, one confirms this fact. However, he points out that the event is still more than 2 years away. The monk reveals that the Bakli clan raised an objection, delivering a formal message from Bakli Yoksite 1. They express concern that Mount Hua cannot properly host the assembly following the tragic Shaanxi massacre. They propose swapping host rotation slots so the Bakli clan can take over the upcoming event instead. Bakyo sight, one remarks that if it were truly that simple, the Bakli clan would have come in person. He notes Shaolin was sent as a mediator precisely because the situation is far more complicated. Using the Orthodox Way Assembly is merely a convenient pretext. It seems the patriarch of the Baekli clan remains in denial over past defeats. They still hold a grudge from when their bid for top faction status was shattered by Yunho Site 1. They seek to strike Mount Hua now while the sect is weakened by the Shaanxi massacre. Yet initiating an unprovoked conflict would ruin their standing in the martial world. That is why they are weaponizing the host rotation of the Orthodox Way Assembly. Surrendering the host position would be an insult to Mount Hua ancestors. Mount Hua will not bow to such pressure, nor will they take a step back. The monk explains that the abbot initially rejected the Baekli clan request. However, when the Baekli clan threatened direct confrontation, the abbot dispatched him to mediate. Baekyo Site 1 clarifies that Shaolin is not at fault. Appreciating the abbot thoughtfulness, Baekyo Site 1 offers to send a direct response to the Baekli clan himself. He says Shaolin need not intervene further, but the monk declines. Reading a letter carries far less weight than speaking face-to-face. The abbot assigned him personal responsibility to resolve the dispute. Shaolin simply wishes to avoid internal bloodshed within the Orthodox factions while the Jianghu is unstable. He trusts Baekyo Site 1 remembers the ultimate purpose of the Orthodox alliance. Baekyo Site 1 acknowledges Mount Hua debt to Shaolin. The monk humbly denies it and politely takes his leave. Mugwi 1 overheard the entire discussion. He notes that managing the Overlord Fortress is already a massive burden. Now the Baekli clan is causing trouble, though fortunately it is not an immediate crisis. His priority remains gaining power as fast as possible, so he excuses himself to rest. With the Plum Blossom sword in hand, he now has access to high-tier martial manuals. The Celestial Arc cultivation technique is a prime example of such advanced arts. He had to adjust some minor details. By scaling back group training and dedicating more hours to deep meditation, he harmonized his past life cultivation with this new technique. As a result, his internal energy expanded significantly and grew purer. After anchoring the Celestial Arc cultivation technique within his Dantian, he re-examined his sword forms. Empowered by Celestial Arc internal energy, his blade developed a true sword aura. The foundational 6 combo form acted as the root, supporting the concentrated wind sword, the fallen plum blossom sword, and the sword of 1,000 fragrances. Together, they formed the trunk and branches of his martial arts. The true secret of the plum blossom sword lies in its key, weaving red and white energy throughout the branches until swordlight blossoms like living trees. Studying this revealed to him why Mount Hua swordplay is defined by the plum blossom. First is endless transformation. Strikes flow without restraint, like petals drifting on the wind. It pierces all 6 directions across 3 realms. Second is absolute sharpness, as every delicate blossom petal hides a lethal edge. Lethal danger lies cloaked within its elegance. Finally, there is the lingering fragrance. Its aura radiates outward, permeating the surrounding air. Wherever its scent reaches, the majestic spirit of Mount Hua manifests. That is the essence of Mount Hua swordplay. It stands unyielding through adversity, using beautiful forms to sever anything in its path. Its energy radiates outward in every direction. He has grown extraordinarily fast up to this point. His internal energy reserves have expanded. His Dantian expanded and his physical body grew far stronger. Reaching this realm has heightened his senses to an incredible degree. He senses it clearly now, that familiar gaze spying on him from the shadows. Realizing the Watcher is fast, he pursues immediately, knowing he will lose the target if he falters. The intruder is skilled, making capture imperative. Cornering the target, Mugwi Site 1 grabs hold, only to freeze in utter confusion upon realizing it is a monkey. He blinks in disbelief, seeing the creature wielding a plum blossom sword. It is bizarre enough for an ape to use advanced footwork, let alone carry a sect sword. What on earth is this creature? To his shock, he recognizes the monkey strikes as secret plum blossom sword forms. This is a sight Dogoeon sight, one never expected to behold. He wonders if the ape is a spiritual beast that somehow learned human martial arts. He knew mystical creatures existed, but he had never heard of one mastering martial arts. So this ape was the silent observer watching him all along. Seeing the screeching ape grow hostile, Mugwiite 1 readies his stance for a clash. He invites the creature to attack, eager to test its skills. He curses under his breath, wondering what kind of monster this ape is. The ape skillfully retreats into the distance. Baekyo Site explains that he met Amma Site 1 back when he was a 2nd-generation disciple. He recalls seeing Amu Site 1 alongside Gakha Unite 1, the ancient sword saint of Mount Hua. Mugwi Site 1 asks how old the ape is, but Baekyo Site 1 admits he does not know. In his youth, elders told him the ape was over 200 years old, perhaps approaching 300. Generations of Mount Hua sword saints cared for him, which is how he absorbed their martial arts. Baekyo Site 1 assumed Amma Site 1 had passed away since Yunho Site 1 never encountered him, expressing joy that he is alive and urging Mugwi Site 1 to treat him kindly. He notes that past sword saints even received guidance from the ape, and Mugwiite 1 nods in understanding. Privately, Mugwi Site 1 resolves to give the ape a thorough beating during their next encounter. Baekyo Site 1 assumes Mugwi Site 1 heard about the Baekli clan dispute and Shaolin mediation. He warns that clash with the Bakli clan is ultimately inevitable. Though their patriarch will not act directly, he will certainly send Baklizinsight, one to challenge them. Mugwi, one reassures him that he holds no fear and can easily defeat the young master. In truth, Mugwi, one is far more preoccupied with how to crush that ape in a rematch. Changing the subject, he asks why Mount Hua does not simply force the Bakli clan to travel to them. If the Bakli clan wants to test Mount Hua's strength, they should climb the mountain themselves rather than expecting the peak to move. Bakyosite, one smiles, agreeing with the logic. He promises to consider it, reminding Mugwi, one to focus on the six-sword competition. He tells him to prepare well, making Mugwi, one wonder why the old leader worries so much. Bakyosite, one is losing sight of the true danger, Taiyokite, one in the Overlord Fortress. Neither the Nine Hells Sword Sect nor the Bakli clan will make a major move immediately. The immediate priority is the six-sword competition happening in 2 months. Mount Hua may have suffered losses, but it remains a pillar of the martial world. Rival factions must assess Mount Hua's strength before committing main forces to a war. They will use the upcoming six-sword competition to gauge Mount Hua's true capabilities. Their performance in the tournament will determine when their enemies decide to strike. Mugwi, one tells the disciples he is sorry, but they are the easiest targets to drill so he can accelerate their growth. Intensive training begins tomorrow morning. They will not enjoy a single moment of freedom until the competition begins. The brutal regime resumes with disciples balancing on one foot atop high crags. Supporting full body weight on a single foot pushes both mind and body to extreme limits. This external conditioning builds immense stamina. Having survived near death, they endure the torture far better than before. Fierce determination replaces weakness, with murderous intent glinting in their eyes and grit locked in their jaws. Their mounting energy is steady and promising, signaling rapid growth. Mugwi, one trains alongside them, demanding even more from himself. He sweats with them by day and spends his nights studying battle formations and refining sword forms. Mastering tactical battle formations remains a challenging task. Mapping tactics with charcoal felt like a blind man feeling his way through total darkness. It stems from his complete lack of interest in group tactics during his past life as Dogoeon, one. Beyond formations, he must also refine Mukiolite, one iron plumb sword technique. The days feel far too short, and the nights offer little rest. Yet a rival awaits him each night, rekindling the sparring passion of his youth, though this opponent is not human. It is the fierce ape named Amusite, one. Their initial clash proved just how terrifyingly fast the creature is. The ape movement style is so unpredictable that Mugwi, one must rely entirely on raw combat instinct to keep pace. After that fight, he could only feel her eyes watching him from afar, even though he longed to cross paths for another battle. He rushed out immediately when he noticed her gaze. If they ever crossed paths again, he swore he would grab her by the tail and spin her around. A lot of other things happened as well. He had nearly died at the hands of the Disciple of 100 Faces. He even fought a fierce duel against the Disciple of Mayono. He drank all night with the beggars of the Beggar Sect. And he had played a dangerous game of hide-and-seek in the dead of night with the enforcers of the Overlord Fortress, experiencing both extreme highs and crushing lows. If you asked him which stood out the most, it would be the crushing lows. But there really is not much to worry about. If there is anything worth worrying about, it is entirely his burden to bear. The fact that he has to handle all these concerns alone is what truly angers him. Just thinking about how he is working like a dog makes his blood boil. But just keep watching, he will achieve his goals eventually. He just wrote as his thoughts flowed because he had absolutely no talent for writing. It really was not his style to do this, so there definitely would not be a next time. It is not something he should say after taking so long to visit. But he just wanted to say that he would not be able to return for a while due to how busy he would be, setting down his brush for now. Holding his hand, the elder announced his arrival. Bakyo asked how Hongxian had been. He came in a hurry when he heard the news about Mount Hua participating in the 6-movement combo sword competition. He knew how much attention they attracted with even the smallest actions. Hongxian apologized for the sudden visit. However, he simply wanted to see the 4 flowers of the Mount Hua Sect for himself. His own disciples were in their debt, so he felt he should personally thank them. Bakyo nodded in agreement. He then asked what Hongxian thought now that he was finally here. Hongxian replied that he identified the prodigy without anyone even pointing him out. His eyes were sharp like knives and his breathing perfectly controlled, proving he had already broken his shell just by sensing his aura. But it was not just the 4 flowers of Mount Hua. All the second-generation disciples possessed an excellent command of the external arts. When asked if they were guided in external arts separately, Bakyo told him no. It was Mugwi who did it. He was the one who led the training of the external arts. Hongxian nodded in understanding. His bearing was that of a highly experienced martial artist. He looked formidable, carrying the distinct spirit of a great master. Bakyo then asked him who exactly he was looking at. Hongxian confidently replied that he was looking at Mugwi. Assuming he was the most skillful of the four flowers, Bakio quickly corrected him, saying Mugwi was not among that group. He pointed out that Hongxian seemed to be confusing Mujin with Mugwi. Muhua asked him where he had been, warning that the 6-movement combo sword competition was about to start. Mugwi casually replied that he was in the restroom. Mujin quickly notified him to take 5 steps to the right. The sect leader was currently speaking with someone, but they would begin as soon as he finished. Bakio pointed Mugwi out, leaving Hongxian completely surprised. He stared in disbelief, stating it was hard to comprehend even while looking right at him. He wondered how a mere second-generation disciple could possess such a profound look in his eyes. He knew Mount Hua was extraordinary, but this was far beyond his expectations. Mugwi thought to himself that he would not have hurried back if he knew it was going to start so late. He figured he would just slip away again when the opportunity arose. Bakio finally noted that they had been delaying for too long anyway. They could continue their conversation another time. Hongxian agreed gracefully. Addressing the crowd, Bakio announced that he had a few words before the 6-movement combo sword competition began. This competition was not simply about who wins or loses. It was meant for them to experience the different interpretations of the 6-movement combo sword. Because of this, defeat was not something to be ashamed of. A true martial artist grows through their defeats. What they should be ashamed of is failing to learn from defeat while letting themselves be blinded by the desperate desire to win. Their failures were something they needed to deeply reflect upon. Realizing he had already spoken too much, he decided he did not need to say anything else. With that, he officially commenced the competition. Mugwi debated whether he should leave now, thinking it was better to take care of his business while he had the time. Suddenly, someone approached and asked if he really was Mugwi, mentioning they had hoped to find him here. They expressed that it was a great honor. They knew there were more formal ways to introduce themselves, but they wanted to introduce themselves directly. The first revealed herself as Sionju, the elder sister of the Zongnan sect flower duo among the second-generation disciples. The other introduced herself as Xianmi, the younger sister of the Zongnan flower duo. Sionju apologized for appearing so suddenly. She added that she would be eagerly anticipating his performance in the arena. Mujin explained that the Zongnan flower duo were the premier representatives of the Zongnan sect second-generation disciples. They were incredibly famous, widely known as the greatest beauties in all of Shaanxi. It was strictly because of their striking appearance that their title bore the word flower. Mugwi remarked that it was unexpected, noting that he did not have high expectations, but this was starting to look fun. He then told Mujin he had some business to attend to, asking him to cover for him if anyone asked. He had arrived in such a rush earlier that he could not finish his business. The competition of the 6-movement combo sword officially got underway. It was a rare competition where martial artists learned and observed the differences in their execution of the same foundational techniques. The entire event took place over 2 days. On the first day, the third-generation disciples held their duels. On the second day, the second-generation disciples took the stage. For the second-day duels, the best-performing disciples were chosen and rewarded with miraculous medicines. The miracle medicine that the Zongnan sect prepared for this event was the snake venom orb. It was a potent medicine crafted from the organs of various serpents and poisonous blood. Not only did it amplify internal energy, but it also massively increased poison tolerance, while Mount Hua prepared humanoid ginseng in return. It literally possessed a human form due to the immense spiritual energy saturated within the root. It strengthened the bones and amplified internal energy. While inferior to the legendary 1,000-year humanoid ginseng, it was still an exceptional miracle medicine. The snake venom orb would not increase internal energy as drastically, but granting absolute poison resistance was an incredible boon. His disciples had definitely improved a lot, so it was only fair that he claimed the miracle medicine for himself. Muhua asked why he kept disappearing, and as he took his seat, he casually repeated that he was in the restroom. Muhua told him that nothing special had happened, pointing out another loss for their side, to which Mugwi simply shrugged. Muhua noted that his calm reaction was completely different from how he acted when the second-generation disciples lost. He explained that the third-generation disciples had only learned the 6-movement combo sword, meaning they were fighting using the exact same techniques. But the Mount Hua Sect had accepted their third-generation disciples a full 2 years after the Zongnan Sect. If they were fighting with identical techniques, it was only logical that those who had trained the longest would win. She sighed, saying she knew that, but they had fought 10 duels so far and lost every single one. Mugwi told her to come up with a better joke. Muhua glared at him, insisting she was dead serious. Mugwi asked how Sana had fared. She replied that Sanha was the one who had just been completely defeated on stage. Standing up abruptly, Mugwi asked who was responsible for teaching the third-generation disciples. Mujin explained that it was Mujo and Musan, but they had not had the time lately. Mugwi stared at them, repeating the excuse of not having enough time. He demanded to know what the hell they were doing that left them with no time to train their juniors. Mujin sheepishly reminded him that Mugwi himself had ordered them to drop everything and focus solely on their own hellish training. Mugwi slowly sat back down. He awkwardly coughed, stating that these things happen when people are busy. Bakyo then communicated with the elders through a sound transmission technique. He informed Hongxian that the timeline was moving much faster than expected. He suggested they skip the rest and proceed directly to the duels between the second-generation disciples. He politely asked if Hongxian was okay with that. Hongxian readily agreed. Turning to his peers, Mugwi announced there was good news. The sect leader was going to immediately proceed with the second-generation duels. They finally had the chance to step up and avenge the third-generation disciples. Saying there was nothing more motivating than a decisive opening victory, he pointed to Manhwa to take the first duel. If she secured the first win, they could ride that momentum and sweep the entire competition. Manhwa thought to herself that it was obviously her time to shine. She was eager to test the results of her agonizing training. She confidently declared she would bring home the victory. Stepping into the arena, her opponent smiled and introduced herself as Xianmi, a second-generation disciple and the youngest of the Zongnan flower duo. Manhwa formally introduced herself as well, known as the youngest among the Mount Hua second generation. However, her sheer technique was considered a cut above the rest. Her combat instincts were razor-sharp, and her absolute specialty was blistering speed. She had also survived Mugwi's brutal training and gained raw experience in real combat. Because of this, she was widely considered one of the strongest second-generation disciples. At that moment, the referee shouted for the duel to begin. Before Manhwa could even react, Xianmi was already behind her, gently asking if she was alright. Extending a hand to help her up, Xianmi admitted she moved a bit too fast. She apologized for unintentionally hurting her during the exchange. She politely asked to be excused for her heavy-handedness. Manhwa sat in the dirt, wondering if her devastating loss was just a stroke of terrible luck. She wondered if that Zongnan girl had used some sort of dirty trick. She did not like to throw baseless accusations around, but her speed felt completely unnatural, almost like she had cheated. A legendary proverb stated that when the heavenly law is revealed, a brilliant golden light naturally traces the path of the sword. Manhwa, visibly shaken by the sheer gap in power, admitted her defeat. She felt like her pride had been completely shattered. Mugwi patted her shoulder, telling her she did well regardless. Mujin looked deeply confused, asking Mugwi what was going on. Mugwi clarified that he genuinely meant it. It was a completely fair and honorable duel. Although holding back like that would never happen in the real Jingu. It was not that Manhwa had made a mistake or fought poorly. It was simply that her opponent was in a completely different league of strength. However, Mugwi noticed that Xianju, the elder sister, seemed even stronger. But putting those monstrous twins aside, the referee loudly announced that Musan had won his duel. The Mount Hua Sect had decisively won 3 out of the 4 main duels. With that final match, the duels for the day were concluded. Hongxian told all the participants to get some rest. He announced that a grand banquet would be held in their honor that evening. Later at the banquet, they realized they had been seated strictly according to their generation and rank. The elders were clearly trying to force the younger disciples to foster friendships. It was an orchestrated effort to ensure the two sects got to know one another. Mugwi glanced around the silent table, thinking that these Zongnan guys were incredibly shy. If they had something to say, they should just spit it out instead of staring. Pouring himself a drink, he complained internally that the alcohol provided was not even of good quality. Suddenly, a loud cheer erupted from across the room. Someone drunkenly yelled about how amazing a recent match was. Another voice slurred, trying to recall someone's name. Mugwi debated whether he needed to be the one to break the ice. He admitted to himself that he was terrible at making polite conversation. Raising his cup, he bluntly introduced himself as Mugwi. He mockingly referred to himself as one of the 4 flowers of Mount Hua. Mujo buried his face in his hands, wondering why Mugwi would introduce himself like that when literally no one asked. He cringed at the sudden and bizarrely arrogant introduction, and he wondered why Mugwi had to look so terrifying while doing it. Just then, Xianju arrived and graciously apologized for being late. She explained that she had gotten so lost in her meditation that she lost track of time. She bowed slightly, saying it was a pleasure to formally meet them. She stated her name was Xianju. The 2 energetic Zongnan disciples quickly introduced themselves as well. The Mount Hua disciples returned the greetings respectfully. Xianju smiled, noting that it seemed the banquet was finally getting lively. All the Mount Hua disciples silently agreed that the flower duo sisters were breathtakingly beautiful. Xianju turned her full attention to him, politely addressing him as Mr. Mugwi. He casually noted that he was just enjoying his drink. Taking a seat across from him, she asked if she could pour him another cup. Mugwi smirked and said of course she could. He mentioned that he heard the 2 sisters were actually twins. However, their personalities seemed completely opposite. Seonju chuckled softly, asking if it was that obvious. She admitted that their differing temperaments were exactly why no one ever confused them. Seonmi quietly chimed in, saying she was far more timid than her older sister. Mugwi nodded, stating he completely understood. He then recalled that Seonmi had mentioned being excited to meet him earlier. He casually asked why she had been so eager. Hearing this, both sisters suddenly rose from their seats in perfect unison. They proudly declared that they were the direct disciples of the venerable Ilsu and the venerable Ailon. They bowed deeply, expressing their profound and eternal gratitude. Mugwi blinked in surprise, saying he finally understood the connection. So they were the direct disciples of those two fallen elders. But then he feigned ignorance, casually asking who those people they just mentioned even were, quickly remembering exactly who they were referring to. He waved his hand dismissively and told them to sit back down. He muttered that mere words were never enough to ease the pain of losing a master. He insisted that sharing a quiet drink would be much better than a tearful speech. Seonju then changed the subject, asking if he knew about the 36 swords under heaven. Mugwi replied that he heard their technique was designed to deflect incoming attacks from all directions seamlessly. Apparently, the Zongnan sword philosophy demanded absolute neutrality in combat no matter the situation. This neutrality allowed the wielder to adapt and respond to any conceivable threat. Seonju smiled brightly, confirming that his assessment was perfectly accurate. She then asked what philosophy the Mount Hua Sect prioritized, suggesting it was fluid variability. She recounted a famous legend about the Mount Hua founder. It was said he once witnessed a massive lightning bolt splinter into 10,000 directions, looking as if it had shattered heaven and earth. In that single awe-inspiring moment, he comprehended the ultimate martial truth. He realized that true martial essence requires constant, unpredictable change. She admitted she found it incredible that a man could reach such a profound conclusion merely by watching a storm. She assumed that legend alone proved how impossibly wise the Mount Hua founder truly was. Mugwi chuckled, saying he believed it was simply a matter of perspective. Different people will always see different things, even when staring at the exact same landscape. What you learn depends entirely on the burdens you carry in your own heart. Seonju looked at him in admiration, praising it as an incredibly wise answer. She remarked that he was remarkably mature, despite his relatively young age. Mugwi accepted the compliment smoothly, agreeing with her. He changed the subject, stating that all the disciples of Mount Hua had followed his grueling training exceptionally well. He admitted that his next words might sound horribly arrogant, but their daily training was brutal enough to guarantee they would easily sweep all of the duels, excluding, of course, the monstrous anomaly that was the Zongnan flower duo. He pointed out that the two sisters were fundamentally different. It was not mere maturity driving them, it was terrifying obsession. Seonju laughed softly, conceding that it could certainly be called an obsession. She confessed that it was simply her natural personality. When they found a path, they dove into it completely and ignored everything else. Mugwi noted that they were essentially digging a single, bottomless well. She smiled beautifully, admitting that he was perfectly right. They were undeniably far more obsessed with the peak of martial arts than any of their peers. Speaking of martial arts, she confessed she was incredibly excited about her upcoming duel with him tomorrow. She desperately wanted to witness the legendary secrets of the Plum Blossom sword art. She warned him that she had faced many men who foolishly held back just because she was a woman. She firmly stated she expected him not to make that exact same mistake. Mugwi laughed, telling her she must have run into some truly immature weaklings in the past. He promised her that holding back was definitely not going to happen, so she had absolutely nothing to worry about when they clashed. The next day, Mugwi calmly examined the arena damage caused by her opening technique. It was a fierce variation of the scattered plum blossom hands. He realized her footwork and hand techniques were not merely meant to support her sword. She was an absolute monster in close quarters combat. Mugwi decided that was more than enough warming up. He knew she was going to come at him with her absolute best now. He analyzed her movements, noting that the faster she became, the more kinetic force she generated, drastically increasing her raw attack power. Watching her seamlessly hide her killing intent, Mugwi thought to himself that mere obsession was not enough to explain this level of strength. The legendary title of the Sword Empress had not been used in 2 centuries, but he believed she was genuinely worthy of inheriting it. With a wicked smile, Mugwi admitted he had not had this much fun in a duel in a very long time. He decided he would gladly show her the true Plum Blossom as a reward for her strength. Watching the duel, Hongxian turned in sheer disbelief and asked Bakyo if he was absolutely sure that Boy was just a second-generation disciple. Being able to manifest even a single true Plum Blossom out of sword energy was already shocking. However, observing Bakyo's equally stunned reaction told him everything. The Mount Hua Sect leader was completely at a loss for words himself. Seonju clashed her blade against his, realizing she felt incredibly strange. The young man standing fiercely in front of her was the savior who had avenged her beloved master. And yet, in the heat of battle, she felt far more frustrated and deeply annoyed by his overwhelming skill than grateful. After witnessing his impossible strength firsthand, she finally understood why she had harbored this quiet, irrational anger toward him. She resented how easily he had slaughtered the fearsome assassin that her own master had failed to defeat. The bitter truth was that someone else had avenged her master, not her. This harsh reality had shaken her pride, and her young mind had twisted that profound inadequacy into misplaced anger against him. That was precisely why she had dared to challenge him so aggressively under the polite excuse of a friendly duel. Looking back at her own heart now, she realized she had been subconsciously denying her master's tragic death. That stubborn denial had been her last emotional shield, and she had been trembling fearfully behind it the entire time. She finally admitted to herself that the blade of her silent rage was never truly aimed at her savior. It was aimed directly at herself for her own crushing impotence and weakness. Snapping back to reality, she gasped in surprise as he flawlessly dodged her ultimate strike and appeared right beside her. The referee raised his hand, loudly declaring that Mugwi of the Mount Hua Sect was the winner. He announced that out of the 10 final duels, the Mount Hua Sect had secured 9 overwhelming victories. And with that dramatic finish, all the duels were officially concluded. Mugwi lowered his practice sword, thinking she was going to unleash a hidden move at the end, but assumed she simply reached her limit. Hongxian stared at the arena, silently thinking he still could not believe the sheer perfection of the final plum blossom technique he had just witnessed. Xianju respectfully sheathed her sword and brought her hands together, bowing deeply to thank him for his profound guidance during the match. She sincerely stated that she had learned a tremendous amount from facing him. Mugwi smiled warmly, telling her it was a genuinely fantastic fight. Watching from the sidelines, Musan loudly wondered what the hell that display of mercy was. He asked why Mugwi would blatantly hold back his final strike and show her that kind of obvious favor. He wondered if it was simply a diplomatic gesture because she was the pride of the Zongnan sect. Then he shook his head, deciding that made absolutely no sense for someone like Mugwi. He pointed a finger at Mujin, telling him not to say it. He gasped, jokingly asking if Mugwi had actually fallen for Xianju, the elder sister of the Zongnan flower duo. He loudly theorized that Mugwi pulled his punch just to avoid scarring her beautiful face. Bakyo addressed the crowd, stating that the reason Xianju and Xianmi were selected as the premier second-generation disciples was not simple. It was not simply because their martial prowess was incredibly high. He explained that their immense consideration for their opponent, deep respect, and proper martial etiquette were far more important. Even while displaying deadly, high-level martial arts, they always fought with a foundation of strict consideration and respect. That was exactly why no one had been severely injured during the entire event. And that was exactly why the Zongnan sisters still deserved to be rewarded with the precious elixirs. Mugwi watched the ceremony with a strange, calculating smile, muttering that everything was going exactly according to plan. Hongxian then stepped forward, announcing that he would like to take this grand opportunity to express his sect's deep gratitude once again. He formally requested that the 4 flowers of Mount Hua, excluding Mugwi, step forward to the dais. Mugwi tilted his head, genuinely wondering why only the official 4 flowers were being called up. Hongxian smiled at the kneeling disciples, telling them he had called them up to personally convey a massive debt of thanks. He praised them, declaring that they had not only bravely defeated the vile demon that the Zongnan sect had carelessly let loose. They had also resolved the bitter resentment of the lower-ranked disciples and protected the very honor of the Zongnan sect. Mugwi crossed his arms, grumbling to himself that he thought the old man was actually going to give them some legendary treasure. Hongxian noted that the disciples of the Shining Sect had already thanked them privately before this, but he insisted this was a monumental debt that could not simply be paid off with mere words of praise. At the time of the incident, everything had collapsed into absolute chaos. So it was only now in this formal setting that he could properly and officially express his sect's immense gratitude. Bowing to the younger generation, Hongxian presented a beautifully crafted wooden box and asked them to please accept this gift. These are the Zongnan sect's small purification pills. Mugwi is stunned and wonders if the old man has lost his mind. While they do not boost internal energy by much, the snake venom pearl itself is extraordinarily precious, because it grants high immunity to poison. And now he is offering the purification pill as well. Old Hongxian truly understands the laws of the Jianghu and actually puts them into practice. The sect leader tells them it is fine, and that they may accept the gifts. They should consider it proof that they accomplished something truly meaningful. As for the snake venom pearl Mugwi is about to consume, the raw poison could jeopardize his energy circulation. It would be best for him to swallow it now, while the seniors are present to assist him. Mugwi thanks him for his generosity, and agrees to take it immediately. The sect leader dismisses the rest, stating that everyone except Mugwi may return to their seats. Mugwi, who had been drooling in anticipation earlier, swallows the pill. He feels a fierce, toxic energy spreading through every corner of his blood vessels. Activating the celestial chest cultivation technique, he dissolves it completely into his internal energy. To him, this is child play. It is a standard internal energy circulation. It should be effortless. Yet the excitement of getting to take the purification pill next is making it hard. To keep his internal energy steady, a prestigious sect truly lives up to its name. Even if he just sits still, rare elixirs come rolling right into his hands. Suddenly, someone calls out to Hongxian. Hongxian replies that he felt it too. Who on earth is unleashing such blatant, unbridled killing intent? Hongxian wonders if it is the Overlord Fortress. Someone points out that those two intruders represent the strongest force of the Overlord Fortress. They are none other than members of the 5 Martial Lords. Hongxian asks how 2 of the 5 Martial Lords could appear here simultaneously. Shouting with power, the intruder declares it an honor to meet the esteemed leaders of the great sects. He mockingly adds that they seem a bit late, as the 6-combination sword tournament appears to have already concluded. He claims the Fortress Master ordered them to extend grand congratulations for the tournament, which they intend to deliver in true Overlord Fortress style. The Overlord Fortress is currently warring against 3 famous Sichuan sects at once. The main reason they can withstand such a war is the presence of the 5 Martial Lords. These 5 commanders directly serve the master of the Overlord Fortress. Each one possesses martial prowess rivaling that of a great sect master. It takes at least 2 senior elders working together just to hold one off. And now, 2 of those terrifying 5 Martial Lords have invaded Mount Hua. The enemy is taking this attack dead seriously. Hongxian admits they are currently outnumbered in top-tier strength. The leaders must take on the 2 Martial Lords directly, leaving the enemy squad commanders to the elders and first-generation disciples. Bakyo agrees with the assessment, noting it is the only way to minimize casualties. Hongxian urges them to move quickly, and says he will order Xianju to protect Mugwi. Bakyo commands Baxian to evacuate all 3rd-generation disciples inside, and have the 2nd-generation disciples form the 6-combination sword formation. Regardless of whether they belong to Zhongnan or Mount Hua, they must unite. Addressing the senior disciples, he notes that command of the joint formation needs to be settled. He believes the decision rests between the top disciples. If there are no objections, she should take command. Bakyo warns that these enemies did not come for a duel. They are here to slaughter. Every strike will be lethal, so no one must hesitate. As the invaders charge toward the Mount Hua and Zhongnan forces, an enemy commander orders his men to kill all 2nd-generation disciples, while taking the 1st-generation disciples and elders alive. Severing their limbs to capture them is fully permitted. Leaping into action, an elder roars, asking how they dare think they can lay a finger on the disciples. Laughing, the intruder mocks that fighting an elder will be far more entertaining than crushing children. This is going to be fun. Jingun remarks that he assumed the leaders of the 9 sects had grown soft, but Mount Hua still holds some weight. The sect leader proves far stronger than the local Sichuan leaders. Bakyo recalls hearing that Jingun managed to sever the arm of the Qingcheng sect leader. The terrifying rumors about him were clearly accurate. Bakyo knows he must kill him here, even if it costs him an arm. Both men suddenly sense a massive surge of chi nearby. Bakyo wonders if Hongxian has already finished his fight. Seeing Mugwi and Xianju step forward, he wonders what they are doing on the front line. Finishing his meditation, Mugwi stands up, analyzes the battlefield, and thanks Xianju. Muzan watches in confusion, wondering if Mugwi was always this powerful. Mugwi realizes he does not need to worry about the 2nd-generation disciples. The real threat is the intense chi radiating from the rear duel. He can pinpoint where the 2 Martial Lords are fighting and knows where he must go. He tells Xianju he is going to kill the Martial Lord, asking if she is coming along. Xianju agrees to accompany him, knowing it is far too dangerous for him to face alone. Bakyo demands to know what Mugwi is doing at the duel. Mugwi responds that he will handle this old man himself. He asks Bakyo to go protect the other disciples for the sake of Mount Hua. Bakyo forces himself to think logically. There must be a tactical reason why Mugwi came here instead of joining the main body. Mugwi likely calculated that facing Jingun here yielded a better advantage. Normally, it would be suicide for a 2nd-generation disciple to fight Jingun. Yet Mugwi is not someone who acts recklessly without reason. He would not make such a gamble in a crisis unless he had a plan. Bakyo wonders whether to follow cold logic or place total trust in his disciple. When Bakyo asks if he is certain, Mugwi assures him not to worry. Jingun laughs hysterically, asking if Bakyo is sacrificing a child to save himself. He mocks that the sect leader has lost his mind and will be the laughingstock of the Jianghu. Bakyo tells Mugwi to hold out, promising to return as quickly as possible. Jingun sneers that he has never seen such an irresponsible sect leader. He mocks that seeing Bakyo explains why Mount Hua has fallen so low. Dodging an incoming blow, Jingun boasts that the 2 youths are nowhere near enough to match him. Meanwhile, Hyung-gun, lying bruised on the ground, complains that he was considerate enough to move to a private spot, yet his opponents are being completely relentless. Bakyo asks if he really thinks dragging the fight here was an act of consideration. He tells him to cut the nonsense. He has no time to play games. Hyung-gun laughs, warning them that ganging up on him is a mistake because he is Hyung-gun, one of the 5 martial lords who cannot be taken lightly. Even if he falls, he vows to drag at least one of them to the grave with him. Bakyo retorts that the old man is far too confident for someone on his last legs. Hyung-gun sneers that he will decide which master to take down with him. Jin-gun, one of the 5 martial lords of the Overlord Fortress, wields an extended blade technique known as the reverse wind sky breaker. Swinging his extended blade, he whips up gale force winds faster than the eye can trace. These compressed wind blades can slice effortlessly through solid rock. Anyone unfamiliar with his style risks getting beheaded before even realizing an attack was launched. Mugwi already knows all this from fighting him in his past life as Dogoeon. Back then, he countered the style easily, but that was in his original body. Attempting the same counter with his current physical limits could prove fatal. Jin-gun will not lower his guard again after surviving that initial surprise attack. Mugwi realizes he has no choice but to hold out until Bakyo finishes his fight. If he were alone, he could easily buy time by dodging and retreating. However, if he steps back, Jin-gun will instantly target Seonju, and fighting head-on together gives them no tactical advantage. All he can do right now is stall. Everything hinges on how quickly Bakyo can defeat Hyung-gun and reinforce them. If he can just survive until that moment, Jin-gun notes that despite having less raw energy than the Mount Hua Sect leader, Mugwi is far sharper and more lethal. Those eyes especially harbor a vicious killing intent unfitting for a youth. He is a dangerous threat. Jin-gun decides he must eliminate the boy now before he grows any stronger. Mugwi senses the shift in pressure, realizing Jin-gun is truly going for the kill. Unsure how to buy more time, his mind racing, Mugwi prepares to throw every trick he knows. He tells Seonju that he will block the upcoming strike, ordering her to take that moment to run. She needs to flee so he can focus entirely on drawing Jin-gun attention to stall. He commands her not to question it, as it is their best path to survival. Terrified by the sheer scale of the gathering attack, Seonju asks if running will even work. Mugwi explains that while the strike is destructive, it lacks focus, giving her an opening. There is no time to argue. She just needs to run. Seonju gasps in shock at the suffocating killing intent, knowing no ordinary warrior could survive it. Even dodging seems impossible. Mugwi curses inwardly, realizing Jin-gun is unleashing his ultimate technique. Fleeing is no longer an option. Dropping into a stance, Mugwi resolves to clash using the strongest skill his body can handle. Astounded, Jin-gun demands how the boy survived his lethal blue sky tempest. Shock turns into genuine fear, hardening Jin-gun resolve to slay Mugwi right here. Mugwi grimaces. Though he somehow blocked the blue sky tempest, Mugwi is completely out of moves. He did not even have to resort to this forbidden method when fighting Hundred Faces. Innate true chi is the core life essence granted to a human at birth. From the moment a person is born and consumes worldly food, this innate chi slowly depletes, tainted by the impure chi of the world. This gradual loss is why human bodies age and succumb to sickness. However, burning this pure life force grants unimaginable power. It is the art of burning the finite lifespan to break through infinite limits. Stopping him, Seonju confesses that the day her master died, she felt deep hatred for her own weakness. She swore a vow while spitting blood, promising never to let anyone die helplessly before her again. That is why she draws her sword now. She asks if that was not the reason he invited her along in the first place, to see if she had the resolve to risk her life. Mugwi mutters that he said that before he realized they were facing one of the 5 martial lords. Seonju replies that it does not matter anymore, her decision is made. Mugwi smiles, deciding that with their lives on the line, there is no need to overthink. He will trust her. Jin sneers that had they run, they might have preserved their lives, but since their touching camaraderie keeps them here, he will execute them together. Bakyo notes that Mugwi sustained internal injuries but nothing fatal, he simply passed out from exhaustion. Bakyo expresses relief at arriving in time, though he remains stunned by the scene. He can barely believe that these 2 disciples actually defeated Jin-gun. News spreads rapidly that the Overlord Fortress attack was repelled. Jin-gun, one of the formidable 5 martial lords, was slain on the field. Hyung-gun barely managed to escape Mount Hua with only 30 of the 100 elites he brought. One enemy squad was completely wiped out, while the other was cut in half. However, Mount Hua and Zongnan also paid a heavy price. Aside from the evacuated 3rd-generation disciples, virtually no defender escaped uninjured. 5 2nd-generation disciples and 2 1st-generation disciples were left clinging to life. Reflecting on the ambush, Mugwi recalls anticipating trouble during the competition, expecting subtle spies monitoring Mount Hua, not an all-out assault. He never predicted the Overlord Fortress would strike so openly. He had assumed the fortress was pinned down by the 3 major forces in Sichuan. Yet intelligence from Hinge revealed that the Sichuan Alliance and the Overlord Fortress had signed a ceasefire. It turns out Jingun had severed the Qingcheng sect leader arm, forcing them into a truce. In short, the Overlord Fortress secured peace on one front to launch a surprise strike against Mount Hua during the 6 Combinations tournament. Frankly, Mugwi admits he was blindsided. Had Jingun not been slain, both Mount Hua and Zhongnan would have suffered catastrophic losses. If he had mastered Amu agility, he could have stalled Jingun alone without risking so much. Xianju visits him, noting that despite his internal injuries, he looks quite well. Mugwi shrugs off the concern, saying it is nothing. Noticing her bright mood, he remarks on it and she happily confirms it. She just finished checking on the critically wounded, and every single one is now out of danger. That news brings her immense relief. Mugwi nods, relieved they will survive. He remembers that Musan and Muzhou were badly battered. He contemplated easing their training, but decides he will drill them just as relentlessly once they recover. Xianju sighs softly while watching him, shaking her head when he asks. She smiles, mentioning she simply saw a new side of him. She thinks to herself how he maintains such a poker face even when showing genuine concern. Remembering something, she tells him he must come with her to a specific place. They need to go down to the foot of the mountain to run an errand. Down in the town, an old vendor lady hands them extra treats, teasing how good they look together. Mugwi asks why she dragged him along if the errand was just buying sweets. Xianju laughs, admitting he would have refused to come if she told him the truth. Mugwi concedes she is right, then asks why she needs so much candy. Xianju explains that the mood at the sect has been gloomy after the attack. She wanted to buy treats to cheer up the youngest third-generation disciples. Mugwi acknowledges her thoughtfulness. She takes remarkable care of her fellow disciples. He thinks he could learn a thing or two from her, which suddenly reminds him of Amu. He ponders if the ape likes sweets. He could use candy to lure the creature out, beat it up, and force it to teach him its footwork skills. He decides to track Amu down upon returning. Xianju asks if he plans to stay on the mountain until the entire crisis resolves. He confirms he will, asking if she is returning to her own sect. She reveals she plans to travel to Jianghu with Xianmi once her sister recovers. She feels she desperately needs real-world combat experience. While their technique is solid, Mugwi far surpasses her in raw battlefield experience. She intends to battle various martial artists across the land to bridge that gap. She vows to challenge Mugwi to a proper rematch after defeating enough young masters. Mugwi blunt notes that beating Greenhorns will not automatically make her strong enough to defeat him. However, he encourages her to try anyway. Xianju pouts at his harsh words, warning him that she will catch up to him one day. Eventually, they will stand as equals. Mugwi replies that if she works hard, he will root for her. She complains that, after fighting shoulder to shoulder, his tone sounds far too distant. Mugwi asks if they were not discussing martial growth, wondering why she expects him to change his speech pattern. Later, Mugwi confronts Amu, warning the ape not to steal liquor. He vows to teach the creature a lesson. Sometime later, Mugwi lies flat on the ground, groaning that teaching Amu a lesson is impossible. He surrenders the booze, telling the ape it can keep it. He was surprised by how much fiercer the ape fought today. Yet he vows to put the creature in its place tomorrow. He advises the ape to enjoy its drink while it can as the next day comes. 1 week passes, then 2 weeks, and soon a full month goes by. Exhausted, Mugwi grumbles that he still has not managed to humble the ape. Taking a drink, he rationalizes that neither of them really lost or won. The more they clash, the longer their duels drag out. There is no clear victor. Though reluctant, Mugwi admits the truth. Amu may be an ape, but its skill is extraordinary. Amu watches Mugwi drink and begins to drool. Holding up the jug, Mugwi asks if it wants a sip. He chuckles at the ape drooling over liquor. Tossing the jug over, he calls Amu a strange creature and lets it have the drink. Assuming it must be tired, he watches as Amu tastes the liquor. The ape eyes light up with joy and it begins making excited noises. Mugwi asks if it tastes good, warning that once it develops a taste for booze, it will crave it constantly. Confused, Mugwi asks why Amu is tying the jug to its tail. As the ape bounds away, Mugwi calls out to ask where it is going, demanding his drink back. Following Amu to a steep precipice, Mugwi gazes down at the sheer cliff. Turning around, he mutters that he is not alcoholic enough to climb down a death trap for liquor. Though deep down, he knows he just might be. He yells at Amu, saying the ape has no idea how expensive that liquor was. In a distant tavern, a patron asks his companion if he heard the latest news. The 6 Combination Sword Tournament was completely thrown into chaos. Another customer asks if the Overlord Fortress invaded Mount Hua. The patron notes that the invasion happened over a month ago. The companion nods in agreement, revealing he has fresh intelligence. Everyone was debating who managed to slay Jingun, one of the 5 martial lords. Word has spread that it was a young Mount Hua disciple named Mugwi. Rumors say his eyes possess an eerie aura, like the gaze of a vengeful ghost. People throughout the Jianghu have begun calling him the Ghost Swordsman of Mount Hua. A subordinate informs his master that a young kid from Mount Hua is being called the Ghost Swordsman. The master notes that Mount Hua is nearby, and they cannot allow some brat to usurp their master-old title. The follower asks if they will travel to Shaanxi, far from Hunan. The master replies that they will not depart immediately. They need to gather more forces first. They will take their time and move carefully. Back at the cliff, Mugwi grabs Amutail, catching up to the ape. As he looks up at the rock face before him, he is left completely speechless. Stepping closer, he realizes the cliff is covered in sword carvings made purely of condensed sword chi. The grooves are so crisp and precise that time itself seems to have left them untouched. Not even the greatest living masters could replicate such refined cuts. Reading the signature below, Gukayun, he recognizes the ancient sword saint from Bakuo youth. Examining another mark, he finds it far more intricate than Gukayun carving. This particular mark was left behind by Hongxian. Looking around, he realizes every single mark was etched by a different legend. Sword carvings cover over half of the massive cliff face. From the three-edged plum blossom sword to the thousand fragrances sword, every artist who left a mark here was a former sword saint of Mount Hua. The deepest and oldest mark belongs not to a sword saint but to the legendary sword god. It was carved by the founder of Mount Hua, the god of the six combination sword. A deep cavity pierces two straight lines, intersecting the surrounding sword marks. Though its full meaning is mysterious, it clearly embodies the essence of the six combinations. Mugwi grins, thinking that understanding everything instantly would ruin the fun. Standing here is like witnessing the entire evolution of Mount Hua sword arts in one place. The sight expands his horizon and fills him with excitement for the sword style he will forge. He vows to create a technique that surpasses even the ancient sword saints. He realizes he genuinely owes Amu a debt of gratitude for bringing him to this sacred ground. Seeing him chug down all the liquor, he curses and asks if he really drank every last drop. He asks if he has any idea how many thieves' pockets he had to pick just to afford that. He reports that the second-generation disciples of Mount Hua and Zhongnan killed Jingun. Hyanggun drops to his knees and begs for forgiveness, admitting he failed his mission completely. Worse yet, he ended up helping that kid earn the title of Ghost Swordsman of Mount Hua. The leader scoffs and calls the report absurd. A couple of brats defeating one of the 5 martial lords, the strongest warriors in the Overlord Fortress. He remarks that he has not heard such an entertaining tale in quite some time. He thought only the most boring weaklings survived the Sakshi massacre. Yet Jingun managed to entertain him by offering up his own head as a sacrifice. At the very least, he fulfilled his purpose in the end. Besides, life had been getting far too dull around here anyway. He decides they had better keep a close eye on this situation. He tells him that since he managed to return alive, he did his job. He orders him to stop sulking and get out of his sight. He bows deeply and thanks the fortress leader. The fortress leader, Taeyuk, repeats the title Ghost Swordsman of Mount Hua. He muses that it is actually a rather fine title. Musan points out that the senior disciple has not shown up for morning training lately. He only catches quick glimpses of him during meals or when sleeping. Muzan notes that it has already been an entire month. Another disciple wonders what on earth he could be up to. Wondering if he is off drinking somewhere, Musan replies that Mugwi is the type to train harder rather than relax. Come to think of it, he would prefer if Mugwi did not show up for practice at all, because whenever he vanishes and suddenly reappears, he always brings back some terrifying new way to torture them. He admits he is terrified to see what bizarre method Mugwi will unleash next, or what impossible feat he will demand they accomplish. Musan agrees that while Mugwi is great, he is absolutely frightening. Lightfoot techniques are martial arts used to manipulate body weight. By channeling true ki within the body, a warrior masters movement arts. Combining Lightfoot arts with specialized footwork allows one to cross vast distances, scale cliffs, or move with lightning speed. In battle, these arts offer far more than simple mobility by allowing a warrior to lighten their frame at the exact moment of an attack. Lightening the body deflects enemy strikes, while making it heavier during an attack maximizes impact. They are also crucial for clearing obstacles and taking the high ground for tactical vision. Securing higher ground grants a decisive strategic advantage. Therefore, the greater one mastery of these two skills, the higher their chances of survival. Mugwi marvels at how superior that monkey Lightfoot technique is compared to normal martial arts. He wonders how a mere creature can pull off such an advanced technique. In his past life, Dogoeon stole Lightfoot techniques from the unorthodox Murim and tailored them to his needs. Yet as far as he can recall, no human technique resembles what this ape is doing. He wonders if it is copying Mount Hua core manuals, such as the Fluid Flight Steps, 5 Elements Plum Blossom Steps, or Floating Cloud Step. He studied all the Lightfoot and movement manuals of Mount Hua, but this is something else entirely. A full month has passed since he discovered this spot, yet he has not been able to grasp its secret. Annoyed, he clutches his head, realizing his observation phase has reached its absolute limit. Mere watching can only take a warrior so far. He watched Amu so intently that he noticed how long the ape toenails grew, so now he must learn through trial and error. Calling out to Amu, he offers sweet treats instead of bugs, daring the ape to snatch them from him. Watching closely, Mugwi realizes Amu is already moving, so stealthily that it is almost impossible to detect. His lightfoot technique requires absolute concentration just to track with the naked eye. Here it comes. His movements are not wide, yet his speed far surpasses the fluid flight steps. Surprisingly, the grass bends in the exact direction the ape charges forward. He moves as if gliding through the air, yet his feet clearly touch the ground, a phenomenon Mugwi can barely comprehend. How can the grass remain uncrushed when pushing off with such explosive force? He wonders if this is simply the natural gift of a mystical creature. Or perhaps the ape senses the air currents, though predicting wind flow so flawlessly seems impossible. Unless the movement itself generates the wind, allowing the user to ride the airflow they create. Realizing this, he understands that creating the wind and riding its flow requires only a single fluid step. Pushing off the ground merely serves to kick up the draft, so all one must do is surrender their body to the current. The trick is concentrating every bit of momentum into that singular step. Shocked by his own success, he realizes that after a month of intense effort, he finally mastered it. Sometime later, with the second-generation disciples, Manhwa yawns and complains about feeling drowsy. Mujin notes that summer has arrived, making it hot even in the early morning. She guesses the senior disciple will not show up today either, and another disciple agrees. Manhwa calls out to them and asks if they were expecting guests today. Looking over, they spot Baeklizen, the young leader of the Baekli clan, arriving with his patriarch to meet the sect leader of Mount Hua. Meanwhile, Mugwi calculates how much top-shelf liquor and sweets he gave Amu, resolving never to fall for the ape tricks again now that he mastered the movement. He smiles inwardly, knowing that unlike before, the ape can no longer catch him. With a thrill, he marvels at how liberating and lightning fast this technique feels. Experiencing the sensation of riding the wind through any obstacle, he realizes combining this with his lethal martial arts holds endless potential. Finding normal movement terms inadequate, he decides to name this fluid technique Wind Drift. As Amu chatters noisily nearby, Mugwi remembers the ape help and refines the name to Dark Scent Drift. He repeats the name Dark Scent Drift to himself. He thinks the name fits the stealthy technique perfectly. Spotting a nearby cave, he notices it looks different from the others, realizing there are 2 caves in this area before Amu steps in front of him and draws his sword hostilely. Mugwi asks if the ape is mad over the sweets and offers them, but Amu remains motionless. He realizes guarding the cave is more important to the ape than treats, so he decides teaching the others Dark Scent Drift is more fun than fighting Amu anyway. He mutters under his breath, cursing the ape over how expensive those treats and wine were. He warns the ape that he will be even faster next time, so Amu had better train hard if he wants to keep him out. Meanwhile, Dogoeon notes that while an important guest was expected for the high-stakes duel, he never anticipated the patriarch coming in person. Baekli Yoke explains that the former patriarch intended to come, but he stopped him and insisted on coming himself. Watching from afar, Mugwi sighs, wishing he had known the Baekli clan was visiting so he could have stayed out drinking longer. Baekli Yoke admits he wanted to restore his clan honor, but using underhanded tactics against Mount Hua went against his personal code. He simply could not bring himself to carry out such a dishonorable plan. Dogoeon tells him that as patriarch, he should have used his ultimate authority to overrule the former patriarch. The decision rested on his shoulders, so Dogoeon asks why he complied back then only to confess now. Baekli Yoke reveals that it was the final request of his father, the legendary Sword King. He spent his entire life looking up to that invincible figure. The peak master of the Jianggu, the Sword King, had overcome every obstacle in his path. But when his legendary father bowed his head to beg for this favor, Baekli Yoke realized something tragic. It was not just his blade that shattered against Yunho. His pride and martial spirit were completely broken, leaving behind only a hollow, defeated old man. Baekli Yoke simply could not refuse his father's final desperate plea. He takes full responsibility for letting filial piety cloud his judgment and stain Mount Hua honor. He accepts all blame for the transgression. On behalf of the Baekli clan, he offers his deepest, most sincere apologies. Baeklizen stands beside his father and bows, offering his own apology as the young leader. Mugwi watches in surprise, noting that Orthodox warriors usually value pride above life itself. Seeing them bow so humbly makes him realize they possess far better character than he expected. He acknowledges that this is how true martial artists should conduct themselves. It breaks his heart that so many suffer due to the Sword King's stubborn pride. Dogoeon realizes why Baekli Yoke arrived with elaborate gifts, understanding the profound sincerity behind the visit. The patriarch of a top clan lowered his head despite pride being worth more than life itself. Having openly admitted his fault and apologized, Dogoeon knows Mount Hua cannot simply brush him off. Such a painful, genuine apology demands a noble response. Mugwi communicates telepathically with Dogoeon, acknowledging the gesture but reminding him this is an internal Baekli clan matter. He suggests taking advantage of their humility to secure some practical benefits for Mount Hua. He urges Bakyo to extract a proper concession while they have the upper hand. Baekli continues, stating that to make amends for his clan petty actions, he will personally travel to Shaolin after the duel to apologize. He wants to clear Mount Hua name across the martial world. Bakyo anxiously waves his hands, telling him such extreme measures are unnecessary. He knows that having Baekli bow here is equivalent to the entire Baekli clan submitting to Mount Hua. Decades of accumulated prestige have just been offered up in tribute to Mount Hua. The honor built over generations has humbled itself before Mount Hua. Expecting anything more would be pure greed, so Bakyo tells Mugwi they must end it here. The Baekli clan has taken responsibility while preserving the dignity of an orthodox lineage. It is only proper for Mount Hua to show equal grace. Mugwi relents, surprised that Bakyo even considered his advice in the first place. Bakyo urges Baekli to raise his head, assuring him that his apology has been fully accepted. Mount Hua could not possibly ask for anything more. He officially declares that Mount Hua accepts the apology and considers the past buried. Baekli thanks him for his mercy, stating that gifts and words alone cannot erase their debt. Producing a golden token from his robes, he explains that it carries the supreme authority of the Baekli clan patriarch. Should Mount Hua ever need aid, the Baekli clan will draw their swords without hesitation. He swears this solemn oath upon his name and the honor of his clan. Bakyo humbly accepts the momentous pledge on behalf of Mount Hua. Observing this, the visiting Shaolin monk is thoroughly impressed. He wonders if Baekli offered the token even while knowing the Overlord Fortress had set its sights on Mount Hua. Such a gesture displays profound courage and unwavering courtesy. He ponders if the patriarch would have surrendered the token had the sect leader demanded it greedily. The orthodox way of placing principle above profit is truly remarkable. It is a mindset that worldly men struggle to comprehend. Meanwhile, Mugwi hands written manuals to the disciples, asking if the instructions are clear enough. Muhua shakes her head, complaining that it looks overwhelmingly complex. She asks if this is truly all they need to master. Mugwi confirms it, stating that this technique will serve them for the rest of their lives. It is a core asset for their martial journey. Mujin declares that if that is the case, they must master it no matter what. He asks if this Lightfoot training replaces their brutal physical conditioning. Mugwi shuts that hope down immediately. He explains that physical training continues, which is why he gathered only the elite disciples first. Once they start practicing, they will realize how difficult it truly is. Mastering it will require massive effort even for top talents like them. Therefore, they must master it first so they can guide the rest of the sect. Their priority is to learn fast and teach the younger disciples later. Mujin grins, claiming it will not be hard for someone of his skill. He vows to master it first and flex his success in front of the others. Mugwi tells them they have worked hard today and sends them off to rest. He announces that their formal instruction begins tomorrow morning. Muhua steps forward, boldly asking him to hold on. She claims she can execute the technique right now. Mugwi laughs, telling her he bled for a full month to figure this out. He mocks her arrogance for thinking she can perform it after glancing at a page. Her confidence borders on total absurdity. Muhua insists she is not bluffing. She truly feels she can do it. Mugwi smirks and challenges her to a wager. He bets that she will not even make it past the starting stance. Muhua accepts the bet without hesitation. Mugwi chuckles, knowing he only handed her half of the incomplete manual. He wrote it in a rush, leaving out key internal adjustments. He mentally mocks her, already celebrating his guaranteed free drinks. Calling her a naive fool in his mind, he smiles. Free booze is as good as secured. Showing a single page of a technique is all it takes to score free liquor. Only absolute fools fall for it every time. Suddenly, Muhua flawlessly executes the technique and asks if he saw that, demanding he pay up. She smirks and tells him to start pouring the drinks. Mugwi stands there in absolute shock and annoyance. He curses himself for writing the manual too clearly. He regrets not obfuscating the instructions with cryptic jargon. He had shaken down every thug in Pochin just to buy wine and snacks for Amu. Now every criminal in town runs away the moment they see him. He wonders how on earth he is going to afford drinks for Muhua now. That was his entire booze budget down the drain. Suddenly sensing someone approaching, he turns around. He remarks that he thought their duel was scheduled for tomorrow. Baekli replies that he felt they needed to talk tonight. Mugwi asks what could possibly be so important on the eve of their duel. He asks what Baekli wants to discuss so late. Seeing Baekli pull out a bottle, Mugwi listens as he explains it is nothing serious. Baekli says he acquired fine liquor but had no one to share it with. He came looking for a worthy drinking partner. He offers to leave if Mugwi is tired and wants to rest. Mugwi scoffs, asking what part of him looks tired. He tells him he must be out of his mind. Baekli asks if Mugwi knows what he heard when he first picked up a sword. He heard stories of the legendary sword saint who once lived on Mount Hua. Yunho, the legendary sword saint of Mount Hua, Perhaps that was why he longed to walk this sacred ground. He wanted to see the traces left behind by that legendary figure. Mugwi notes that the Sword King must have placed unimaginable pressure on his shoulders. Baeklizen chuckles softly, admitting that was an understatement. Mugwi asks why his grandfather forced such a heavy burden onto him. Baeklizen explains that his grandfather hit a wall long before his duel with Mount Hua. The Sword King carved his name into the Jianggu through sheer martial talent. He forged a legendary legacy with nothing but his blade. Yet in the end, he realized his grand achievements were merely a lucky streak. He hit an insurmountable barrier in his martial path. He stood before an uncrossable boundary that broke his ambition. As Mugwi knows well, hitting such a wall is horrifying for an elite master. It is a crushing sensation for anyone who has reached the pinnacle. It means he witnessed a vast, terrifying gulf between himself and a true monster. Devastated, he abandoned his dream of becoming the world's strongest and focused on making the Baekli clan a premier sword sect. Mugwi asks who that overwhelming opponent was. Baeklizen says the answer is obvious. Names that even children outside the martial world know by heart. Names spoken in hushed, fearful whispers across the lands. The leader of the Overlord Fortress. The absolute strongest entity in the unorthodox Murim. Supreme masters whose names alone strike terror into the hearts of all. Legends whose titles require no further explanation. Baeklizen recalls how that monster spared his grandfather life. Declaring the Sword King the finest blade among ordinary sect leaders, the monster let him live. He told him that surviving without a sword would serve as his punishment. He arrogantly named him the best swordsman of the unorthodox path. He spared his life only because his sword had been shattered in battle. He invited him to return and challenge him again once he grew stronger, claiming it would provide mild entertainment for him. Mugwi remembers that in his past life as Dogoeon, he was given that exact same title. The supreme ruler of the unorthodox path had bestowed the title Ghost Swordsman upon him. While others viewed it as an incredible honor, to Dogoeon, it was the ultimate humiliation. Because of that title, endless assassins and challengers sought his blood. He survived countless near-death battles because of that cursed reputation. Decades passed, and Dogoeon eventually died in battle. Yet that old monster of the Overlord Fortress still stands atop the Murim. But Dogoeon never forgot that humiliation. That old monster still reigns supreme at the peak of the unorthodox world. Mugwi vows that he will never forget that grudge. One day, he will face that monster again and reclaim his honor. Baeklizen remarks that whatever Mugwi's secret past is, he hopes he finds freedom. Just as Baekli-san intends to find his own freedom tomorrow. He explains that tomorrow duel carries profound meaning for his life. To him, this fight represents a complete rebirth. His entire existence was meticulously planned like an artificial flower arrangement, built entirely upon the monumental legacy of his grandfather. He merely walked down the path paved for him. People eventually dubbed him the Galactic Sword Dragon, yet he knew he was just a puppet obeying his grandfather's orders. That grand title reflected none of his own desires or willpower, so he resolved to discard it entirely. Others might call him a spoiled, ungrateful heir, but he refuses to live a lie any longer. There is nothing anyone can do to change his mind. Tomorrow marks the final chapter of the Galactic Sword Dragon who lived for his grandfather. Regardless of who wins or loses the duel tomorrow, he will step out of his grandfather's shadow and forge his own identity as Baeklizen, taking his first true step into the vast martial world. A genuine step as an independent warrior of the Jianggu. From that moment on, he will carve out his own destiny. Mugwi wonders silently if Baeklizen came all this way just to confess his inner heart. Standing up, Mugwi asks what he plans to do once he gains his freedom. Baeklizen smiles and admits he has not figured that out yet. He intends to wander the Jianggu until he finds his true purpose. He laughs at how he lived 26 years without ever knowing what he actually wanted, admitting how ironic and foolish it sounds. Mugwi asks if it is really wise to reveal such vulnerable feelings to an opponent. Baeklizen reveals he came to test something crucial tonight. He wanted to see if the successor of Yunho was worthy of receiving his full strength in battle. Noticing their bottle is empty, he chuckles. Mugwi suggests wrapping things up for the night. He offers to clean up the empty bottle. He then asks Baeklizen what his final judgment was. Baeklizen laughs, saying it would ruin the thrill if he spoiled it now. He bids Mugwi farewell until tomorrow duel, expressing genuine pleasure at having shared a drink with him. Meanwhile, another disciple asks Musan if they should not stay to watch the full duel. After all, Mugwi is fighting the Galactic Sword Dragon of the Baekli clan. Musan firmly insists they must leave immediately. They cannot afford to waste a single moment. They have an urgent investigation at the Shagwa Mountain post. Shagwa Mountain lies far to the north. Staying for the match would delay their departure, past the deadline. Furthermore, the Nine Hells Sword Sect and Cruel Dragon Association are active near the post, so they must move swiftly before trouble breaks out. The disciple notices Musan breaking into a heavy sweat. He asks if Musan is genuinely alright. Musan lies, claiming he is just overly excited. excited because this is his very first mission out in the Jianggu. He brushes off the concern quickly. He asks if they are certain Mugwi does not know about their departure to Shogwa Mountain. The disciple confirms that only Bakyo informed them yesterday. He wanted to tell Mugwi but could not find him anywhere. He asks why Mugwi should not know about their trip. Muzin quickly denies any secret motive. He claims it is better Mugwi does not know, so he will not worry about them. The disciple praises Musan for being so thoughtful toward the senior disciple. Inwardly, Muzin chuckles at how naive the disciple is. He knows a chilling secret that all second-generation disciples share, an ominous omen passed down among Mount Hua junior ranks. The day the senior disciple returns from a long absence is the exact day their living hell resumes. Today was supposed to be the day Mugwi unleashed his brutal training upon them. But thanks to this timely mission to the Jianggu, they narrowly escaped his wrath. He silently offers a prayer for the poor disciples left behind on Mount Hua. As for skipping the duel, he is not worried in the slightest, because the outcome of the fight is already glaringly obvious. He simply wishes Baklasan the best of luck surviving Mugwi. Meanwhile, legends speak of the celestial wing technique, the ultimate pinnacle of swordsmanship and lifelong obsession of the Sword King. Anyone who felt suffocated under such a low sky wished for his successors to follow in his footsteps. Yet not by copying him blindly. It was a desperate longing to soar beyond one's limits. Then again, what martial artist in the Jianghu does not harbor those exact same dreams? He collapses, utterly defeated. He realizes it had nothing to do with the sharp edge of a sword. Deep down, he acknowledges that this is his absolute limit. This is entirely different from the trials faced during routine training. It feels as though he is standing before an insurmountable wall that he can never hope to scale, no matter what he tries. Mugwi reaches out his hand toward him. He mentions that the sword technique displayed just now differs from that of the Beckley clan. The depth of internal energy and its proper execution are fundamental to mastering the art. However, his concentration and distribution of internal energy were completely lacking. He will only witness the true power of that technique once his internal energy deepens. Baklazan remarks that judging by his scars, it is hard to believe how young Mugwi truly is. He finally understands. The overwhelming despair he feels stems from the severe trials and hardships Mugwi has endured. One cannot measure the depth of the hardships someone has faced merely by looking at their hands. Yet in the end, these limits were forged by men, no matter how insurmountable they may appear. Overcoming them is certainly no miracle. So if he continues to push forward relentlessly, perhaps he too can break past his limits. Mugwi thinks to himself that this should be enough. He initially planned to end the clash the moment it began, but he wanted to return the favor for last night's drinks. He observes that it is truly a heartwarming sight, a truly commendable duel. Addressing sect leader Bakyo, he admits he has never seen such a swift footwork technique come from Mount Hua. What on earth was that step? Bakyo explains that it is a movement technique left behind by the sword saint known as the Dark Aroma Drift. However, it is so intricate that they have yet to compile a complete manual for it. Only Mugwi has managed to figure it out entirely on his own. They are currently restoring the ancient text through his guidance. He asks if Mugwi truly mastered it all by himself. Mount Hua truly holds an incredible genius in its ranks. They have gained an experience far more valuable than a simple defeat. He offers his deep gratitude. Bakyo responds that hearing such high praise makes him feel almost embarrassed. He is certain that the fierce martial spirit Baklazan displayed inspired Mugwi just as much. He believes the bond forged between them transformed the match into a magnificent duel. Mugwi thinks to himself that the sect leader is being far too humble. What martial spirit is he talking about? It was just a completely one-sided beating. How can anyone call that a shared spirit? If fighting spirit was all it took, mastering this footwork wouldn't have taken so long, let alone documenting a detailed manual for it. There is a fine line to humility. Lowering oneself too much crosses the line into self-humiliation. Who would ever look a man in the eyes when they have already bowed low before him? It is precisely this passive nature that makes people look down on Mount Hua. That was one of the most vital lessons learned while surviving in the depths of the orthodox faction. One must never appear weak or harmless to others. How many humans out there would hesitate to kill a pet if their own child were starving? Human affection holds no real weight when pushed to the edge. Just because a beast stops biting does not mean it should pull its own fangs. Anyone who is well-fed and satisfied refrains from biting. He asks if people are truly kind by nature, or if they are simply comfortable enough that they do not need to act wickedly. Yunho remarks that Dogoeon simply possesses a deeply twisted view of life. He concedes that reality in the Jianghu can be surprisingly gentle at times. Yet a person does not bow down purely out of submission. It might be hard to understand, but sometimes one bows to welcome someone who yields to them. A lone wolf like him could never grasp the plight of small birds huddling together, just to survive a harsh blizzard. Still, there is no need to treat everyone with such cold detachment. Dogoeon replies that showing weakness is worse than death. There is no other choice if one wishes to survive among a pack of starved dogs. He must hone his blade until those dogs dare not even step close. By the time the beasts bare their fangs, it is already too late. Mugwi steps into the room. He asks sect leader Bakyo if he summoned him. Bakyo informs him that an urgent letter has arrived from the Shogwa Mountain Manor. Mugwi mentions he thought a group of disciples had already departed for the manor early this morning. Bakyo reveals that the message concerns the Nine Hells Sword Sect and the Cruel Dragon Association. Ever since the last six-fold combined sword competition, the Overlord Fortress has been secretly intensifying its movements. The first-generation disciples were dispatched to keep them under surveillance. That leaves the main mountain guarded by only a minimal force. Mugwi realizes why he was summoned under such dire circumstances. He declares there is no time to waste and prepares to depart immediately. Bakyo asks if he will be fine on his own, adding that the first-generation disciples will join him soon. Mugwi assures him it is fine, noting that if those two forces have allied, a small elite strike team will be far more effective. He decides to set off accompanied only by the 4 flowers of Mount Hua. He instructs the other 2 disciples to head straight for the manor. He and Muhua will travel separately via a different route, utilizing the dark aroma drift. Muhua asks why they are heading in opposite directions. Mugwi explains that the others will reinforce the martial artists at Shogwa Mountain Manor to hold off the raid. Meanwhile, they will ambush the enemy forces. An ambush is an attack launched before the enemy even realizes a threat is present. It can also mean striking at the precise moment the opponent lowers their guard. However, the ambush he refers to relies on keeping the target completely unaware of their presence, depriving the enemy of any chance to strike first. Because of this, those who claim to uphold righteousness look down on ambushes as cowardly, dishonorable, and vile tactics. Muhua thinks to herself that it makes complete sense given how their senior disciple values victory over empty honor. When she asks why he chose an ambush, Mugwi simply replies that the reasoning is straightforward. The enemies belong to the unorthodox faction, making an ambush the most effective approach against them. They value their lives over their reputation and will never engage in a clean, head-on fight. They surely have scouts lurking nearby to cut off any retreat. They are not just exterminating hidden rats, they are gathering critical intelligence. Gauging their troop numbers alone provides a clearer picture of the battleground. Muhua admits her confusion, asking why 2 major unorthodox sects would hide troops instead of marching forward with full force. Mugwi asks if she truly believes 2 major factions joined hands just to conquer a minor manor. While Shogwa Mountain Manor is sizable, their true ambitions extend far beyond its walls. With such vast numbers, they have no reason to concentrate all their forces in a single location. If the situation were truly that simple, an emergency letter would never have been sent. Muhua thinks that real warfare differs wildly from duels, yet something about Mugwi feels strikingly odd. He may struggle with simple arithmetic, but his tactical mind for battle is extraordinary. She cannot tell whether he is a ruthless gambler seeking maximum gain or an unyielding warrior of justice. Mujo asks Musan about the situation over there, and Musan replies that the area is empty as everyone evacuated. Confused, the enemy notes they are just kids evacuating civilians, adding with bloodlust that he was eager to slaughter everyone in the empty village. Those fools destroyed all of their targets beforehand. Noticing their weapons, Mujo recognizes them as the Cruel Dragon Association, realizing this is merely an advance force and tells Musan to evacuate the civilians while he buys time. Musan asks how he expects to hold them off alone when he is not the senior disciple. Musan agrees that it is too late to run, leaving them with no choice but to stand and fight together. Mujo admits he was just trying to act cool and was secretly terrified of being left behind alone. The enemy mocks them as foolishly honest brats throwing their lives away, sneering that they will see if that bravado remains once their limbs are severed. Muhua asks if they should keep watching, as their allies appear to be in grave danger. Mugwi tells her to wait, warning that rushing in blindly could prove far more dangerous as he tries to grasp the true situation. The battlefield is unfolding completely differently from what he anticipated. The joint attack by the Cruel Dragon Association and Nine Hells Sword Sect was supposed to be held off by the first-generation disciples and the Shogwa Mountain Manor martial artists. While the unorthodox forces were expected to spread out, the Shogwa warriors are guarding the manor while the first-generation disciples intercept the enemy further out. Meanwhile, the second-generation disciples were assigned to assist with civilian evacuation. Mukiol and Mujin split off to join the first-generation disciples on the defensive line. If you want to see the continuation of this epic story, leave the phrase next part in the comments. If we reach 2,000 likes and 100 comments, I'll bring part 2 as soon as possible. I'm counting on your support. Comment, like, and share this video with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.